Nami has locked a bruised and beaten Luffy in a cage as punishment for causing the ship to go over the waterfall instead of using the safer option and risking everyone's lives once again. Jinbe tells her not to be so hard on him since everyone is okay, but Nami yells that as a part of the crew, they need to keep Luffy under a tight leash. Her rage scares him to the point that he believes she has Haoshoku Haki, but Chopper tells him to just avoid her when she is mad. Frankie, similar to Jinbe, is pleased, but this is because the only damage done to the ship was a broken yard on the mast, a testament of his ship's power. Anu's Kyo arrives with the newspapers and Robin distributes the new bounties for the Straw Hat Pirates, with Luffy being referred to as the senior captain and his crewmen as the senior officers of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Chopper's bounty increased to belly 1,000, which even though is higher than his previous, it is still small due to him still being considered the Straw Hat Pirate's pet, much to Chopper's annoyance. Nami's bounty increased to belly 366 million, an amount that scares her as according to herself, even she would want what she is worth. Brooke's bounty increased to belly 383 million, which pleases him. Frankie's bounty has increased to belly 394 million, but he becomes enraged by the fact that the picture is now the figurehead of the Thousand Sunny, which does not even resemble him. Usopp's bounty increased to belly 500 million, which upsets him over how high it has become. Robin's bounty has increased to belly 930 million, though she does not pay much mind to it due to giving Chopper some cotton candy to cheer him up. Sanji's bounty increased to belly 1,032 million, which infuriates him that not only is he lower than Zoro once again, but now he is lower than Jinbe. Jinbe's bounty increased to belly 1,100 million, though he is more concerned about Sanji. Zoro's bounty increased to belay 1,111 million, while he taunts Sanji for being fourth in the crew now, resulting in the two fighting again. Luffy's bounty is now belay 3 billion, but he keeps asking for someone to let him out because he is hungry. Meanwhile, on Bari Island, the members of Buggy's delivery service are in awe over the fact that Buggy seemingly recruited Dracula Mihawk to save them from the Marines following the dissolution of the warlord system. Off to the side, however, Buggy is desperately pleading for his life while Crocodile holds him by the hair and Mihawk holds his sword over his separated head. Crocodile tells Buggy that Cross Guild was supposed to be led by himself and Mihawk, so the fact that Buggy is considered the boss instead is an insult to his pride. Mihawk similarly adds that even if Buggy were to die here and now, it wouldn't make up for the shame they feel now. Galdino tries to curry favor with Crocodile as he had once worked for him in Baroque works, much to Buggy's fury, while the other members of his crew believe all they can do is follow Crocodile now. As it turns out, following the dissolution of the warlord system, Crocodile contacted Mihawk and suggested they team up to form an organization that would scare the Marines, using the fact that Mihawk has decided to relocate himself due to constantly being attacked by Marines as justification, and that beforehand, he was once known as the Marine Hunter. Following their team-up, Crocodile and Mihawk made their way to Bari Island, destroying the Marines' ships as a result. This causes Buggy's men to believe that Buggy was risking himself by summoning Crocodile for help, as rumors were circulating that he was his subordinate. However, what they do not know is that Buggy took out a huge loan from Crocodile and became fearful he had come to collect his debt. When Crocodile confronts him, he admits he is surprised Buggy stuck around since he figured he would have bailed by this point, which he would have had his subordinates not seen him and expressed belief he would help them. Buggy tries to explain his debt to Crocodile by telling him that operating a delivery service requires a lot of money to keep running, and he had a lot of mouths to feed, and his biggest earners, the Giants, had all quit. Crocodile suggests he sell Buggy into slavery, but Buggy tries to appease to him by reminding him that they escaped Impel Down together. Crocodile ignores him and tells him that he needs a capital to begin his company, and if Buggy cannot pay, he will have to take full responsibility. Desperate, Buggy offers to join and use his organization and resources to kickstart Crocodile's business, even offering to work for free. Though he accepted these terms, when Crocodile demands to know why Buggy was given the top billing on the flyer, he explains it was not his idea, as his devout followers' blind faith to him was what led to the flyers looking the way they do. Ultimately, Mihawk decides that it would not be a bad idea to let Buggy be the organization's figurehead, as he would personally rather live peacefully than be considered an emperor. Crocodile agrees to Mihawk's views, especially since the two of them can do away with Buggy should they need to. His life spared for now, Buggy announces the two as Cross Guild's executives to his men, who mistake his tears of fear over his fate for tears of joy. As for how Buggy became an emperor, at Marine HQ, the Marines discussed Buggy's accomplishments, him being considered the mastermind of the Impel Down mass escape, having a close relationship with Shanks, and the fact that Crocodile seemingly came to his aid and made contact with Mihawk prior, and that Cross Guild's marine hunting movement is attracting attention from many shady organizations, thus making it a very dangerous threat to them. They decided to award Crocodile a bounty of belly 1,965,000,000, Mihawk a bounty of belly 3,590,000,000, and Buggy belly 3,189,000,000, with his reputation being the foundation of his new status as an emperor. Meanwhile, on Momoro Island, Emporio Ivankov tells Koala to cheer up since Sabo and the rest of the commanders are all okay, and she does. Morley expresses annoyance that Sabo's actions made them stew, while Karasu and Lindbergh say what happened occurred after he split from them, but they believe in him. Koala looks at Dragon, who admits that while he's relieved Sabo is okay, if he truly did assassinate Nefertari Cobra, he won't forgive him no matter the reason. He then asks Kuma to tell him what he saw as Koala picks up a call to them that the Marines managed to listen in on. On the other end of the Den Mushi, Sabo's voice rings. Near Whitebeard's homeland Sphinx, the red hair pirates have dropped off Marco, who decides to fly all the way back to the island. Marco thanks Shanks for the ride as he asks once again if Marco really doesn't want to join his crew. Marco confirms and even adds that he considers himself too old and worn out to play babysitter to a great pirate like him, a statement shared by Shanks' fellow officers and to his own personal frustration. As Marco bids goodbye, he thinks back to before the Straw Hats left Wano and how surprised Luffy and Sanji were that Yamato chose not to join them. Yamato tells them that Ryokuju's attack made him realize that Kaido's downfall means more people like the Admiral will try to invade Wano, so he can't turn his back on them, especially if he does leave, he'll continuously worry about them. Luffy ultimately accepts Yamato's wishes as Zoro recommends he be careful as to not hurt Momonosuke's pride, to which Yamato says he will find another reason to stay. Overhead, Marco calls to Luffy and tells him that he will be hitching a ride with a nearby ship. Luffy tells Marco he didn't get a chance to thank him for saving him during the Summit War. Marco accepts his thanks and says that Ace would be proud of how far he had come before saying that the times belonged to him and the other youngsters of his generation. Meanwhile, on Amazon Lily, Gloriosa remarks how deep into the island men were able to invade their home and how damaged the town is, with the mountain having lost about half of its entire structure. Boa Hancock says that as long as she remains on the island, the Marines won't stop hunting them, to which she remarks that she should go marry Luffy now, which annoys Gloriosa since Hancock is always thinking about that. As it turns out, a few weeks prior, during Kobe and the Marines' attack on the Kuja pirates, the attacking Marines decided to deploy their new pacifistas, the Seraphim, which seemed to take the form of children, keeping some of the Kuja pirates from fighting back. During the attack, though, Blackbeard's ship was spotted, with Blackbeard himself creating a Kaishin to shove the Marines away. Blackbeard then appears with Katarina Devon and Vasco shot accompanying him, where he announces that he has come for Boa Hancock's Mero Mero no Mai, unwilling to let the Marines acquire it. Devon muses how nice Hancock's head would make as a trophy, and Blackbeard tells her that she can have her way with her after they take her powers, with Shot saying they could have more fun with her if she was alive. Vice Admiral Yamakaji is asked if the Marines should engage the Blackbeard pirates, but he says they need to wait for word from HQ, only for most of the Marines to get blown away by Blackbeard. He barges his way into the island and demands Hancock show herself, while Kobe, who was already on the island, asks Hancock to surrender if she wants them to leave. Hancock refuses and steps out to confront the opposing sides, just as Blackbeard gets a call for help from his subordinates. He sees the attacker and, to his shock, discovers not only is it the new pacifista, but it has all the traits of a Lunarian, and whose sword strike was what cut the island's mountain in half. Blackbeard starts fighting the pacifista and is forced to use Black Hole to swallow everything, while Hancock uses Slave Arrow to petrify several Marines, including Helmeppo and Yamakaji. The pacifista continues attack as Kobe demands it stop to protect the petrified Marines, but just as Hancock is about to use Perfume Femur, Blackbeard grabs her by the throat and nullifies her powers, as both their new bounties are revealed to be Billy 1,659,000,000 for Hancock and Billy 3,996,000, 000 for Blackbeard. Blackbeard acknowledges that Hancock's reputation is well earned, especially since she was able to petrify Devon and Shot among his crew. While Kobe tries to figure out what to do with all of the Marines down, Blackbeard tells her that he's had his eye on her devil fruit for a long time. She retorts that her beauty is what makes her powers formidable, and even if he kills her, those who have been petrified will remain so forever, fully confident that whoever inherits her power won't have the same capacity as her. Blackbeard then speaks to Kobe and says that they are now at an impasse, while also stating that he did him a favor at Rocky Port which allowed him to oust Oku and take Hikishinosu for himself. Blackbeard asks Kobe if he thinks Hancock will turn everyone back to normal if he unhands her, and Kobe says that if she didn't, it would be a headache for him. Hancock says she will turn everyone back to normal if they both leave, but Blackbeard refuses, reasoning that she won't keep up her end of the bargain due to her charms. At this point, Blackbeard decides to kill Hancock, which Kobe objects to, but thankfully he is stopped by the arrival of Silver's Rayleigh, who apologizes to Hancock for coming late while admitting he didn't expect the extent of the damage seen. He also says to a shocked Blackbeard that even though he was once Whitebeard's apprentice, he doesn't like him. As he draws his sword, he asks Hancock to release everyone while he makes sure to de-escalates and that everyone leaves the island. In the present day, Hancock thanks Rayleigh for saving her as Shakuyaku, who not only accompanied Rayleigh but is also revealed to be the former Empress of Amazon Lily from 2 generations ago and the former captain of the Kuja pirates. Says that Vegapunk's modifications to marine ships means that the Calm Belt is no longer a safe place for them. Gloriosa says that she genuinely thought they were finished, and Rayleigh even adds that they were lucky, as it was his reputation that ended the conflict, and that he won't be able to beat Blackbeard head-on due to his old age. Rayleigh then says that the Marines are aiming to use the new pacifistas to replace the 7 warlords of the sea, with Boa Marigold and Boa Sandersonia remarking that the 2 that were deployed didn't have a scratch on them, and even one of them looked like Hancock as a child. As for the Marines, they reveal that Kobe was captured by Blackbeard, leaving his current fate unknown. The Straw Hat Pirates read the news and discover the allegation that Sabo killed Nefertari Cobra. Immediately, Luffy yells that he doesn't believe Sabo would do such a thing, and Robin sides with him, revealing that the Revolutionary Army's enemy is the world nobles, not regular kings. They also read that Vivi has gone missing, and Luffy orders that course be set for Arabasta right now. Zoro tells him that it is pointless because Vivi was last seen in Mary Geoise, but Luffy simply says they head there instead, while Zoro kicks over a chained-up barrel that has caribou inside. Zoro reminds Luffy that Mary Geoise is the den of their enemy, but Luffy simply calls him a chicken while Zoro retorts that they need more information. Sanji sobs over Vivi's condition while Chopper laments that her father was dead, as he was nice to them back in Arabasta, something Usopp agrees with. Nami is also worried for Vivi's safety as well, and Jinbe comments how tumultuous the Levely was. Frankie and Brook state they don't believe Sabo killed Cobra, with Brook even adding he's never known anyone displeased with the Sand Kingdom. At that point, Nami bursts into tears and Luffy yells they need to save her, but Zoro demands everyone calm down. He asks Luffy if he remembers telling them that Ace had his own adventures and how he trusted him to handle himself up until he absolutely needed help. As such, he feels Vivi should be treated the same way because he knows how tough she is. Luffy, Nami, Chopper, and Sanji, however, retort that he can't stop them from worrying about her and start name-calling him, leading to a fight between him and Sanji once again. Robin, meanwhile, says that so much transpired while they were in Wano, particularly that the abolishment of the 7 warlords of the sea sent Crocodile, Buggy, and Dracule Mihawk back out to sea and lead to the founding of Cross Guild and Buggy's ascension as emperor, which Luffy correctly deduces was due to a mix-up. Robin asks Luffy if he wants to hear about the others listed in the paper, and he says he will leave it in her care and to alert him if there is anything big to keep his eye on, which she accepts. Luffy lays down on his back and once again says that Sabo is innocent, even telling everyone about how his dream was so no one would get their freedom taken away from them like his was as a kid. He reminisces over the day he, Sabo, and Ace made an oath and Luffy tells everyone what he told them, resulting in a surprised reaction from everyone, with Usopp saying what Luffy wants is impossible despite his beliefs. It then occurs to Luffy that he had never actually told them what he told his brothers and Shanks, but simply says that at the end of his dream, that is what he wants. The crew's reactions become one of encouragement, and Frankie declares to Luffy that becoming the Pirate King is the bare minimum to achieve it, adding that there is to find only one road poneglyph to get to Laugh Tale, but Robin tells him it's not that easy, since no one has seen that poneglyph in years and there are no clues as to where it may be. Meanwhile, at Marine HQ, the Marines track where Sabo is calling Momoro Island from, and learn it is Lelouchia Kingdom, one of the nations the Revolutionary Army helped rebel. The 5 elders remark on this development and call him unfortunate. On Momoro Island, Sabo apologizes for the trouble he caused and confirms he did not kill Cobra, but he saw something unbelievable. Specifically, he saw someone sit on the empty throne. All the while, the people of the kingdom were noticing the sky getting darker, while the ousted king and his daughter demanded to be released. That someone, Emu, proceeds to cross off Lelouchia on a map, and the 5 elders order the signal to the surveillance Den Moshes be cut, and as far as the Marines should be concerned, nothing abnormal was detected and no information was intercepted, and as far as anyone should be concerned about, Lelouchia Kingdom never existed, as something ginormous lands on and completely obliterates the island. This cuts Sabo's connection to the army off, leaving his ultimate fate unknown. A few days later, the Straw Hats are sailing in the climate range of a nearby winter island as the seas are filled with icebergs and strong winds. They then notice a huge column of water in the air, which Nami says is a warm eddy being forced upwards. Nami tells Jinbe to get everyone away, but Luffy and Sanji sense a woman trapped in the current. Zoro cuts the current in half using Yakodori as Chopper walks out and gets swept away by the wind. Luffy's attempt to save him results in him getting swept away too, but the woman gets blown out of the current, and she turns out to be Jewelry Bonnie in her child form, with a new bounty of Bailey 320 million. Luffy grabs Jewelry Bonnie by the ankle as she wakes up, gasping for air. However, she reveals that not only was she being chased by a monster underwater, but that monster was now below the Thousand Sunny. She tells the crew to look down, and they do so to see a horrifying monster about to swallow them whole. They are able to get out of the way as the monster, which seems to be a giant metal shark, breaks the surface of the water and knocks the ship into the air. Jinbe notices that Luffy, Chopper, and Bonnie have fallen into the sea, and he asks Frankie to take the helm while he dives in to rescue them. Frankie activates the Thousand Sunny's ship bottom rabbit screw and starts moving the ship away from the shark at rapid speed, but the shark fires several torpedoes at the ship, causing it to capsize and knocking everyone into the water. Jinbe grabs the three as he hears the explosion, and when he resurfaces, he sees that the current is too strong for any ship to steer through. The shark opens fire on him, but he has the three devil fruit users take a deep breath before he dives back down. The other Straw Hats, meanwhile, are unable to get back to the surface because of the current's strength, and just as the shark is about to eat everyone, a large robot appears from behind it and bashes it. Meanwhile, on a nearby island resides Marine Base G-14, where Tashigi is caring for the children rescued from Punk Hazard. As Mocha says that she and the others have gone down in size, Tashigi's attention is interrupted by the G-14 commander and Vice Admiral Dahl, who demands she do something to silence Helmeppo. Tashigi says she cannot, since she understands that he is worried about Kobe, as is herself. Sure enough, Helmeppo and Marine HQ Commander Hibari, both of whom are part of SWORD, are begging Marine HQ Rear Admiral and fellow SWORD member Prince Grus to go with them to Hachinosu to rescue Kobe. Grus refuses because of the fact that Hachinosu is Blackbeard's home turf. When Helmeppo suggests they get some seraphim since they are so close to Egghead, Grus once again shoots down his idea, saying that no one is in any position to act, especially with them unable to contact Drake either. For now, all they can do is just try to remain calm until the situation changes. With Luffy's group, Jinbe was able to get everyone to land, and while everyone dries off, Bonnie, who has returned to her adult form, reminds Luffy that she is also a member of the worst generation, but while she considers him her enemy, she does thank him for saving her. She does ask about his wanted poster looking different, but all Luffy says is that is how he looks when he is free. She asks if he is worried about his crew, and he says he is not since he trusts them completely, which causes Jinbe to ask her where her crew and ship are. Bonnie tells him that she came alone, and her ship was eaten by the metal shark, before stating that she is hungry. Luffy realizes he is too and says they should find a restaurant, but Bonnie reveals to him that they are nowhere near one, as the island they are residing on right now is called Egghead, the world government-owned island that is said to be 500 years in the future, which also houses Dr. Vegapunk's research lab. She then tells Luffy that she has business with Vegapunk, which is why she is here. As for the rest of the crew, the large robot picks up the Thousand Sunny, saving everyone from drowning. Everyone is surprised to see such a large machine as a woman steps out from the cockpit complaining about how she failed to program the metal shark to only scout, report, and fire on any ship it sees, but not to eat Dr. Vegapunk as it keeps her from salvaging them. Frankie thanks her for saving them, but she clarifies that she was not trying to save them, especially since she works for the world government. She then introduces herself as leaving the entire crew in awe, reeling off the woman's declaration that she is Dr. Vegapunk. Frankie tells her that he really respects Vegapunk's work, considering that he spent the 2 years separated from the crew in Baltimore learning from his projects. Usopp, meanwhile, is gushing over the woman's giant robot, and Sanji is elated to see that Dr. Vegapunk is a gorgeous woman. Robin, however, voices her suspicions that the woman is Dr. Vegapunk, since she has never heard of the doctor being female. She also states that she is too young to be him as well. The woman confirms Robin's suspicions by revealing that she is not the Stella, which is Dr. Vegapunk's main body. She is Punk 02 Lilith. Lilith tells the Straw Hat Pirates that her research budget is always strained, so she will release everyone and conclude her business with the Straw Hats if they hand over their valuables. Nami rebukes this notion and demands she continue saving them, but Lilith once again states she wasn't trying to save them. In fact, she considers them all trespassers, and every ship that comes near gets destroyed by her army of sea beast weapons, which she summons to surround everyone. Everyone starts panicking, except for Frankie, Zoro, Robin, and, to a lesser extent, Sanji, just as Lilith receives a call from someone. The person on the other end is called Shaka, who tells her she has no pride as a scientist by plundering. Lilith tells him to shut up because she's focusing on their budget, but Shaka informs her that she's dealing with the Straw Hat Pirates, who were just announced as an Emperor's crew. Lilith states she knows, meaning they must have treasure on board, which is why she's robbing them, but Shaka tells her that she's underestimating them, especially since Zoro and Robin are acting so calmly because they know that even if they're surrounded, they can handle the sea beast weapons. Lilith realizes she's at a disadvantage, ashamed that she underestimated an Emperor's crew so quickly and easily, as Zoro informs that they have some demands for him. Interested in the pirates to begin with, Shaka agrees to accommodate the crew and asks that they be brought to Vegapunk. Meanwhile, on Egghead, Jewelry Bonnie reveals to Luffy that she has been to the island before, when she was a kid. As the group make their way up to the island's surface, Bonnie tells them that turned her father, who, unbeknownst to them, is Bartholomew Kuma, into a cyborg, which Luffy at first says is cool, until Bonnie clarifies that her father has lost all sense of self because of it, and she wants answers from Dr. Vegapunk regarding it, even saying she will kill him if she doesn't like what she hears. The group makes it to the surface as Luffy and Chopper immediately try to find something to eat, while Bonnie remembers she saw Sabo at Mary Giawai's, but she decides not to tell Luffy yet. They are left in awe of the theme park on the island, which also contains a giant robot and a giant space alien. Luffy slingshots himself towards the monster, which seemingly eats him, only for Luffy to harmlessly pass through it. Though initially confused, his, Bonnie's, and Chopper's attention is turned to a giant parfait and other sweets. However, their attempts to eat it results in them also passing through it harmlessly. Even more confused, Bonnie realizes that the sweets they see are holograms, 3D images made of light. In other words, it's not real. Though this explains why Luffy wasn't hurt by the monster since it was a hologram too, he becomes furious over the food trick. Chopper then notices a machine with various food signs on it, but Bonnie thinks it's another hologram. Jinbe then speaks up and says that he noticed that the waters surrounding the island were cold, yet the island feels very warm. Just then, a large girl appears and explains that that is because she created an island AC to control the temperature of the island itself. Luffy is shocked by the large woman and attacks her, thinking she's a hologram too, only for the girl to punch him back in annoyance and knock him into the machine Chopper and Bonnie were looking at. This results in the machine creating some food, which they quickly realize is real, and they proceed to start feasting on the machine's creations. The girl tells the group that the machine is called the automatic cooking machine, which can produce over 500 different meals at rapid speed, provided there's enough food material. She also tells the three of them that she appreciates that they like her machine, but she says that it will only work if it is built according to the specs, and there aren't enough people, resources, or money in the world who can mass produce it, a sentiment shared by her AC unit. Her frustration over this fact causes her to punch the holographic monster, which surprises everyone. She explains that she has light-pressure gloves which allow her to come into contact with light images as if they were real. Jinbe finally asks who the girl is, and she introduces herself as Dr. Vegapunk, specifically Punk 05 Atlas. Everyone is left in shock by this, particularly Bonnie, who assumes she is lying. Elsewhere, CP0 agents Rob Lucci, Stussy, and Kaku are en route to Egghead with a seraphim resembling Bartholomew Kuma. Kaku informs Lucci that while there is only one Dr. Vegapunk, his constant busy schedule leaves him not enough time to do everything. As such, he created 6 satellite bodies to split himself into, thereby giving himself more hands, even though they are all him. Lucci comments that he feels like the weird one for being the only one thinking that it is impossible, and how geniuses are such a pain, and he says that their mission is to first return the seraphim to the island, then eliminate every one of Dr. Vegapunk's bodies while keeping his lab intact. Lucci asks if the reason the world government wants the smartest man in the world eliminated is because of the Lulusia Kingdom incident, but Stussy and Kaku remind him that they are not supposed to ask questions. Bonnie, Luffy, and Chopper finally finish stuffing themselves, with Atlas commenting on how huge everyone is now, though Jinbe points out that he was always rather large. A mechanical dog called the Recycle Wand starts eating up the trash as Atlas goes back to work. After she leaves, the group notices some other people walking around, and Bonnie assumes they are assistants of some kind. Jinbe asks why they are appearing now since the whole place was empty just a minute ago, but his attention is turned to Luffy, whose outfit has now changed into something similar to what Atlas and the others are wearing. Luffy remarks on how good the clothes feel as Bonnie asks where he got them, to which Luffy shows her another one of Dr. Vegapunk's inventions, which generates clothes. Bonnie uses it and changes hers to a battle uniform of some kind. Chopper changes into something similar while Jinbe dons a tropical shirt. Just as Bonnie is about to part ways with the Straw Hats, Luffy sees what he thinks is Bartholomew Kuma coming towards them wearing a police outfit. The pacifista charges the group and attacks them, stating that they have actually stolen those clothes. The group gets out of the way as Luffy decides to fight back. Just as he is about to attack the pacifista, Bonnie stops him and tells the three that Kuma is her father and the only family she has left. The Straw Hats are left shocked by this revelation as Bonnie continues to plead with them to not hurt her father, but just as the pacifista is about to fire on her, Luffy Meanwhile, in a certain sea in the New World, the Blackbeard pirates have ambushed the Heart pirates. The polar tang starts taking on water as Law tries to find a place for him and his crew to escape. All of a sudden, Law turns into a woman, and soon, the rest of his crew start turning too. As everyone tries to get a grip on the situation, the ship surfaces and Law turns back to normal, having learned from his fight with Kaido and Big Mom that any devil fruit power can be overwhelmed by a great deal of haki, which he used on himself. As the crew reaches land, the doctor of the Blackbeard pirates, Doc Q, comments on how Law was able to nullify his feminization disease he infected the crew with. As it turns out, Doc Q had eaten the Shiku no Mai, which allows him to craft and spread any kind of sickness. Also with him were Van Augur and Jesus Burgess, both of whom consumed devil fruits, as well the Wapu no Mai for Augur, which allows him to teleport people, and the Riki no Mai for Burgess, which gives him inhuman levels of strength. Augur warps Burgess to the island, where the latter picks up a mountain to throw at the Heart Pirates. Law manages to destroy it as Blackbeard comes flying in on Doc Q and his horse Stronger, which had consumed the Yuma no Mai, model Pegasus, a mythical Zoan fruit that gives stronger wings. Blackbeard greets Law as the latter demands to know what the former wants. Blackbeard states that he knew one of the three of them would end up on this particular island after leaving Wano, but he was not sure who. He tells Law that he suspects Law claimed Kaido's road poneglyph and that he plans on claiming Law's poneglyph copies for himself. Law accepts Blackbeard's challenge, saying the winner takes all. As Blackbeard gears up for another attack, Law tells Hakugan to take charge of the polar tang while Shachi and Penguin jump into the water. Blackbeard unleashes a Garash that pushes down the Heart Pirates on land, but not before Law uses R-Room Amputate to cut Stronger in half, causing Blackbeard to fall off as he admits his surprise at Law's awakened abilities. Doc Q falls as well, but he manages to throw his basket of explosive apples at the Heart Pirates, only for Shachi to shoot a torrent of water at the bombs, destroying them in mid-air, to Doc Q's shock. Penguin tells the Blackbeard pirates that because he and the others grew up in the frigid North Blue Port, they have an advantage in a sea battle. Beepo then uses his incredible hearing to tell Jean Bart about Van Augur's incoming shot on Law, prompting him to use himself as a shield to protect his captain, to which Augur comments on what a tough guard he has. Law then uses K-Room Shock Will to stab and zap Blackbeard from the inside out as Augur uses his powers to warp to his position. Augur tells Blackbeard that his injuries are a result of him charging in without a plan, and suggests they retreat. Blackbeard refuses and has Augur warp him to where Law is, as the latter comments on how Blackbeard managed to acquire devil fruit powers for all of his officers. Law points out the one weakness all devil fruit users share, but Blackbeard simply says that the trade-off is worth it. The Polar Tang, meanwhile, starts attacking Blackbeard's ship, with some Blackbeard pirate grunts growing a little panicked but calming down under the notion that Blackbeard will prevail. Their captive, Charlotte Pudding, who was captured by Kuzan and Augur at an earlier point in time, tells the grunts that if Big Mom is still alive, they wouldn't be acting so cocky, but they tell her that she is dead and they are fighting her killer, meaning that the new era is still being made. During Blackbeard and Law's clash, Sakazuki is informed of the battle, but is forced to wait to see the conclusion, causing him to call the job of being Fleet Admiral frustrating. On Egghead, Jewelry Bonnie uses her devil fruit powers to age Luffy and Chopper to old men, while Jinbe and herself are aged to young children in order to throw the Pacifista off their trail. Luffy tells Bonnie that she can't stop him from fighting the Pacifistas, even if they look like Bartholomew Kuma, with Chopper scolding him and apologizing to Bonnie, saying their previous run-ins with Pacifistas have been less than pleasant. Jinbe says that the Pacifistas are clones of Kuma, so it makes sense that he would have a family. He then tells Bonnie what he knows about Kuma so far. According to Jinbe, Kuma was a wicked king who ruled over the Sorbet Kingdom before getting booted out by his people, after which he became a pirate. Later, he joined the Revolutionary Army until he was captured by the Marines and sentenced to life imprisonment. Dr. Vegapunk, however, found she returns to normal and changes the Straw Hats back too, while revealing that Kuma told her that she came from a special race, but that doesn't give Dr. Vegapunk the right to experiment on him and practically kill him by taking away his free will. As for the Thousand Sunny, Lilith takes the crew high into the sky and drops them off on Egghead Island, with Lava Phase, the main research center, being situated on the clouds above the island, while the rest is referred to as the Fabrio Phase. As she mentions the trouble Luffy is causing at the lower level, Lilith brings herself and the crew to Lava Phase, where Zoro and Brook decide to watch the ship while the others head on. Lilith advises everyone to use the Trankos to change clothes before heading into the lab, though. Inside the lab, Shaka speaks with Monkey D, Dragon, where he tells him that since he is so smart, he can see into the future. He then tells Dragon that he fears his imminent death is approaching, so he wants him to hear him out. On the Thousand Sunny, Zoro tells Brook that the reason he chose to stay behind was because he wanted to make sure he could bail out the crew if they get caught, since they are on a world government-affiliated island. Brook returns the sentiment regarding his decision to stay and the two drink some tea, while Caribou finally speaks up. He reveals that he made a deal with the crew for them to drop him off away from Wano, but he did not think they would head for a government island. Zoro, however, ignores his worries and tries to send him on his way, much to his anger. Inside the lab, Usopp and Nami revel at the moving stairs while Frankie asks Lilith how everything is powered, to which she says it runs on fire. Frankie says that will run through many resources, which is why Lilith says she is always on the lookout for new sources. She then proceeds to walk through a wall before receiving a call from Edison. She goes on ahead as the rest of the Straw Hat Pirates walk through the wall too. Edison introduces himself and has everyone walk straight ahead. As they do so, Nami gushes at the idea that there may be future treasure on the island, which causes Usopp to comment that her tastes seem to vary between a little girl and an old woman, prompting Nami to angrily kick him. However, all five of them get their attention turned to an unexpected sight, one of the Seraphim units resembling Jinbe as a child. The group starts hypothesizing what he could possibly be, but Frankie ends up correctly deducing that they were facing another pacifista. His suspicions are confirmed when the Seraphim labeled 04S Shark fires a laser at the group, causing them all to scatter. As they recover, Usopp laments that they may have been lured into a trap while Nami pulls out Zeus. Unfortunately, she cannot bring herself to fight back, prompting S-Shark to make the first move and dive into the ground, similar to Senior Pink's Sui Sui no Mai powers, which Frankie remembers. S-Shark jumps out of the ground and grabs Nami by the neck, prompting an enraged Sanji to deliver a fiery kick to its face. Robin follows up with Gigante Fleur Sea Serpent Spank, but S-Shark dodges and prepares to use Fishman Karate on her, but Usopp shoots S-Shark with Midori Boshi Dokuro Bakuhatsu So. Unfortunately for him, S-Shark dodges and emerges from beneath Usopp, grabbing him. Sanji moves to save him, but Frankie opts to instead, firing Radical Beam at the Seraphim. From afar, Edison watches the battle and is surprised to see Frankie be able to use laser beams, which he considers risky for the Seraph since he has yet to put them through laser trials. Lilith, who was with him, agrees, saying that Seraphim are expensive to make, furious at the fact that the crew might have caused irreversible damage to S-Shark. Edison then comes up with an idea and flies off to jot down the blueprints, leaving Pythagoras with the task of watching the fight. Pythagoras does so, saying that battle data like this is hard to come by. As Edison works, he asks York to eat something, which she does. As the fight continues, Pythagoras comments that S-Shark's attack patterns continue to develop as it grows, indicating that one's lineage factor can store some of a person's recollections and capabilities. As he considers solutions to problems arising from the Seraphim's accelerated growth, he grows uncomfortable due to needing to use the bathroom. Since he is so occupied right now, he leaves that task to York, who, after finishing, says how relaxed she is, which Edison and Pythagoras also say. Meanwhile, Atlas says she needs to punch something to help her digest. York then falls asleep. Eventually, Shaka arrives and orders S-Shark to stop, while also scolding Edison, Lilith, and Pythagoras for using the Straw Hats for collecting battle data. He also magnetically sticks everyone's feet to the floor, which he says is because he still does not completely trust everyone. Shaka asks if everyone thinks the island looks like the future, to which Frankie confirms he does. To his surprise, though, Shaka states that the island is actually from the past. When Frankie inquires what he means, Shaka tells him that 900 years ago, there was a highly advanced kingdom that had more technology than today. Elsewhere, Luffy's group comes across a junkyard and finds an ancient-looking but highly advanced robot, which Luffy and Chopper want to ride. Frankie is left incredulous at Shaka's claim that Egghead resembles an ancient city, but Shaka simply says it was a theory evidence backed up by the tale of an archaeologist who risked his life to discover the Great Kingdom, and one day found a machine that had the same manufacturing date his theory. A concerned Robin asks if the machine was built during the Void Century, to which Shaka asks how much she knows about it. In turn, Nami asks Robin how much she knows, but Shaka speaks up and admits Robin may find the story painful for her to remember, as Shaka knows that Robin's birthplace, Ohara, was destroyed 22 years ago by a buster call from the Marines, and he believes the reason was because they knew of the existence of the Great Kingdom. Shaka continues saying that the Void Century is a period of war between the highly advanced civilization that once existed and 20 other kingdoms, with the 20 kingdoms winning and eventually becoming the world government. He also reveals that the world government had tried to erase any knowledge about the ancient kingdom because of their intention to have absolutely no one carry its ideals. Nami and Usopp are left aghast by Shaka's tale, though Frankie finds it romantic. Sanji asks Shaka if the people who knew about the kingdom are all dead, which Shaka confirms. Usopp starts freaking out as Shaka tries to assure that it was only a theory. He turns to Robin and tells her that if the people of Ohara were killed because of this theory, then that means the world government knows it to be true. Robin grows defensive of Shaka's claim and tells him that the people of Ohara simply made a theory based on all the research they conducted, and if he could not simply learn the truth from the government itself with his influence. Shaka answers Robin that if he talks, he will die, whether he is affiliated with the world government or not. Robin asks how Shaka is able to know all of this, since she believes that all of the books that Ohara had were destroyed. Shaka, however, states this to be untrue. He acknowledges the day Ohara was destroyed with only her as the sole survivor, as well as how the world government labeled the people as evil with a desire to take over the world. About a month later, though, he decided to visit what remained, revealing that he was actually a close friend of Clover, Robin's mentor, which surprises her. Shaka tells Robin that Clover was once an adventurer, and his interest in the Void Century was what compelled him to travel the world collecting books, even though it meant he would be captured by the Marines multiple times. In the end, he became the #1 archaeologist in the world before gathering all the other scholars in Ohara, making it a sanctuary for them, which is why he believes his ultimate fate was so tragic. When he went to Ohara, he saw that the scholars all gave their lives to save the books, which they threw into the lake to save from the fire. He surmised that if the Marines saw the books, they saw no value in them and left them, which Shaka considered a victory for the people of Ohara, to the point that it brought him to tears. Shaka's story causes Robin to reminisce about the incident of the destruction of the island, and how her mother, Olvia, told her that she believes history is an asset for humanity, so they should not give up on the future she would live in. As her words were very similar to Shaka's about the importance the books had, Robin starts to cry, which mistakenly enrages the Straw Hats. Robin confesses to Shaka that Ohara did try to expose the truth about the Great Kingdom as he predicted, and asks about what happened to all of the books. He explains that at the time he wanted to take them all to Punk Hazard, but knew it would be too risky if his superiors found out. However, he did end up meeting those guys. It turns out, when Dr. Vegapunk went to Ohara after it had been destroyed, he spotted some giants salvaging the books. As he begins to wonder if they know the importance of them, he gets spotted by Monkey D. Dragon, who was also an old friend of Clover. Vegapunk was surprised to learn this as Dragon tells Vegapunk that he checked out the giants and confirms they aren't bandits, and they know of the value of the books. He also tells him that their captain is a strange man with bandages all over his body, and who said he won't let the assets that Ohara left become erased from history. Dragon concludes that he is relieved that the world government didn't destroy the books, though he said that including Vegapunk with them. Vegapunk tries to defend himself, but Dragon refuses to hear it, as he had previously invited him to join his freedom fighters, yet he chose to side with the world government. Vegapunk claims that him being a genius would not have been able to help them, and reasons that even within the world government, there would be people who would listen to him, so Dragon should not be losing his objective. Dragon admits this to be true, but cannot help himself from being angry over the fact that the world government killed thousands of innocent and powerless people over something as trivial as an unreasonable opinion. As a result, he declared he would make an army who can fight it. He will not let Clover's death and the will of Ohara go in vain, even if he is a man who despises war. It was from that point on that the Revolutionary Army came to be, with Emporio Ivankov and Bartholomew Kuma helping him found it. At the end of Shaka's tale, Nami calls Dragon a passionate man, while Usopp is surprised to hear the giants came from Elbaf. Robin also admits her surprise that Dragon knew Clover, and Frankie asks Shaka why he remodeled Kuma, and why he saved them that day. Shaka, however, says that since the books didn't fall into the world government's hands, he secretly visited Elbaf and read them, meaning he himself knows all about Ohara and the secrets of the world, which is helping him progress his research. Robin begins to smile and asks if the captain's name is Jaguar D. Saul, and though Shaka does not exactly say that, only that he is hiding and no one knows where. Robin deeply thanks him and asks he not let Ohara's battle go in vain. Shaka confirms he will not, as he considers himself an ally to every scholar, as is his nature as a researcher. Shaka then activates everyone's shoes and has them follow him, wanting to show them something. Meanwhile, down in the Fabria phase, Luffy and Chopper see no place to ride the giant robot, making them think it is automatic. Chopper tries to make it move but fails, and Luffy tries to call it by its name, which also fails and causes Jewelry Bonnie to refer to them as children. Just then, someone appears stuck inside the robot's armor while begging for help, as his warping experiment had failed. Luffy helps the man out, and Bonnie identifies him as Dr. Vegapunk, the main body. Vegapunk recognizes that Luffy is Dragon's son, and that he knew he would come, before looking at Bonnie and acknowledging how grown-up she is now. Luffy's attention, however, is turned to Vegapunk's shoes, which are making him float. Vegapunk shows him and Chopper how to do it too, but ends up shooting himself too high into the air, prompting him to ask for help again. Bonnie asks Dr. Vegapunk what happened to his head, considering how its formerly enormous size last time they had seen each other. Vegapunk simply says that he cut it, a statement that leaves her flabbergasted that he can compare his head to simple hair. Vegapunk explains that he ate the Nomi Nomi no Mai, a paramecia devil fruit that allows him to store every tiny detail of knowledge, which causes his brain to grow continuously with all the new information. Granted, he was already born a genius, the devil fruit simply expanded upon that. Chopper is left in awe over Vegapunk's claim that his brain is still growing, even separated from his head, while Luffy asks if he became stupid after cutting it, which irritates Vegapunk. He explains that the apple attached to his head is an antenna, and it transmits information to the rest of his brain, which is contained in the backside of the giant egg on the island, which is dubbed Punk Records. Vegapunk also explains that each of the satellites are clones of him, each one containing an exact copy of one of his personalities, all increasing the amount of work he can do, and that once a day he syncs their experiences and knowledge through Punk Records, which Jinbe believes is because they all share the same brain as him. Vegapunk says that Punk Records is very much like a giant library, and that people around the world can access his brain and help themselves to his incredible knowledge. He also believes if mankind can continuously update Punk Records, he could create a sea of knowledge far beyond his brain, with which he can share with all of the world. Chopper gushes over Vegapunk's accomplishments, while Jinbe questions if he would encounter issues with ideology, which Vegapunk says should not be too focused on if one wishes to advance the field of science. Bonnie, however, becomes livid, telling Vegapunk that he is still the same as when last they met a man who is willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of science, like her father, Bartholomew Kuma. She draws the beam saber she picked up earlier on Vegapunk, despite his claim that it is a failed product. She demands he turn Kuma back to normal as Jinbe tries to calm her down by reminding her how many enemies she will create if she kills the smartest man alive. Vegapunk then tells Bonnie that the reason why the beam saber is a failed product is because it keeps attracting insects, and as if on cue, several of them swarm towards her, causing her to faint from shock. Chopper tries to check on her as Vegapunk admits Bonnie has every reason to want him dead, but he shifts topics to that of his artificial devil fruit, as he had heard rumors that there was another dragon in Wano other than Kaido. Luffy confirms this as Vegapunk tells him that he considers it a failed experiment, even though he spent 20 years researching Kaido's lineage factor. Luffy, however, states that the devil fruit is not a failure because it allowed Momonosuke the same capabilities as Kaido himself. Vegapunk, however, reveals that he considers it a failure because the dragon's color is pink, in contrast to Kaido's azure, causing Jinbe to call him a die-hard perfectionist. Luffy asks Vegapunk if he can move the large robot they found, as he thinks he built it, but Vegapunk tells him he did not. He also reveals that it once attacked Mary Geoise 200 years ago, and was built more than 900 years ago. Vegapunk himself does not know why it was built, but he knows that it was not able to destroy Mary Geoise because it ran out of power. The researchers of the time were left wondering where it came from and what its objective was, but the world government ordered it to be destroyed. The researchers, however, hid it to continue studying it across the generations. On the Laba phase, it is revealed that the thing Shaka wanted to show the Straw Hats was the ancient robot itself, and that they saw and heard everything the real Vegapunk said. Robin remarks that 200 years ago was when fishmen discrimination started, and Shaka tells everyone that they built the large robot Lilith was piloting earlier, Vegaforce 01, based on everything they have learned from the ancient robot. His only problem is being unable to replicate its power source. For the moment, though, the crew is relieved to see that Luffy is okay. Back with the original Vegapunk, the former admits he hurt Bonnie, which Luffy agrees with, but he says there is something he wishes to give to her. He then asks Luffy if he can help him escape Egghead. Off the coast of the island, CP0 arrives and asks to be allowed to harbor. Stussy says that Jewelry Bonnie is on Egghead as well, to whom Rob Lucci calls her an eyesore who has escaped multiple times. However, they see no more use from her and decide to kill her if they run across her. Pythagoras tells Shaka that the world government is here, and they have CP0 with them, Rob Lucci included. Lilith suggests he be let in, but Usopp and Nami demand he not be let in due to their past dealings with him. Shaka tells Pythagoras to intercept them and deny their request. On Momoro Island, Kuma starts moving, perplexing the Revolutionary Army. Despite not being able to move properly, he still tries to run off, collapsing and getting back up multiple times. This causes Dragon and Andy Ivankov to ask him to stay, as their battle as the Revolutionary Army is now beginning. Pythagoras thanks CP0 for returning the Seraphim to Egghead and says that it can make its way back on its own. He also says that they can leave since their mission is now complete, but the agents are not so easily convinced. Kaku, in particular, tells Pythagoras not to be so cold to them since they spent a long time trying to reach him, so he should at least show some hospitality. However, Pythagoras says they should try the G14 branch instead. Rob Lucci decides to speak to Pythagoras and asks him if he knows anything about a missing ship near Egghead Island. When Pythagoras asks for clarity, Lucci explains that 2 months ago, a ship from CP5 disappeared, and a month ago, a ship from CP7, and from approximately 2 weeks ago, one from CP8. He asks why none of these world government ships have been seen or heard from again, and Pythagoras says that he should have confirmed they had all departed, but Lilith takes the Den Den Mushi from him and angrily accuses him of blaming them for the ship's disappearances. Pythagoras manages to get Lilith to stop talking and hangs up on Lucci. In response, Lucci asks that the Seraphim, dubbed S-Bear, needs to use its abilities to get everyone to the island, meaning they would abandon ship and have it be destroyed by the mechanized sea beasts. On Momoro Island, the Revolutionary Army continues chasing after Bartholomew Kuma, who uses his devil fruit powers to warp off the island. In the scrapyard, Luffy asks Dr. Vegapunk why he wants him to take him off the island, especially since his lab is here. Vegapunk admits this to be true, but also says that he has completely used up all of the world government's research funds and has been doing as he pleased since then. Despite this, he does not possess the manpower or resources required to continue bringing his ideas to fruition. He then announces that his big dream is to use science in order to create a world where energy would be provided for all, free of charge. Luffy does not exactly understand, and Jinbe tells him that resources that produce energy are often fought over by other countries, thus resulting in war. Vegapunk confirms and says that energy exists everywhere in the world, and he wishes to convert it to usable power, thereby removing the need for such wars. Though he does not quite understand yet, Luffy, while stating he does not wish to be a hero, says that a person who wants to make others happy is good, but he still wonders why he wants to leave Egghead. Vegapunk says that the energy he seeks to find was what powered the ancient robot, and in trying to find it, he has had to explore the Void Century and ultimately discover the truth. Just then, they hear an explosion, and Vegapunk says that since he had delved too deep, the world government wants to kill him. He also speculates that CP0 has arrived, and further speculates they are responsible for that explosion, resulting in Jinbe and Vegapunk to tell Luffy what CP0 is compared to CP9. In the meantime, Lucci, Kaku, Stussy, and their troops have arrived in Fabrio phase, with Kaku left in awe over the futuristic island. The people see them and are left confused by their unique appearances and arrival as they note that 2 sea beasts were destroyed. Pythagoras tells Shaka that CP0 managed to invade Egghead, causing Usopp and Nami to freak out. Seeing how they were so willing to sacrifice their ship and use S-Bear to strike against them, Shaka decides to respond in kind. He orders all researchers to evacuate and has Atlas head back to the lava phase while also having S-Shark and the Seraphim clones of Dracule Mihawk and Boei Hancock dubbed S-Hawk and S-Snake respectively, ready for battle, with Sentomaru in charge of commanding them. Back in the scrapyard, Vegapunk asks Luffy if he will take him off the island, to which the latter ultimately accepts, even though the deciding factor was because Vegapunk's head is so strange. Nevertheless, Vegapunk expresses his gratitude and tells them to bring Jewelry Bonnie with them to Lava Phase, and that they should all leave before Fabrio Phase becomes a battlefield. With that, Vegapunk teleports away, leaving Luffy and Chopper surprised. Meanwhile, the CP0 agents are confronted by Vegapunk's holograms. Their guns fail to work and Kaku's attacks are proven futile as well, even though he was enthusiastic over fighting something like a space monster. Stussy tells everyone that it is just a hologram, much to their annoyance that she did not mention that fact sooner. Lucci admits that Stussy is well informed, and she says being on Egghead is nostalgic for her. Kaku decides to fly above the cloud that Lava Phase is on, but Stussy points out 2 lines on the cloud. She then says that if someone crosses that line, then lasers will be fired, as what Kaku passed was the Frontier Dome that serves as an interception system that protects Lava Phase. Kaku ends up getting blasted and falls back down to the ground, prompting both him and Lucci to tell her not to be so coy and tell them these things beforehand. Eventually, Atlas arrives on the scene and tries to fight them, but Shaka warns her that she is no match for them, and he is proven correct when Lucci transforms into his hybrid form and attacks Atlas with Rokuogen, destroying half of her face in the process. Atlas collapses, prompting all the researchers to start evacuating, as Lucci notes that Atlas is still alive. Just then, Luffy and the others arrive on top, and he and Lucci lock eyes. All of the researchers start fleeing after witnessing Atlas fall to rob Lucci, whom Chopper remembers. Lucci's attack makes Jinbe realize that CP0 came to kill Dr. Vegapunk, but Luffy asks Lucci why he is here. Lucci points out that Egghead is still under world government jurisdiction, and Chopper tells Luffy that they need to go. Kaku expresses his annoyance at encountering the Straw Hat Pirates again and Jewelry Bonnie, but he tells Lucci that since Luffy is considered an emperor now, he cannot engage him in combat without permission, something Stussy agrees with. Luffy, instead, has his presence reported to headquarters. After Luffy leaves Bonnie in Jinbe's care, he runs over to the downed Atlas in shock and asks Chopper to tend to her, which he does, but he later states that Frankie may be better suited to handling the likes of her. Lucci tells Luffy to stay out of government affairs, but Luffy tells him that Atlas was kind to him and to his group. At Marine headquarters, Sakazuki is told that the Straw Hat Pirates are on Egghead, causing him to wonder if Vegapunk called them because he had anticipated that they had been coming for him. He learns that Kizaru is already en route to Egghead and he orders that Lucci not engage the Straw Hat Pirates at any cost. Unfortunately for him, Lucci, having grown fearful of Luffy's power, does indeed start fighting Luffy. Everyone tries to take cover from their duel as Vegapunk's other satellites and the Straw Hat Pirates watch the fight from lava phase. They notice that Lucci looks different now, and Shaka says that Lucci has awakened his devil fruit, and sometimes it can drastically rob the user of their personality, which is the reason why Lucci refused to wait until getting permission to engage Luffy, then appears behind his satellites and the Straw Hats, and he asks the crew if they know what Luffy's new form is called, as he too had gone into his awakened form. Nami says she does not know and assumes it is just part of the Gomu Gomu no Mamai, but Vegapunk tells her that the name does not exist in the ancient devil fruit encyclopedia, much to her shock. As they watch, Vegapunk tells the crew that Luffy's appearance resembles an ancient god, which Sanji finds incredulous to believe. Vegapunk, however, continues saying that the god is the warrior of liberation, the one who is always playful and who makes others smile, the sun god Nika. Nami admits she has never heard the name before, which Vegapunk says is because it was erased from history, but according to him, if the people yearn for it, then its existence will never disappear. Vegapunk says that the desires of all things are born in the world and that devil fruits are in the same boat. He tells the group that devil fruits are the embodiment of what people wish they could become, and the reason why the sea, which he calls the mother of all nature, makes devil fruit users unable to swim is because it considers these wishes to transcend the world people wish to live in as abnormalities. His theory leaves the Straw Hat crew completely stunned. During Vegapunk's speech, Luffy and Lucci were fighting one another in their awakened states, with the fight being very similar to Luffy's fight with Kaido. As they fight, though, Sentomaru arrives and asks Vegapunk what he is supposed to do since he believes CP0 is supposed to be their allies. Vegapunk explains that they have come to kill him and asks if he can drive them away from Egghead, which Sentomaru does not like the idea of since that would make him a traitor too. Vegapunk then reminds Sentomaru that in the past, he rescued Sentomaru from poverty, so he should decide what to do for himself. Ultimately, Sentomaru agrees to fight back against CP0. When Sentomaru arrives with S-Shark, S-Snake, and S-Hawk, CP0 see him and Kaku tries to order S-Bear to take him down, but Stussy says that is impossible. She is proven correct when Sentomaru takes control of S-Bear and has it attack CP0. Stussy says that the rank of authority the Seraphim follow is very different from the pacifistas. The five elders have the highest authoritative chip, Vegapunk and his satellites having the second, Sentomaru the third, and at the bottom whoever else. Additionally, not even the five elders can command the Seraphim over a Den Mushi. Kaku adds that Seraphim are a huge asset to the world government, which means they cannot destroy the cyborgs, and he curses Lucci for seemingly not thinking this through. Luffy uses an attack called Gomu Gomu no Mogura pistol that causes him to stretch his fist into the ground and redirect it up to Lucci's chest to hurt him. Sentomaru orders S-Snake to guide the Straw Hat Pirates to the Frontier Dome using vacuum rocket, and orders S-Hawk and S-Shark to hold off CP0. Chopper and Jinbe notice the Seraphim, and Jinbe is surprised to see that the former 7 warlords of the sea were cloned. Luffy sees Sentomaru, who asks if he is seriously going to take Vegapunk off the island, which Luffy confirms he will. Just then, Lucci stabs Sentomaru with Shugon and he falls, with Lucci saying that all they need to do is take down the control tower to get the Seraphim under their control. Luffy runs to Sentomaru and apologizes to him for distracting him. Sentomaru, however, tells Luffy that he foresaw Lucci's attack, but he was not fast enough to block it. Lucci tells Sentomaru that he needs him out of the picture if CP0 is to take command of the Seraphim. As he tries to attack him again, he gets intercepted by Luffy, who spins around and slams Lucci far away into a wall with a move the former calls Gomu Gomu no Dawn Whip. Jinbe calls to Luffy and tells him that they need to get to the real Vegapunk in order to save Atlas, but Luffy ends up spinning himself so hard that he cannot stop himself from doing so, and he even unintentionally heads towards the opposite direction of his crew. Meanwhile, the Seraphim continue to push back CP0, with Kaku saying that they are unstoppable, and even if they destroyed them, they would still consider it a loss. Stussy even adds that the most terrifying aspect of it all is that the Seraphim are still only children. Up on the lava phase, Frankie asks Vegapunk if the ability that S-Shark is using is the Sui Sui no Mai that Sinor Pink ate, and if it means Sinor Pink is dead now since there can be no 2 users of the same devil fruit at the same time. Vegapunk tells Frankie that Sinor Pink is in fact alive and confined and impelled down, and Frankie asks in response if Vegapunk copied his devil fruit. Vegapunk clarifies that he is only capable of replicating Zoan devil fruits, which he considers the process of doing so vastly different and more acceptable from Caesar Clown's Smile production. He also says that with unlimited resources, he could replicate even the special types of Zoan fruits, though he is not sure if he can get them to awaken. He says that he tried to replicate Logia fruits, but found it to be very complicated. For Paramecia fruits, however, he found an alternative method of replicating their powers by synthesizing blood from a Paramecia user's lineage factor, the green blood, flowing through S-shark, S-bear, and S-snake right now, which allows the latter two to use the Nekyu no Mai and Mero no Mai respectively. Vegapunk concludes saying that the Seraphim are the culmination of all of his ideas and may go down in history as the most powerful beings that ever existed in the world. Frankie is left in awe as Nami realizes that this was the reason the 7 warlords of the sea had been abolished, while Usopp panics over the nature of what Vegapunk has just created, with Sanji and Robin even adding that they consider the Seraphim a threat to them. Down in Fabrio phase, Lucci recovers and charges for Sentomaru once again, but Luffy intercepts him again and tries to bite down on him. Lucci sidesteps him and Luffy fires the rubble he chomped down on at Lucci, who either tries to dodge or destroy. Luffy then backs up into a pipe that he makes rubber and fires himself at Lucci at rocket speed in a move he calls Gomu Gomu no Dawn Rocket, nailing him square in the chest. Lucci goes flying once again as he calls Luffy's devil fruit insanely powerful and that he's starting to lose consciousness. Chopper and Jinbe are then directed by S-Snake to the vacuum rocket, which will take them up to Laba phase. Jinbe thanks her and says that it is nice to see a kind version of Boa Hancock for a change, though S-Snake claims she was only following orders. With only 1 minute before the vacuum rocket departs, Chopper once again calls to Luffy. Sentomaru tells Luffy that he trusts Vegapunk with him and his crew, and he promises to help him escape. Luffy then heads for the rocket and changes back to normal. The speed of the rocket ends up waking Jewelry Bonnie up as they arrive in about 32 seconds, after which the rocket shuts down and the Frontier Dome becomes fortified, with all the researchers being told to barricade themselves until the intruders have been dealt with. As for Sentomaru, he ultimately passes out, which now means that CP0 can command the Seraphim. Stussy suggests they wait for the Marines, but Lucci says it will take too long. All they can do now is block the exits to ensure that neither Vegapunk nor the Straw Hat pirates escape. As for the Straw Hats, Nami asks why the world government wants Vegapunk dead if he is such a valuable ally to them, to which Vegapunk says that they fear he will turn his vast intellect against them, despite never having such intentions. Nonetheless, Usopp and Frankie agree to let Vegapunk on board their ship, with Frankie in particular gushing at the notion of Vegapunk inspecting his ship. Meanwhile, Luffy's group manage to find a place to get Atlas patched up as Bonnie leaves to confront Vegapunk once again, saying that if he cannot turn her father back to normal, then she has no choice left but to kill him, even though others noted that she had simply lashed out in anger. Out at sea, Kizaru makes his way to Egghead with a fleet of warships. He says that theoretically the Straw Hats teaming up with Vegapunk will make for an easy escape, but he does not intend for it to be so. Bartholomew Kuma crashes into the Red Line and falls to the Red Port. His sudden return after escaping Mary Geoise throws the port's citizens into confusion and turmoil. As he stands up despite the damage to his body, an announcement advises the citizens to avoid him and to evacuate the area. The Marines are contacted to confront him as his current programming and purpose are unknown. On Egghead, despite having ordered the troops and Seraphim to block off all possible escape routes, Rob Lucci says that the Frontier Dome is a real nuisance to him. Stussy asks Lucci if he is serious about ignoring the Marines' order to wait for backup. Lucci confirms, stating he does not acknowledge Luffy as an emperor. Meanwhile, in Laba phase, Shaka comments that CP0 is blocking off all exits, and has most likely destroyed all ships they could use to escape. Lilith is excited, however, at the prospect of fighting back and avenging Atlas, but Pythagoras points out that CP0 cannot reach them. Shaka advises Lilith against going out to attack them. Edison announces a new invention idea, while York asks if something fun is happening. Lilith asks Shaka why they cannot fight back, and Shaka tells her that their main objective is ensuring that Dr. Vegapunk, who is the main body, escapes unharmed. As such, he views himself and the other satellites as expendable, a statement with which Vegapunk himself seems to disagree but feels that Lilith running off on her own will just cause more trouble. Vegapunk apologizes to Sentomaru for what happened to him. When Pythagoras mentions another ally on the island, Edison advises against it because calling said ally would mean they would have no place to hide if they end up in the world government's sights. Nonetheless, Vegapunk calls the ally and they respond that they will help, as they have been waiting for this day. Edison remarks that escape should be easy now, and Lilith says she will take everyone to the port with Vegaforce 01. Vegapunk then turns to the Straw Hats, whom he has finally freed, and asks that they take all 7 of them to the Thousand Sunny, with mixed feelings from the crew. Meanwhile, in the lab's interior, Luffy and Chopper are chasing after Jewelry Bonnie, who mistakenly believes Vegapunk used bugs against her on purpose. Luffy tries to stop her because he promised to help Vegapunk escape unharmed just as he hears a noise. For some reason, the Frontier Dome's defenses have turned off. CP0 takes advantage of this sudden malfunction and infiltrates lava phase. After spotting the Thousand Sunny, Kaku tries to destroy it with Renkyaku Amain Dachi, but it gets blocked by Zoro, who is woken up from his nap in response. Kaku is surprised to see his old adversary again. As the satellites get the Frontier Dome back online, they realize that they were too late in keeping CP0 out. They also notice that unless they do something, they may lose their ride off the island, which means they may have to fight back. Luffy, Chopper, and Jinbe eventually reunite with the rest of the crew, and Luffy learns that they plan on leaving soon. He asks if they have seen Bonnie, and Robin realizes Vegapunk is missing. As it turns out, Bonnie is chasing Vegapunk, who desperately asks her to listen to what he has to say. Bonnie refuses and demands to know if Vegapunk can turn Kuma back to the way he was. Vegapunk confesses that it is impossible to do so, but adds that there is a reason for it. Somewhere in the New World, the Kid Pirates find themselves approaching Elbaf, while at G14, Doll tells Garp that she cannot afford to spare any of her men, especially since he plans on confronting Blackbeard. Garp tells her to not be so uptight as she asks if he cleared his mission with the brass, which he says he did not, much to her dismay. Still, he announces that he has already arrived at the base, and he then calls for Helmeppo. The former tells Garp that Kobe has been kidnapped and how powerless he feels that he could not stop it, but Garp tells him to get on board as he plans on launching an attack on Hachinosu to rescue him. Jewelry Bonnie changes into a child and starts crying that she broke something. Feeling sympathetic, Vegapunk walks up to her to see if she is okay and calls for medical attention, but this turns out to be a trap from Bonnie. Once Vegapunk gets close enough, she changes her appearance to look muscular using a special move called Distortion Future, and tries to attack Vegapunk with a pipe. She misses as Vegapunk pleads with her to spare him, but she uses another attack called Toshi Tuki, and this time she hits Vegapunk. As a result, Vegapunk's age gets literally knocked out of him and assumes various shapes, while Vegapunk himself regresses to that of an infant. Bonnie picks up the now helpless scientist and explains that her powers do not affect living things permanently, but now she wants him to tell her exactly why he took Bartholomew Kuma's personality from him. Vegapunk says that if he does tell her, the truth will only hurt her. He also tells her that he promised Kuma to keep his secret from her no matter what. As he says that, Kuma himself starts climbing the red line. He gets blown off but continues to fight back against the Marines. Back at Egghead, Bonnie refuses to believe Vegapunk's words, especially when he says that Kuma voluntarily gave up his humanity, but no matter how hard she tries, he refuses to say anything more about his secret. Bonnie then sees a huge door with a bare paw print on it and deduces it is connected to Kuma. She opens the door by aging the lock and finds a huge paw-shaped bubble. This causes Vegapunk to flash back to the past when he was with Kuma and how he told him a story about a scientist from West Blue hypothesizing that a person weighs 21 grams less after dying, indicating that the lost weight is the person's soul. He found the story fascinating and wonders if things like memories and imagination have mass and volume too, intending to use Kuma's Nikyu no Mi powers to help prove that, as it allows him to take intangible concepts and give them physical form, and even transfer them to others. Of course, Kuma surmised that Vegapunk wants Kuma's memories, and at first he refused, but it seems he ultimately gave in. In the present, Vegapunk begs Bonnie not to touch the bubble, calling it nothing but pain strong enough to kill someone. Bonnie, however, tells Vegapunk that she is very familiar with her father's powers, and that what is in front of her is his memories. While on the lava phase, Nami is freaking out that Rob Lucci was able to invade the facility, but Usopp says that as long as Zoro and Brook are guarding the Thousand Sunny, they will be okay even if the battle is 2v3. That is, though, before Shaka points out that the Seraphim have joined, leaving the battle 2v7. Interestingly, Shaka tells the Straw Hats that the Seraphim have the limited capacity to make decisions on their own, and that is most likely the reason why they are backing up CP0 on the lava phase, despite not being ordered to by them. This poses as a positive thing for the Straw Hats, as it means that if Vegapunk's satellites can issue a command to them, they can regain control as their authority is higher than both CP0's and Sentomaru. Edison and Lilith head off to try and regain control, with Sanji and Frankie taking off to back them up. On the Thousand Sunny, Zoro and Brook witness Kaku in his awakened state, but Zoro remains confident that he can handle him while Brook watches the ship. Kaku attacks Zoro with a move called Kyoku Bigen Kirimanjaro, swirling his neck around while firing his nose. Zoro, however, blocks the attack and deflects his head. Lucci then orders the Seraphim to destroy the lava phase before Vegapunk arrives, and they start laying waste to the lab. Suddenly, Stussy bites on Kaku's neck and puts him to sleep. Lucci is left confused by Stussy's actions as she tells Lucci that she will be putting him to sleep too while large bat wings sprout from her back. As it turns out, Stussy is actually a clone of Miss Buckingham Stussy, who was a member of the Rocks Pirates and the very first successful clone of Mads. Though completely caught off guard by Stussie's sudden betrayal, Rob Lucci moves to attack her, but she sidesteps him using Kami Izanshin and jams her lipstick tube, which contains a piece of sea stone, into his neck to prevent him from transforming. Stussie then bites Lucci's neck, putting him to sleep as well. Zoro and Brook are both left speechless by this surprising turn of events as Stussy contacts Shaka to inform him that she incapacitated both agents, revealing that she was the ally doctor Vegapunk reached out to previously. The rest of the Straw Hats are left amazed that Vegapunk was able to sneak a spy of his own into the world government's intelligence branch without them ever knowing her true identity, though Shaka reveals he never intended her to join them. Despite having removed the threat, Stussy tells Shaka that her authority is the same as Lucci's, so she cannot override his orders nor stop the Seraphim. Edison, however, tells Stussy to fall back and let him and Lilith handle the Seraphim. Zoro and Brook try to stop them too, just as Lilith exits the lab. Just as she is about to issue an order, S-Hawk spots her and tries to kill her, but Zoro protects her by clashing blades with S-Hawk. Edison takes the opportunity to issue the order for the Seraphim to stand down just as S-Shark tries to shoot him. Thankfully, he is saved by Sanji, and the Seraphim finally stand down. Stussy then informs Shaka that she has bound Lucci and Kaku with sea stone, and he asks Stussy to join them, which she accepts. Meanwhile, Luffy and Chopper wander the lab in search of Bonnie and Vegapunk. Meanwhile, on Sphinx, Whitebeard's hometown, Marco is informed by the people that while he was away, the Marines invaded trying to claim Whitebeard's treasure, with some of the people calling the bunch no different from other pirates. The leader of the attack was Marine Captain Rattel, who showed no qualms telling the people of Sphinx that because they are not affiliated with the world government, he would not hesitate to kill all of them in order to claim Whitebeard's treasure. To prove his point, he tried to shoot an old lady who badmouthed him, but thankfully he was sent flying away by an unexpected savior in the form of Edward Weevil. Weevil's phenomenal strength ensured that the invading Marines were forced to retreat, if only to wait for backup to handle him. Marco thanks Weevil for his actions as his mother. The original Miss Buckingham Stussy, now known as Miss Buckin, shows up and tells him that Admiral Ryokuju was dispatched to aid the Marines and that, as a result, Weevil ended up getting captured. She tells Marco to rescue Weevil and find Whitebeard's inheritance for her, but Marco's tone suggests his doubt to Buckin's claim that Weevil is Whitebeard's son. This causes Buckin to say that the only person who can confirm her words is none other than Vegapunk himself. Meanwhile, Admiral Kizaru is accompanied by one of the 5 elders, St. J. Garcia Saturn. Kizaru asks him if he has ever met Vegapunk before, and the latter says he had once met him a long time ago, and now he feels what is transpiring now is a shame. World government officials find themselves under attack by a different model of pacifista, this one capable of generating a bubble shield from its hands that can defend against any attack, causing it to be called the strongest shield doctor Vegapunk has created. This model is dubbed Mark I, far surpassing the prototypes used during the Summit War of Marineford. The attacking pacifista, PXII-041, demands the agents surrender and move to Factory B. They do so as they question who was able to give it commands. The one responsible turns out to be Sentomaru, who has woken up and is currently being treated for his wounds. He realizes that the Frontier Dome has been closed and he can no longer contact Vegapunk, and on top of that, the Marines have been looping their communications so he cannot get any updates. Still, now that he has rebelled, he will continue to do as he pleases. As such, he orders all 50 Mark I pacifista to mobilize and ensure that the Straw Hat pirates escape Egghead safely with Dr. Vegapunk, and also to keep an eye on the coast as the Marines are acting strange. Meanwhile, Bonnie kicks Vegapunk out of the room with the giant paw. Against Vegapunk's advice, she interacts with the paw to access Kuma's memories. There, she finds a child Kuma crying in a field. In the labo phase, Luffy is resting after all of his running around and fighting, which also resulted in his shoes breaking. He asks where Vegapunk and Jewelry Bonnie are, to which Shaka says that Bonnie is still within the building, as it is constantly being monitored. Zoro, Brook, and Stussy make their way inside with new outfits, and Shaka tells everyone present, including Atlas, who was repaired, that the Stella has disappeared, and also that they have lost control of the Frontier Dome, meaning no one can leave lest they be destroyed by the security system. Shaka tells everyone that they need to find the Stella while he himself repairs the Frontier Dome. Frankie asks if searching would be pointless since he is not popping up on any monitor, and Shaka admits this to be true, surmising that the Seraphim caused some damage that may have caused their Compiko surveillance to either be incapacitated or moved out of position, resulting in a blind spot where the Stella may be. Pythagoras contacts Shaka and tells him that there is no one on the 3rd floor in Building C, and he asks him to check the next one. Nami decides to go and find him, thinking that the faster they do, the faster they can leave the island, and she hopes to get some treasure from him. The other Straw Hats and Stussy decide to help find him, but when Zoro decides to go, Sanji and Chopper stop him, knowing he will just get lost himself. As such, Luffy and Zoro are left behind to watch over the captive Lucci and Kaku. Meanwhile, in room Nikyu, Bonnie finds herself within the memories of her father. She sees him as a child crying, but is unable to do anything as she watches some other people force him to come back, saying they will all die if he does not. Kuma vehemently refuses, saying he would rather die himself. He gets caught and beaten by the other people, where he begs to be saved as Bonnie watches with tears in her eyes. She gets ejected from the bubble and she realizes she needs a strong resolve to keep watching his memories, determined to make sure she understands everything about her father. As Pythagoras continues to search for the stela, someone approaches him from behind, and an explosion goes off in part of the lab. On his news balloon, Morgans has received information about what is transpiring on Egghead. He decides to write an article portraying Luffy as Dr. Vegapunk's kidnapper while the world government are trying to save him. He believes that if the world finds out that the world government is trying to kill a man who has changed the world so much with his accomplishments, there will be severe backlash, and hopes to be rewarded by the government by painting them in a good light. Nefertari Vivi, who was with him, angrily tells him that Luffy would never do something like kidnapping, and she voices her disgust with his newspaper. Wapol, who was also there, begs her to keep her voice down, fearing that the government has agents watching and listening in on them. Morgans tells Vivi she has no right to interfere with his work after she spent the previous day crying her eyes out. He also tells her that he does not care if his stories are lies or the truth, as long as they are entertaining, since he is the only one who can shake up the world. Shaka tries to reach Pythagoras following the explosion he heard, but he receives no response. He sends a Kimiko to search the tower, but someone takes it out, cutting off the security image. Luffy realizes that the communication device he is wearing does not operate any longer, as if all communications have been cut off. Luffy tells Shaka as he tries to contact the other satellites, but one by one, all of the Kimiko go off, making him think that someone else is in the lava phase causing trouble. Throughout the lava phase, everyone is searching for Vegapunk. In Tower of Floor 3, Nami and Brook are traveling with Edison. Nami gets sidetracked by diamonds she finds and wants to keep despite Edison telling her that their priority is finding the stela. When he tells her that they were man-made, Nami is left in awe over such achievements. On Floor 2, Chopper and Robin are with Atlas, who reveals that her face is a mask and she can replace whatever part of her gets damaged. Robin then notices something which Atlas reveals is an artificial organ, which amazes Chopper, though Robin notes she thought Vegapunk had gotten chopped up, much to Atlas' discomfort. In the B Tower, Sanji and Jinbe have gone with Stussy, with Sanji swooning over her and asking if she would call him a dog, while she flirtatiously reminds him to find Vegapunk. Jinbe acknowledges how huge the part of the lab they are in is as Stussy reveals that they are on the weapons manufacturing floor, so they can't be setting off any shockwaves. As for the last group, which consists of Usopp, Frankie, Lilith, and York, the four head to Tower C. They end up finding Pythagoras' body, albeit with his head missing. Thankfully, Pythagoras turned out to be fine, as he had detached his head from his body before he sustained damage. He starts freaking out over what happened just as York walks over to S-Snake. She tells her to wait outside since Edison ordered her to stand down, but instead, S-Snake petrifies York. A confused Lilith tries to get her to stop, but S-Snake ignores and fires a laser at the four. It destroys the bridge they were on and they all fall, though they land safely. Lilith tries to reach Shaka but fails to do so, and when Frankie suggests they fight back, Lilith tells him it is impossible to beat a Seraphim. Back in Tower A, Luffy and Shaka meet up with Zoro as they see that S-Bear and S-Hawk have breached the room. Despite Shaka's attempts to make them stop, the two Seraphim open fire. Thankfully, they evade their attacks while also saving the unconscious Lucci and Kaku, who were in the Seraphim's sights. Shaka begins to fear that Vegapunk himself is commanding the Seraphim if the satellites cannot get them to stop. He also realizes that someone is trying to kill everyone by trapping them and cutting off communications, and that they set up this situation very carefully. Lucci and Kaku then wake up and ask Luffy and Zoro to set the two of them free, offering that they form a truce and work together to survive. Luffy and Zoro respond with a look of disgust. Zoro tells Lucci and Kaku that he does not see a future where after they uncuff them, they would let them cuff them later. Kaku states that they will let them restrain them again, which seems to convince Luffy to help them out, despite Zoro claiming that Kaku is lying to them. S-Hawk then unleashes a powerful flying slash attack with his leg, causing Zoro to realize that the devil fruit power S-Hawk is using is the Supa Supa no Mai, used by former Baroque Works agent Daz Bonens. After moving out of the way, Kaku uses the fact that he has to save them again as reason for letting them help if it means escaping alive. Shaka asks the two agents what their mission is, and Lucci bluntly replies that their mission is to terminate Vegapunk and his satellites, much to Kaku's annoyance that he would give away that information so freely when he was trying to convince the enemy to set them free. Shaka asks if Stussy is on that hit list given her betrayal, which Lucci also confirms. All of a sudden, they hear Nami screaming, which Zoro realizes it means that the other seraphim are on the loose. Ultimately, Luffy agrees to set Lucci and Kaku free and asks Shaka for the keys. Shaka gives Luffy the keys, saying that he will trust his judgment as long as the Stella escapes safely. Luffy turns to Lucci and asks him if he will not go after his friends once the seraphim are dealt with. Zoro does not believe they will fall for a taunt like that, but Lucci does, telling Luffy that he wants to kill him first and then go after his friends. S-Bear then fires an Ursus shock, but at that point both CP0 agents have been freed. Luffy assumes Gear 4 bound men and uses Gomu Gomu no Kong gun, while Lucci assumes his hybrid form and uses Rokushiki Oji Rokuwagen to simultaneously attack S-Bear. Zoro and Kaku team up against S-Hawk, blowing him back with Rengoku Onigiri and Renkyaku Hakurai, respectively. Meanwhile, deep within the lab itself, it is revealed that all of the CP5, CP7, and CP8 agents that had been sent to the island have all been imprisoned for the last 2 months. Apparently, when the agents finished their investigation of the island, they tried to leave but were attacked by the Sea Beast weapons, who forcefully brought them back. All of the other agents that followed suit ended up meeting the same fate trying to find their colleagues. The kicker was that they all assumed Dr. Vegapunk was responsible, but he is revealed to have been imprisoned with the rest of them. Vegapunk admits he had no idea any of this was happening, and finds it baffling that word of his research into the poneglyphs was leaked to the world government somehow. The Marines are then revealed to be deploying about 100 ships of all sizes from Branch G9 en route to Egghead. In a small port, on a certain island, a kid asks Shanks if he can take him with him on his next journey. Shanks refuses, since the kid is a little hot-headed, much to his annoyance. Rockstar arrives and informs him that they are under attack, and if they should fight back. Shanks ultimately agrees, regretting that he let it get to this point due to him reconnecting with some old friends of his whom he believed to be dead. His friends turn out to be Dory and Brogy, the former captains of the giant warrior pirates who finally left Little Garden and returned to Elbaf, the island Shanks is currently on. The two giants happily agree to help him out, as Shanks asks Rockstar to send a message to their attacker, who is used to ask Kid, the message being surrender the road, poneglyph rubbing he has, or risk a fight with him. On the outskirts of the island, Kid realizes that practically every pirate ship they see belongs to Big Shots. Killer reveals that the last time they tried to fight him, it was a completely one-sided fight. Kid never even got a chance to see Shanks. This time, Killer fears that Kid might die in this next confrontation. Kid, however, is not scared, believing he will die only if he loses the fight. Sentomaru orders that everyone on Egghead flee the island. When they ask him why, Sentomaru tells everyone about Ohara, which was completely destroyed because they defied the world government by studying poneglyphs. If the world government is deadly serious about killing Vegapunk, it is because they have weighed all of the potential scientific consequences and have chosen to eliminate him anyway. As such, he is very certain something even worse than that day will occur on Egghead. In his mind, he desperately asks Luffy to hurry up and leave the island with Vegapunk. While in the command room, Luffy, Lucci, Zoro, and Kaku are struggling to do any lasting damage to S-Bear and S-Hawk. It then occurs to Zoro that the two seraphim resemble King the Conflagration from the Beast's pirates. Shaka is surprised to learn that Kaido had a Lunarian in his crew, but Zoro tells him that he did not know what exactly he was. Shaka realizes King is Albert, who fled Punk Hazard with Kaido. Shaka confirms that the seraphim were made using King's lineage factor, prompting Zoro to tell Luffy, Lucci, and Kaku to watch out for the flames on the seraphim's backs because when they go out, they get faster but lose their defense. He apologizes to everyone for not seeing the connection before, especially since King's defining characteristics are his dark skin, black wings, white hair, and fire, much to the other three's clear annoyance that he did not. At that point, Shaka leaves the room, telling Luffy he has an idea as to where Vegapunk is. In Building A, Nami's group has crossed paths with S-Shark, who has knocked Brook's head off his body and heavily damaged Edison. As a result, Nami decides to fight back against the Seraphim, even if it looks like Jinbe. She summons Zeus and has him use Reitai to electrocute S-Shark from the inside, which seems to hurt him, while she sobs and apologizes to Jinbe. Unfortunately, S-Shark dives into the ground just as Brook reattaches his head to his neck. He warns Nami to watch out, but S-Shark emerges and grabs her. But just as Brook is about to retaliate, Sanji charges in and sends S-Shark flying in a rage, determined to beat the Seraphim to a pulp for hurting Nami. In Building C, Lilith is furious that S-Snake petrified York, so she shoots her with her bubble gun. It grazes her shoulder but causes her to fall over, and Lilith says it is because the bubble was made from the energy of the sea, and since S-Snake has blood synthesized from an existing devil fruit user, she can fall prey to the sea. Frankie tries to subdue her, but because S-Snake was just grazed, she gets back up quickly and knocks Frankie away. She fires a laser at Usopp and Lilith, but Frankie traps her under a large bubble. However, S-Snake pleads that she is suffering, causing Frankie to drop his guard long enough for S-Snake to break free and petrify part of his body with perfume femur. Lilith fires several bubbles at her, but she dodges them all and charms both her and Usopp before turning them into stone with Mero Mero Mello. Underground, Shaka finds all of the Cypher Pole agents and Vegapunk contained in a lab that was previously used for devil fruit research. Shaka is left perplexed by this revelation as Vegapunk asks him who is currently with him. Shaka turns around to see who he is talking about, only to be shot in the head, much to everyone's horror. Shaka collapses as Vegapunk hears footsteps, with a look of horror etched onto his face. Stussy informs Sentomaru that Admiral Kizaru is en route to Egghead, and that CP0 was to wait for his arrival after eliminating Dr. Vegapunk and his satellites. Sentomaru comments on how serious the world government is, while Stussy tells him that this event may become even bigger than Ohara's destruction, the main reasons being that Vegapunk continued studying the research of Ohara, and that Egghead has the firepower to repel an attack, which Ohara could not. Before she hangs up, Stussy tells Sentomaru to call her if anything unexpected happens since all communication has been cut off in the lava phase. After she hangs up, Sentomaru tells the islanders that they can't hesitate, and they all must flee the island before the Marines arrive, which they all start to do. In Building C, Frankie, who is only partially petrified, demands S-Snake undo the petrification she did to him. Lilith and Usopp, claiming that he can still fight with the part of them that isn't stone. S-Snake ignores him, however, and turns to Pythagoras. He demands to know who ordered S-Snake to do this, but all she does is stomp on and crush him, resulting in a huge explosion. As she starts to walk away, Frankie tries calling her again. On the second floor of Building A, Chopper, Robin, and Atlas are flying around looking for Vegapunk. Robin has deduced that the Seraphim are rampaging and the others may be fighting them off, which means those people cannot move from wherever they are situated. Atlas says that she may have an idea as to where the Stella is, and the two follow her lead. On the third floor, Nami tries to help Edison while Brook decides to go look for Vegapunk, while Sanji continues his fight with S-Shark. On the fourth floor, Zoro realizes that S-Bear and S-Hawk's flames are not going out, but Luffy notices that S-Hawk has left the room. Lucci says that S-Hawk is choosing to prioritize killing the weaker members of the crew and save the more troublesome members for later, thinking they will be too rattled to fight effectively. Zoro immediately runs after S-Hawk, and Luffy tells Kaku, whom he comically calls Usopp, much to Kaku's annoyance, to go with him since he can get lost easily. Luffy resumes fighting S-Bear, but Lucci tells him that this is not an enemy that he can defeat with brute force. Meanwhile, Bonnie is still looking through her father's memories, and what she is seeing has brought her down to her knees and she begins crying profusely. Around 3 months ago, someone contacted the 5 elders and told them that Dr. Vegapunk was researching the contents of the Void Century. CP5 was dispatched to investigate, but they found no evidence, yet the ship that left with them suddenly disappeared. CP7 and CP8 were dispatched to investigate, but they too disappeared. Then, the mysterious person contacted the 5 elders again, and eventually they came to believe that Vegapunk had betrayed the world government. Choosing to assassinate him, CP0 was dispatched to handle the situation, and one of the elders chose to go in person as they expected Vegapunk to retaliate. Reinforcements were requested from various marine branches, meaning war was looming on the horizon. However, the Straw Hat Pirates' presence has made the entire organization uneasy. In any case, the outcome of these particular events would shake up the entire world. Down in the hidden lab, the person who shot Shaka enters the lab as Vegapunk demands answers. The person turns out to be York, who evilly tells Vegapunk that she wants to become a world noble. Vegapunk angrily asks why she would want to be such a thing since she has been to marry GOIs in the past and seen how horrible they are, but York just laughs and says that he sounds like Shaka, though she now considers him dead. York then tells Vegapunk that she thinks it's too confusing that so many people are walking around calling themselves Vegapunk, and that the world will be better off with just one. A few hours ago, York learned that the world government wants her dead too, but fortunately she has a plan to counter it. She orders the 4 Seraphim to terminate everyone trapped in the lab except for herself, the Stella, and their hostages. She does acknowledge that she is not strong enough to fend for herself should the others find out she was responsible for letting the Seraphim run amok, which is why she ordered S-Snake to petrify her as if York had her guard down and then undo it when no one is looking. She then tells her the places in the lab she does not want destroyed before sending the Seraphim on their way. Unknown to everyone on the island, a ship belonging to the Blackbeard pirates arrives off the shore. At Elbaf, several pirates loyal to Shanks tell Eustace Kid that he will have to go through all of them first if he ever wants to see Shanks. Kid is unconvinced that the pirate standing before him, Captain Ballfingers Giratini of the Puddle Pirates, Bandleader Memorial Blade, Fugar of the Social Club, and Princess Trembling Peru of the Bourgeois Purse are fleets of the Red Hair Pirates, but Killer reminds him that there are several big names in the fleet, so he should not let his guard down. Shanks tells the other pirates to clear out so they do not get harmed, revealing that despite their reputations as fierce pirates, the subordinates of the Red Hair Pirates are very weak, and they need the Emperor and his crew to protect them. The subordinates cheer for Shanks as he boards his ship. He asks if Kid's wounds from Wano have fully healed, but Yasopp says he looks fine if he is willing to pick a fight. Shanks accepts this and asks for any updates on Blackbeard, where he is told that he left Hachinosu, with Shanks remarking he was sure he would pop up in Wano. Following this, Shanks is given information on Kid, and he calls him a troublemaker. When Kid forms his railgun to launch damned punk at the fleet, Shanks foresees the damage it will cause, warning the fleet to spread out and telling Dory and Brogy to watch his rear while he moves for Kid's ship. Moving to stop Kid's attack, Shanks approaches the Victoria Punk, catching Kid off guard and instantly defeating him with Kamisari. The Kid pirates panic out over their captain and combatant being taken down and beg Shanks not to kill Kid, even giving up their road poneglyph rubbings to appease him. Shanks, however, ignores them and jumps from the ship while Dory and Brogy perform their combined attack Hakuku. Completely destroying the Victoria Punk, they tell the Kid pirates that if they point a loaded gun at someone's hometown, they better expect to meet the same fate. The Kid pirates fall into the sea, while the narration says that at Elbaf, the Kid pirates, led by Eustace Captain Kid, who has a bounty of barely 3 billion, were completely destroyed. On Hachinosu, several pirates report that Koby has escaped prison and is now running free. Several of them are thrilled by this revelation, as Koby has a rather high bounty placed on him by Cross Guild for a Marine-ranked captain 5 stars, 1 star equals 1 treasure chest of loot. Suddenly, the Skull Rock face starts speaking, saying that it is sensing a tickle on the left side of its chest, which is where they all keep their slaves. The pirates realize all of their slaves are trying to flee, but are told that they need to be kept alive or Blackbeard will be informed. The voice, as it turns out, belongs to Avalo Pizarro, who has consumed the Shima Shima no Mai, meaning he can now merge with the island itself, allowing him to see, feel, and hear everything that transpires on the island. Koby quickly realizes that his and the other slaves' positions have been revealed, so to protect everyone, he offers himself up as a decoy to keep the heat off the others. Shiryu, who was with Pizarro, points out that he could just catch Koby and the slaves all by himself since he has merged with Hachinosu, but Pizarro refuses, telling Shiryu that Blackbeard gets mad at him for causing too much damage. Vasco Shot asks if he can handle the situation then, as he too has eaten a devil fruit, the Gabu 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 no Mai, which lets him manipulate alcohol. However, because of that, Shot's idea is that he sets the town on fire so they have nowhere to run, resulting in Pizarro scolding him and telling him that that would also upset Blackbeard, especially since they just finished repairing the damage from the Rocky Port incident. Shot, at least, points out he would be more careful than San Juan Wolf due to his size, as he has consumed the Deka no Mai, which allows him to enlarge his already giant body. Koby's plan works and he starts being chased by pirates, though he realizes that escaping on foot will be impossible, but thinks it is worth it for the sake of the others. In a flashback, it is revealed that the reason Blackbeard kidnapped Koby was so he could use him as a bargaining chip. He came up with a plan where he would have Hachinosu recognized as a full-fledged nation by the blessing of the world government, and become its king, and in exchange, Blackbeard will return Koby to them unscathed and with grace. Koby calls his plan insane and that he is wasting his time with him since he is a member of SWORD. When Blackbeard questions what that is, Kuzan, who is present with him, informs him what SWORD really is. According to Kuzan, Marines affiliated with SWORD are not recognized as such on paper. Koby and the other members have surrendered their Marine codes, and since they have resigned their commission, they can operate without certain protocols holding them back, such as being able to pick a fight with an emperor without authorization. He also reveals that the world government can disavow members of SWORD at any point in time, meaning that an attempt to use Koby as leverage would be a moot point for the Marines could very easily sever all responsibilities and ties they have with Koby. Though Blackbeard understands and is even impressed of this new knowledge, he refuses to change his mind about his plan, confident that Koby's status as a hero would mean the world government would not cut him loose, or the public will be enraged. He even says that if things go south for him, he will do significant damage to the world government's reputation, and as insurance, he will have Koby's captivity publicly leaked, so neither the Marines nor the government could deny that fact. Until then, he wanted Koby locked up. As Koby continues to be chased, he remembers how Perona was the one who freed him in return for his help freeing Gecko Moria, who was also imprisoned. He then hears an explosion and learns that Marines are on the island, though he humbly believes they did not come just for him. The attacking Marines prove to be very strong, with one of them getting his head chopped off only to reveal that he is made of clay, and therefore impervious. On top of that, some of the buildings start moving, which several pirates see is the result of a woman named Kujaku. a Marine Rear Admiral and the granddaughter of Great Staff Officer Tsuru, who ate the Muchi Muchi Nuchi no Mai, which lets her tame anything she whips, including inanimate objects. Kobe is ultimately cornered, but when the pirates try to shoot him, their gunpowder explodes into flowers. Several of them realize they are Vegapunk's GP flowers, and the one responsible was Hibari, a sniper. She contacts Prince Grus, who has eaten the Gunyo Gunyo no Mai that allows him to manipulate clay, hence the clay soldiers, and he informs her that both he and Kujaku have the situation under control. By this point, several pirates have been trapped by the buildings Kujaku forced to move and surround. With no means to escape, a marine ship launches itself high into the air, commanded by Monkey D. Garp. Garp jumps off the ship and completely decimates the pirates with his galaxy impact attack, calling it retribution for kidnapping his irreplaceable protégé, who he considers the future of the Marines. Garp lands on the island and Prince Grus uses his devil fruit powers to cushion Garp's ship's fall. He tells the pirates that if they so much as blink, he will hurt them bad, only to see that everyone was already unconscious. He comments that he feels he has lost his touch, which leaves the other pirates incredulous after all the damage he caused. He sees Kobe and Hibari run to him as Helmeppo cries tears of joy that Kobe is okay. However, Hibari is suddenly frozen solid, courtesy of Kuzan, who is revealed to be the 10th Titanic captain of the Blackbeard pirates. Kobe begs for Kuzan to thaw out Hibari, but he refuses, saying that it would look bad for them if Kobe escaped while Blackbeard was away. As it turns out, roughly a year after Kuzan's battle with Sakazuki for the position of Fleet Admiral on Punk Hazard, the Blackbeard pirates crossed paths with Kuzan drinking in a bar. Blackbeard asks Kuzan why he froze his crew, including the massive San Juan Wolf, before demanding he undo it, but Kuzan tells him to calm down while warning him not to use the Gura Gura no Mai and risk shattering his frozen crew. Kuzan says his crew were the ones who decided to pick a fight with him. Eventually, the former admiral does thaw everyone out, and he ends up having a drink with Blackbeard and his crew as he talks about his battle against Akanu, showing off the loss of his left leg that he regularly has to replace using the Hi no Mai, while commenting that though Akanu was not as badly injured, he was not completely unscathed either. At one point, Katarina Devon asks Kuzan if he knows anything about the man marked by flames. When Kuzan inquires what she means, Jesus Burgess tells him about the road poneglyphs and how Kaido and Big Mom are known to have one each. However, they do not know the location of the other two, but heard a rumor that the man marked by flames has one. Kuzan jokingly says he is the one they are talking about. However, neither of them believes him, and Lafitte says that this man sails a pitch-black ship and anyone who sails close to him gets swallowed up by a whirlpool. Shiryu believes the man works for the world government, reasoning that they would want to hide one of the road poneglyphs to prevent other pirates from finding the One Piece. Kuzan tells the Blackbeard pirates that the poneglyphs only give him bitter memories, though he says he did not see a red poneglyph on Ohara. He mainly remembers his friend and Nico Robin, and how he chose to take fate into his own hands. The others are not moved by Kuzan's sob story as Lafitte asks Blackbeard if they should kill him and take his devil fruit for themselves. Kuzan hears this and gets angry, but Blackbeard tells him that he has no intention of doing so. In fact, he wants Kuzan to join his crew. Kuzan refuses to join up at first, but Blackbeard points out that he considers his pirate crew a gang of people looking out for their own interests. Besides, he does not work for the world government anymore, so he can do whatever he wants. In the present, Garp demands Kuzan thaw out Hibari, but he tells him that he has always admired how direct Garp is, and it is because of that he wants to do things on his own terms. He asks if Garp can seriously kill his former #1 protege to save his new favorite as he freezes him with Ice Ball, but Garp breaks out and reminds Kuzan that he taught him to live in the now. He then tells Kuzan that only weaklings lose their way as he grabs him by the face and slams him through the ground with a move called Blue Hole. Meanwhile, on Winter Island, Blackbeard has defeated Trafalgar Law and destroyed the Polar Tang. He tells Law that the pirates whose hearts he stole at Rocky Port to join the 7 warlords are still on Hachinosu, and he should probably kill him and bring his heart there as a trophy. As Teach debates on what to do once he has the Opi no Mai, Bepo attacks him in his Sulong form, which he was able to assume outside of a full moon thanks to a special drug Chopper gave him. He buys himself enough time to grab Law and jump into the ocean, but Law tells him to go back for the crew. Bepo tells him that he cannot do so, but he has faith they will survive as he desperately begs his captain not to die. The narration then declares that the Heart Pirates were soundly defeated on Winter Island. News of the death of Vice Admiral T-Bone starts spreading rapidly throughout the world. Sengoku asks Tsuru if the culprit has been found. However, she replies the culprit has not been found, though she is certain the family of the culprit will be financially secure following this. Sengoku is in disbelief that the people they swore to protect are betraying the Marines, but Tsuru considers it indeed believable. especially since T-Bone was killed in Peppy Kingdom, which is said to lose over 1,000 people a year to starvation. Of course, she is not defending the culprit, she is just saying that if this is what Buggy had in mind, they may have been underestimating him this whole time. Sengoku says that this means they need to stomp out the Cross Guild soon, or the Marines will become very weak morale-wise. Sengoku asks Hina where Garp is because he wants him to try out a new rice cracker flavor, but she tells him that he told her he was off to save Kobe, meaning that he was with Sword on Hachinosu, along with Kujaku, much to Sengoku and Saru's surprise and annoyance. On Karai-Bari Island, the man responsible for T-Bone's death meets with Buggy, where he reveals that his people received the payment for his bounty. Buggy praises him for his actions, even if it means the Marines will be looking for him, but the man says he is fine as long as his family survives. This leads to Buggy telling the man that he will induct him into his crew just as he is told that the Cross Guild's ship is finished. Much to his displeasure, Buggy's overzealous followers make him the mast of the ship, which severely enrages Crocodile and Dracule Mihawk. Following this, Crocodile and Mihawk punish Buggy by beating him up and dangling him from a hook while discussing the success Cross Guild is gaining. In order for the two of them to establish their utopia, though, they need money and power. Buggy speaks up and tells the two of them that they are going about their scheme the wrong way. Crocodile and Mihawk were surprised that Buggy would dare speak against them. Buggy tells the two that due to circumstances, neither he nor Shanks were able to go to Laugh-Tale. He admits he felt he could never measure up to Shanks back then, but he was surprised to learn that he was choosing not to go to Laugh-Tale, yet following Roger's execution. Buggy knows now that Shanks is finally making his move, and through some shape or form, both of them are on equal footing. As such, Buggy is reigniting his dream to become Pirate King, and suggests that all of them seek out the ultimate treasure in addition to their desired dream. Crocodile and Mihawk are left unmoved by Buggy's words, refusing to believe they would just carry him to the top, including having no interest to fight Shanks, Blackbeard, and Luffy, especially when he does not have a plan of his own. Buggy, however, says they just need to scramble for the treasure, and he is willing to prove this by contacting his entire crew via Den Mushi and announce that they will be moving to claim the One Piece. This ends up lighting a fire in several of the crew, as they all set out to sea for this very reason, though it leaves Crocodile and Mihawk furious that Buggy would pull off such a stunt. On Momoro Island, the vice-captains of the Revolutionary Army, Oceano Morley's subordinate, Ahiru Belo Betty's subordinate, Gambo Lindbergh's subordinate, and Jiron Karasu's subordinate notice a ship in the distance and start making bets about who is on it. To the Revolutionary Army's relief, the person on the ship is Sabo, alive and well, and carrying with him refugees from Luluzia Kingdom. Koala starts attacking Sabo for going radio silent for so long, but he tells her he did not have a choice because he could not get his hands on an encryption Den Mushi, so any calls he would have made would have been monitored. He did send an indirect call signal to let them know he was all right, and as it turns out, he was not even on Luluzia at all when it was completely destroyed. Belo Betty remembers most of the people from Luluzia and learns they want to join the Revolutionary Army, though she tells them all to get some sleep first. Later, Monkey D. Dragon, Emporio Ivankov, and Sabo all sit together where Sabo learns about Bartholomew Kuma, who Dragon believes had a contingency installed to ensure his return to Mary Geoise. Ivankov deduces that Sabo does not want the other commanders to hear what he has to say. Sabo confirms this and proceeds to tell everyone what really happened at the Levely. Sabo tells Dragon and Ivankov that his side accomplished everything they set out to do. They destroyed the World Noble's symbol and declared war. They rescued Bartholomew Kuma and freed as many slaves as they could, and they managed to destroy Mary Geoise's food reserves. Dragon tells Sabo that his actions got the Marines' attention and kept most of their forces' eyes on him, while the Revolutionary Army's influence sparked 12 nations to take up arms, 8 of which were successful, with the exception of Luluzia, which has been annihilated. As such, the 7 nations are no longer paying the heavenly tribute nor exporting natural resources. Ivankov adds that the Revolutionary Army is attacking world government supply carriers all over the world to keep resources from reaching the Holy Land. Ivankov considers this a huge success, as now the people of Mary Geoise can see what it is like to be deprived of food and money. Dragon admits they are not cutting off all of their supplies, but they are definitely putting the squeeze on them. He knows, of course, that the world government will not accept this situation and will dispatch God's Knights, which Dragon says is the real battle once they mobilize. Ivankov tells Sabo that he will be the Knight's main target, while Dragon tells him that regardless of what happened with King Cobra's assassination, he is a hero in the eyes of the people. Dragon says that in the eyes of the rebellious, authority figures in the world government are treated as the enemy, but with that said, he acknowledges there are intelligent and fair rulers. Nefertari Cobra was one of them, but sometimes news does not travel accurately. Sabo admits it is cold to say this, but he confesses he can live with the way things turned out if it helps fuel the flames of rebellion, something Dragon admires. Ivankov then demands to know what happened as he shows a picture of Sabo standing over Cobra's body in the newspaper and confesses everyone wanted to believe he did not kill him. In a flashback over a month ago, the Revolutionary Army attacked Mary Gois not long after the levy began. Several world nobles started fleeing out of fear, and one tried to kill their slave for being too slow, but he is saved by Karasu, who steals the noble's gun and tells the slave to escape to the east of the city. The world noble's bodyguards open fire on Karasu, but he takes no damage. As it turns out, Karasu ate the Susu no Mai, which allows him to turn his body into soot and morph it to his will. With it, he dispatches his attackers using a move called Obalisusu. Meanwhile, Lindbergh uses his inventions to free several slaves as Karasu notifies him that the admirals are on their way. It is not long before Karasu finds himself fighting Fujitora, using a move called Karasu Renkon to match Fujitora's gravity powers. Elsewhere, Morley is fighting Ryokuju, though several world nobles demand Ryokuju be more careful about collateral damage, or they will hang him, forcing Ryokuju to hold back. When he asks Fujitora what he is doing, Fujitora reveals he is about to call down a meteor, which Ryokuju says is a bad idea. On the outskirts of the city, Jabra, Blueno, Khalifa, Fukuru, and Kumadori, who are all now members of CP0, watch the carnage and admit how tough the Revolutionary Army is to be able to contend with the likes of two admirals. Karasu then contacts Sabo, who was at Pengie Castle trying to get the keys for the slaves' collars. Sabo also tells Lindbergh that he sees Saint Charlos and his father Rosward riding Kuma, as well as telling him that Charlos still plans on making Shirahoshi his slave. In the end, Sabo contacts Morley to make sure everything is ready while he initiates his plan to save Kuma and stop Charlos. In addition, Jewelry Bonnie was running around the castle grounds too in search of her father. Meanwhile, Rob Lucci follows Nefertari Vivi, who is looking for Vice Admiral Garp to protect Shirahoshi. Vivi denies Lucci's help, following his refusal to help Shirahoshi earlier. She also says that she is sure that Charlos would try to kidnap Shirahoshi again, and she wants to make sure he cannot. Back at the castle, Cobra is told that only he can have an audience with the 5 elders. Pell and Chaka try to refute this, but Cobra has them stand down, instead asking them to look after Vivi for him and not let her out of their sights. Sabo defeated several guards within Pengia Castle when Jewelry Bonnie appeared before him, to his surprise. She told him that since they were after the same thing, they should just work together now. Sabo accepted, revealing that he had heard that Bartholomew Kuma had a daughter. Once he got the keys to the slaves' collars, Bonnie told Sabo that she had been keeping tabs on the Revolutionary Army's exploits, so she knew that they were trustworthy to care for her father's body. Sabo handed the keys to one of Karasu's soot crows and told Karasu to pass on the message that Morley and the others should get Kuma and the slaves to headquarters as fast as possible. As Karasu accepted the keys, he told Sabo to be careful. Sabo then asked Bonnie what she would do next, and she told him she would journey to Egghead to see if Dr. Vegapunk could undo his alterations to Kuma's mind. Elsewhere, the 5 elders asked King Cobra what he wanted to speak to them about. Cobra told them that he knew the world government had been founded 800 years ago when 20 monarchs had come together, along with their families, to live as one clan, the world nobles, and rule over their world. At first, the 20 monarchs had treated each other equally and installed an empty throne to ensure that no dictator would try to rise up from them, placing weapons before the throne to symbolize the vow of never sitting on it. Afterwards, new royal families had been hand-picked to rule the nations the founders could not watch over anymore, and to ensure a smooth transition, all references to the previous monarchs had been removed from their home countries. Cobra said that the sole exception was the monarch of his own kingdom, Queen Nefertari Lily, who had chosen to remain ruling over her people in Arabasta, which is why there are only 19 weapons at the feet of the empty throne. The elders confirmed his story and asked what his point was, and Cobra said that through all the accounts chronicling the period after the Void Century he managed to scrounge together, Lily's name was not mentioned once. To Cobra, he believed Queen Lily never made it back home, and the ruler of the country ended up being her younger brother. To that, he asked if they knew what exactly happened to her. St. J. Garcia Saturn said that because it was so long ago, the details of what exactly happened to her were lost to the annals of history. Cobra then asked the 5 elders what the secret name D meant. When one elder asked what prompted this question, Cobra revealed that a short letter had been passed down from generation to generation by Lily. Outside in the public courtyard, St. Charlos made his move on Shirahoshi, having Kuma tie her up in chains. Charlos started dancing over his accomplishment and gushed over the idea of riding her everywhere and harming her if she defied him. She started begging for someone to save her, but the bystanders were too scared to interfere and all ran away pretending they had not seen a thing. Her brother Fukaboshi rushed to save her, apologizing for looking away earlier, which had allowed Charlos to seize her. His brothers Ryuboshi and Manboshi joined him, but Charlos simply told Kuma to blast them as he proclaimed that he could buy permission to do whatever he wanted, especially against fishmen and merfolk. Rebecca and Leo saw Shirahoshi being assaulted, and Sai asked Saint Donkokote Mjosgard if he could hit Charlos, to which Mjosgard said Sai could and he would take responsibility for it. Mjosgard told Fukaboshi to restrain himself since he was of royal blood, but for Leo and Sai, since the two were pirates, Mjosgard thought it was easier for them to escape since they were bound to no country. Charlos tried to blast Mjosgard for hitting him earlier, but Leo and Sai attacked Charlos simultaneously and practically flattened him with their attacks. All the nearby people started panicking over the possibility that Charlos was dead and that the admirals would be summoned. As Kuma was about to fire another blast at Sai and Leo, Morley suddenly appeared from the ground and subdued Kuma, begging that they go home together. Karasu arrived with the keys, and Morley said they should all head down now. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Aimu appeared before the 5 elders who were surprised because Cobra was still present and sat down on the empty throne, horrifying Cobra as Emu said Lily's name. Aimu says to a speechless Cobra that they have 2 things they wish to say to Cobra and only 1 thing to ask of him. Hearing Aimu's name, Cobra comments how similar it is to one of the first 20. Aimu, however, refuses to confirm his suspicions. Aimu tells Cobra that D is the name of their opposers, but none of the people in the world that bear it know of its importance nowadays. Aimu says that this recent development's roots goes way back then, which they say is because of a mistake Nefertari Lily made 800 years ago, on par with the scholars of Ohara investigating the Void Century. Aimu says that it was all Lily's fault the poneglyphs were unleashed onto the world, and why pirates used them to search for treasure. Because Aimu considers the release of the poneglyphs the worst possible outcome for the first 20, they wonder if it was all part of some larger plan. As the 5 elders ready their weapons, Aimu tells him that the truth exists in the letter Lily left, and they tell Cobra to address Lily by her full name as written on said letter. Realizing he will not leave the room alive, Cobra announces that Lily's name is Nefertari D. Lily. In an instant, Aimu stabs Cobra with what seems to be an arrow-shaped tail. Just then, Sabo appears, having been eavesdropping on the conversation, and attacks the 5 elders with Heiken and follows up with Otabisha, but his attack is blocked by the Aimu, having all transformed into large creatures. Sabo laments his inability to destroy all of them as a picture of him is taken standing above Cobra, which would be published in the papers. Cobra calls Sabo Luffy's brother and asks why he saved him, and Sabo replies that the Revolutionary Army's conflict is with the corrupt world nobles. When Sabo asks how Cobra knows Luffy, he informs him that he helped him in the past. Aimu and the 5 elders try to attack, so Sabo starts fleeing with Cobra, but he tells him to leave him behind. Sabo refuses, but Cobra explains he needs to be able to escape if he is to deliver a message to Luffy and Vivi. The message is that the Nefertari family shares the moniker D, and he knows what path Arabasta must take now. A shocked Sabo thinks back to his childhood, and when he learned that both Luffy and Ace had D in their names. He gets pulled out of his thoughts when Aimu attacks Cobra again and Sabo, injuring both and forcing the latter to drop the former. As Cobra forces himself on his feet, he recites the words of Lily's letter as Aimu finally kills him. Much to Sabo's horror, Cobra's last wish was for Sabo to relay what he saw and live on. Sabo eventually escapes, but the 5 elders' attention is turned to another eavesdropper, which turns out to be Wapol. Though he hated Cobra, he was absolutely horrified that he was murdered by what he considers the world government's biggest skeleton in the closet. Racked with fear, Wapol books it for his life. Meanwhile, in the Grand Round Table, the kings are told that Cobra and Wapol will not be joining them, which some think is because Cobra exhausted himself giving his speech about abolishing the 7 warlords of the sea. As they move to the next topic, Shirahoshi's brothers decide to take her to the Red Port, so they do not have to deal with any more world nobles, though Shirahoshi was sad she could not say goodbye to Vivi. Speaking of, Vivi ends up restrained by CP0, who she demands they let her free. Khalifa, who was watching over her, informs her that when her disappearance is made known, she'll be living the rest of her life as a pet. Vivi asks if Shirahoshi is okay, and Khalifa informs her that she emerged from her ordeal unscathed, much to Vivi's relief. Jabra, who was also watching her, claims that the ones who attacked St. Charlos, Leo and Sai, proudly proclaim themselves as members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. He also reveals that Fujitora ended up helping several slaves escape, which angered Ryokuju so much that they started going at it. As Vivi ponders what to do, Wapol crashes through the wall begging to be spared, and Vivi takes the opportunity to escape by jumping into his mouth. The CP0 agents were left stunned by Wapol's sudden action and eventually realized that Vivi had gotten away from them. As he runs, Vivi asks him how long he plans on running, and he says he will run to the edge of the world if he has to. The both of them then cross paths with Kenderella, who comes to believe that Wapol is eloping with Vivi. The Levely concludes before news of Nefertari Cobra's death was announced. Both his and Vivi's sudden disappearance prompted Igaram, Shaka, and Pell to search everywhere for them. Unbeknownst to both of them, Vivi and Wapol had stowed away on a ship leading to the IG's kingdom. Wapol contacts Morgans asking him to pick the both of them up, which he agrees to do to Wapol, telling Morgans that he was now the subject of a manhunt after what he just witnessed in the empty throne room. Vivi asks him what exactly he saw there, but he refuses to divulge that information, instead telling her to leave him alone and go back to her own ship. Vivi refuses as she understands how dangerously persistent CP0 will be in recapturing her, regardless of how much protection she has. She asks Wapol for the Den Mushi he used to contact Morgans so she could notify her father, but he refuses in a panic, stating that it is the last thing she should do, confusing her more. Jewelry Bonnie, meanwhile, had snuck aboard a ship heading for Tajin Kingdom, while an injured Sabo hitched a ride on a ship from the Luluzia Kingdom. Once the stories started spreading about what happened, the 5 elders discussed what to do with Sabo now that he knows the truth about the empty throne, as they also wanted to deal with the Egghead issue. Just then, Aimu contacts the 5 of them and tells them that the time has come to use one of Dr. Vegapunk's inventions, the Mother Flame. The elders agree that it is time to test its capabilities, with Egghead potentially considering changing its response depending on the outcome. As they decide to pick a forest area for a testing ground, Aimu simply says they want the testing site to be the Luluzia Kingdom due to its close proximity, regardless of the people living on the island. The 5 elders comply with Aimu's orders as their names and titles are revealed. The warrior god of science and defense, St. J. Garcia Saturn, agrees to make the preparations. The warrior god of the environment, St. Marcus Mars, notes that Luluzia's citizens had been showing sparks of rebellion. The warrior god of justice, St. Topman Warcury, says it may serve as an example to others. The warrior god of finance, St. Ethan Baron V. Nushuro, says that they could use this power freely. The warrior god of agriculture, St. Shepherd Jew Peter, adds that if they can end any protracted conflict. Following the Levely, Marine Headquarters received reports that both the Tajin and Aegis kingdoms are rebelling. Between the disbandment of the 7 warlords of the sea and the uprisings in world government-affiliated countries, the Marines were plenty busy, even though their military power had shifted in a new direction courtesy of the Seraphim, models including versions of Don Quixote de Flamingo, Gecko Moria, and Crocodile. Back in the present, Sabo tells Emporio Ivankov and Monkey D. Dragon that the second he arrived in Luluzia, King Seki and Princess Komain were immediately arrested by the people. He himself was welcomed by the people, and realized it was because the people believed the story that he had assassinated Cobra. He did want to tell them the truth, but when he saw how the lie fanned the flames of rebellion in the people, he could not bring himself to do it. Because of Belo Betty and the other Revolutionary Army commanders, several of the inspired people chose to join him. He knew he could not get his hands on an encryption Den Mushi, so he rerouted his call through the island as he was setting sail, confident the world government would be fooled into thinking he was still on the island when in reality he was just within range of the island, having set out to sea. Ivankov asked if Luluzia Kingdom's destruction happened during the call, and Sabo confirms, adding that the people from the kingdom became hysterical after losing their families. Dragon is filled with disgust that the world government would annihilate an entire kingdom so callously and asks how they did it, and Sabo reports he saw a large shadow hovering over the kingdom, which Sabo believed was not a living being or a natural disaster, but something flying directly over the clouds. Changing topics, Ivankov asks about the name Aimu and reveals that one of the first 20 was Saint Aimu of the Nerona family. Since they know there exists a means to grant someone everlasting life, they suspect it has been used on someone before already, so that person no longer has to worry about dying of old age. Sabo begins to wonder if Aimu is the very same Aimu Ivankov is talking about, but he says it could just be a coincidence, and that person just shares the same name. At the same time, however, he doubts who else could have the authority to command the 5 elders, the highest of the world nobles. The last thing Ivankov says is that he suspects that the object in the sky was a weapon, and the only one he knows who could make something like that would be Vegapunk. Dragon reminds him that Vegapunk would never create an obvious tool of murder, but Ivankov says he knows this and suspects it is actually one of the ancient weapons. Assuming that Emu has lived since ancient times, he sees a possible connection. Dragon, however, wonders why one would wait until now to use it. Back in Mary Goi's, the world nobles are complaining about their lost food supply, but at the same time, St. Donkawakotem Josgard has been executed for defending Princess Shirahoshi and fishmen, and the judge was a man named St. Figarland Garling, a former champion, of God Valley, and the supreme commander of God's Knights. At the Marine G1 branch coastal ship scrapyard, Commodore Branu tells Django and Fullbuddy that when Monkey D. Garp was young, he would use battleships as punching bags as opposed to sandbags, which is why some of the ships have caved-in bows. Django is left in disbelief that Garp would use ships to train, while Fullbuddy asks why there is a second one with a caved-in bow. Branu reveals that the other ship was punched by Kuzan back when he was still Garp's student. Branu then reveals that neither Garp nor Kuzan used haki or devil fruit powers when punching them, so the strength the two acquired was well earned. On Hachinosu, Garp throws Sunwon Wolf into the sea, prompting the Blackbeard pirates to scramble to save him before he drowns. Vasco drinks some alcohol before shooting it at Garp after setting it on fire, a move he calls Shugo Rapu. Garp grabs two pirates and uses them as shields, protecting himself but setting the other two on fire. Avalo Pizarro, who was watching while still merged with the island, asks Garp if he plans on decimating the entire island. The other pirates fear that Blackbeard will kill them if he sees the state the island is in, and also fear how Garp is not faltering despite the Blackbeard pirates' sheer numbers. Kujaku, who is on board Garp's ship which is now back out at sea, calls Garp asking for the Sitrep. Hibari has been defrosted with Tashigi watching over her while Kujaku tells Garp that the captured citizens and injured marines have all set out so they can leave whenever. Garp acknowledges this and tells Kobe, Prince Gruss, and Helmeppo to retreat. However, Kuzan recovers from Garp's last attack and tells his former mentor that he cannot let him leave. Helmeppo starts freaking out as Gruss asks Garp if he thinks he is also the future of the Marines, but his words go unheard as Garp tells the three of them to make for the sea at all costs while he holds off the enemy. Kobe then hears a woman screaming for help, and he immediately rushes to help her, but when he gets close enough, he discovers too late he was set up. Thankfully, Garp saves him from Shiryu, who tries to sneak up on him while invisible and stab him with his sword, which only goes through Garp. Though hurt, Garp punches Shiryu and slams him into the ground, defeating him. Helmeppo and Gruss get worried while Kobe apologizes for being tricked and needing him to be saved, but Garp explains that Shiryu was aiming at him the whole time. The Blackbeard pirates start getting hopeful that they can take Garp down now that he's injured, with special motivation being that he is worth around belai 3 billion at the Cross Guild. Kuzan rushes forward and tells the others that even if they bind Garp's arms and legs, they still will not be able to kill him. He then prepares to use a move called Ice Glove. In a flashback, a young Kuzan asks Garp to train him, but Garp refuses, telling him to learn from the instructors, though Kuzan tells him he already knows everything he can from them. Though Garp still told him no, he eventually found himself doing so, with the two of them using battleships as punching bags. At first, Kuzan struggled because he was not as strong as Garp, but as time passed, his punches eventually reached the same level as Garp's. By the time Kuzan became Admiral Aokiji, his relationship with Garp was still strong, until the present day. Kuzan tells Garp he raised a troublesome enemy in him, but Garp tells Kuzan he is done with him while calling him a foolish student, and they strike each other with haki-coated fists, creating a huge shockwave that blows both of them back. Pizarro tells the Marines that their hopes of escaping Hachinosu are slim because of how many pirates are on the island. He also tells them that their ship is not safe from him, and he proves it by morphing part of the island into a giant hand to crush Garp's ship, all the while proudly declaring that this action will make him stand out among the Blackbeard pirates. Kobe desperately begs him to stop, but Garp tells the young captain to calm down because justice will always prevail. In the past, Monkey D. Garp asks a class of Marine recruits what they would do if they were riding in a boat and could only bring either a baby or an old man on board. Kobe says he will let both of them ride in the boat while he gets off, but Garp throws a marker at him and tells him that answer is wrong. Garp explains that the baby should be saved because the old man does not have much time left to live. He adds that the most important thing that the Marines should be trying to protect is the future of the people, meaning that the survival of babies and young people like Kobe is more important than that of an old man. Later, he gets scolded for his lecture and told that all lives are equal, but Garp insists that the future of the young people is limitless. Several weeks ago, on Amazon Lily, Blackbeard ended up abducting 800 Marine soldiers and stealing one battleship. Kobe, however, approached Blackbeard with a proposition to give himself up in exchange for the release of the soldiers and the ship, which Blackbeard ultimately accepted. In the present, all of the Marines on Garp's ship are panicking because of Avalo Pizarro attempting to crush them with a giant hand made from the island. None of the cannons work against it, so Tashigi orders everyone to abandon ship and protect the civilians. On the island, Kobe is still panicking over Pizarro's threat, but Garp tells him, Prince Gruss, and Helmeppo that the three of them can save their allies together. Garp explains that he will provide an opening, Kobe will destroy Pizarro's hand, Gruss will protect the ship from the debris of the resulting destruction, and Helmeppo must make sure no one interferes with Kobe or Gruss. Just as Kobe is about to tell him that they cannot do something like this, Garp stops him and tells him that they need to be able to make decisions like this in a snap. Immediately, all three of them take off with the other pirates chasing after them. Gruss asks if Kobe has any weapons with which to stop Pizarro, to which Kobe answers that he does not and will have to make do. Helmeppo uses himself as a shield to keep Kobe and Gruss from getting hit by one of the pirates' cannon fire while Garp stands back up. Kuzan asks him where he plans on going with injuries like that, but Garp merely calls them scratches as he charges at his former pupil, knocking him down and swiftly making his way all the way to the large skull rock Pizarro was looking through. Pizarro tries to intimidate Garp into standing down, but he fails, as Garp uses a powerful attack called Galaxy Divide to split the rock formation down the middle, while also simultaneously damaging Pizarro's main body. With Pizarro's arm now raised, Kobe is granted the opening he was promised and jumps into the air. Meanwhile, Garp reminisces on a conversation he had with Helmeppo about how Kobe has been improving but always has bandages wrapped around his hands. Helmeppo explains he was asked by Kobe to keep quiet, but he ultimately reveals to Garp that he had been training intensely in private so he can be one of the best Marines there is. He even went as far as to use Garp's battleship bags to hone his strength, punching them to the point that his fists bled. In the present, Kobe comes face to face with Pizarro's hand as all of his friends beg him to escape with them, but in a shocking turn of events, Kobe unleashes Honesty Impact, a punch that splits Pizarro's entire hand in half. While Pizarro recoils from the pain, everyone else is left astonished by Kobe's incredible feat. Helmeppo catches him while Grus uses Gunyo no Su to create a clay spiderweb to catch the debris. The three of them get on board the ship, and the Marines celebrate just as Garp calls them to report that the mission was a success. When Tashigi asks him to come back quickly, Garp instructs everyone to leave the island, assuring them that he can save himself and that their safety is the top priority. He also tells them that this event will become known as a threat to all pirates, as he calls them the future of the Marines. Kobe immediately wants to go back for him, but Grus refuses to disobey Garp's order. Having been impaled by Kuzan with a sword of ice that is also freezing him, Garp lies on the ground but simply laughs as the other Blackbeard pirates surround him. The narration then reveals that in tomorrow's newspaper, the major headlines included Kobe's rescue, Garp's disappearance, and Monkey D. Luffy barricading himself on Egghead, which is being approached by the fleet of marine warships. The people of Dawn Island are discussing the news of Luffy and Garp's recent exploits. In the article about Garp, they notice he has not been officially labeled as dead following his disappearance on Hachinosu. Whoop Slap assures them that Garp will be fine due to his status as a legend, which Makino agrees with. Whoop Slap hears someone laughing and yells at the source, only to apologize once he realizes it is Makino's child. Makino notices that her baby has become familiar with Luffy's face from all the newspaper photos. Elsewhere on MT, Kolubo Dan reacts tearfully to the news, while Dogra and Magra begin to feel the ground rumbling. An earthquake of unprecedented scale is then seen taking place around the entire world, with its ramifications being felt throughout various locations, examples including Logi Town, Kano Country, Rakesh, the Twin Cape, Water 7, Wano Country, Impel Down, and Mary Geoise, and by the inhabitants of those locations such as Laboon, Iceberg, Momonosuke Aimu, and many others. The significance of this event would go unnoticed due to no one being able to pinpoint its epicenter, the destruction of Luluzia Kingdom, that took place 6 days ago. A ship sent to investigate the incident arrives at the site of Luluzia's destruction, where they find a massive, gaping hole in the ocean, one that resembles a circular waterfall and leaves no trace of the kingdom. The earthquake caused the worldwide sea level to rise by roughly 1 meter, resulting in many islands becoming partially or fully flooded. Whoop Slap watches the turbulent waves from Fuchsia Village, confused as to what is happening. Meanwhile, the fleet of Marines receives news of the rising water levels as they close in on Egghead. The fleet is said to far outclass that of a Buster Call, and is made up of over 100 ships, including 20 warships and 30,000 Marines in total. The operation is being led by 9 Vice Admirals and Admiral Kizaru, the latter of whom is eating aboard one of the ships while communicating with Sentomaru via Den Mushi. Sentomaru berates Kizaru for having just destroyed one of the Sea Beast weapons despite the fact that it had attacked first. Kizaru asks Sentomaru if he can surrender and return to them, but Sentomaru warns him that he will retaliate if Kizaru keeps attacking. He tells Kizaru that Vegapunk modeled the Pacifista's lasers after the research he did on Kizaru's powers, and expresses disbelief at the fact that they are now coming to eliminate him. Kizaru replies that studying the Void Century is a crime even he cannot defend, and that he is simply following orders. Despite this, he admits that a battle would not be in their best interests since any destruction would lead to losses for the world government. Kizaru makes the assumption that CP0 failed in their mission, which Sentomaru confirms was a result of the Straw Hat Pirates' interference. Inside one of the warships, Saturn, who is accompanied by Vice Admiral Doberman and several other guards, asks that no one be made aware of his presence as he reads the title of the newspaper article. Doberman informs him it was the work of Morgans, prompting Saturn to ask for the truth. Doberman explains that they have yet to receive word that CP0 has completed their mission, but based on Sentomaru continuing to defend the island, they can assume that Vegapunk, his satellites, the Seraphim, the Straw Hats who are allegedly allied with Vegapunk, and the trio of CP0 agents are all in the Laba phase, and that the other Cypher Pole agents were seemingly imprisoned in the Faberio phase by Sentamaru and his Mark I Pacifista units. Due to the Frontier Dome being fully active, they are certain that nobody can enter or leave the Laba phase, but they also have no way of knowing what has happened inside during the last day. Saturn asks about the location of the island's research staff and technicians, to which Doberman answers that they evacuated yesterday but are having their ship's coordinates tracked. Not wanting them to escape in the event that they know too much, Saturn orders the ships to be sunk. Doberman also informs Saturn of Jewelry Bonnie's presence on the island, although Saturn, despite knowing her as Kuma's daughter, dismisses any further importance she may hold and says they can leave her. Kizaru is then informed of a signal that was picked up from Egghead. The call is also being wiretapped and Mary GOIs by the other members of the Five Elders. York introduces herself as the caller and demands to know why they are trying to kill her along with the others, as she was the one who informed them about the Stella Vegapunk's betrayal. Mars tells her she is no different from the real Vegapunk, which York counters by stating she would not have revealed her interest in the Void Century to them if she actually cared about it. When asked by Nushiro about CP0 and the Straw Hat's status, York claims that since she is the only one contacting them following the previous night and has the Seraphim with her, she is fine. York then asks about the fleet surrounding the island and if it is meant to be a declaration of war, but Jupiter reveals they have changed their minds and would like her to recreate the Mother Flame. Although she does not know who exactly desires the weapon, York confirms it can be done via the island's power plant on the condition that they do not harm her or the laboratory, which Mars agrees to, along with her request to become a world noble. Having struck a deal, York then bursts into tears and begs to be saved from being killed by Luffy, much to the shock of Kizaru and the elders. She is seen chained to the ground and surrounded by the Straw Hats as well as Bonnie, Vegapunk, and Lucci, with Zoro's sword held over her neck while Usopp, who is no longer petrified, arranges the call. Nami and Vegapunk begin to understand the scope of the situation while Luffy, not fully understanding it, assumes they will escape with York as their shield. This prompts Bonnie to realize that they are in fact in a hostage situation. Luffy calls the Five Elders and introduces himself while simultaneously confirming that he and his crew are allies of Vegapunk and if they care about York's safety, they should withdraw their fleet from the shore. Mars asks Luffy who is currently alive with him in the Laba phase, but just as Luffy is about to tell him, Robin forces him to stop, telling him that they cannot give the enemy any information about their status. Luffy apologizes and asks if they will back down, but Usopp tells him to quit dreaming. Saturn says that they need to protect three things: York, Punk records, and the power plant needed to produce the Mother Flame. Everything else is expendable. Doberman reminds Saturn that several of their Cypher Pole agents are still on the island, but Saturn explains that he is considering the worst-case scenario and that they need to prioritize the safety of the most important things to them. He does add, however, that Doberman should consider humans no different from insects. If their numbers shrink, they will replenish over time. Ultimately, Doberman accepts Saturn's wishes. Back in the Laba phase, York tells everyone that if they hurt her now that she has made a deal with the world government, Egghead will be completely destroyed just like Ohara. Her words, however, earns her a smack on the head by Nami, who Zoro tries to calm down. Chopper asks Robin if her injuries have recovered and she confirms. While that is going on, Kaku is seen resting from his own injuries, Luffy and Bonnie are eating, and Usopp is trying to get in contact with the underground basement. Lucci notes that both Shaka and Pythagoras have been destroyed while Lilith, Edison, and Atlas are heavily injured. Kaku asks him what he is doing and Lucci simply says he's talking to himself. Usopp succeeds in getting the communications operating, and he asks the now free Cypher Pole agents if they are all right. It turns out they provided the agents with food, which most of them were deeply grateful for. They ask to be freed, but Usopp says they cannot do that, to which they ask to be moved away from the Seraphim instead. It turns out that the four Seraphim have been contained in bubbles made from the same material as the bubble shields used by the Pacifista Mark I, as they have the same properties as Sea Stone. Snake tells the agents that neither of them were ordered to kill them, so they do not need to be scared of them, much to their relief. Frankie then thanks Snake for freeing him, Lilith, and Usopp, while Dr. Vegapunk wonders why she did so since he never programmed her to act like that. It is revealed that Luffy crossed paths with Snake and mistook her for Hancock, after which he asked her to free his friends, which she did because somehow she inherited the real Hancock's love for Luffy, which Dr. Vegapunk makes a note of. Luffy thanks Snake once again, which she misinterprets as a confession of love, much like how the real Hancock would, while Atlas tells Dr. Vegapunk that she still cannot open the Frontier Dome, which means they are still trapped. York smugly tells them that she locked everything with a password that she has shared with none of them. Stussy tells Dr. Vegapunk that they are surrounded as he talks to Nami, telling her that they should head in one of the directions her log pose recorded in Wano. Nami notices that one of the needles is pointing northeast of Egghead and Dr. Vegapunk says that leads to Elbaf, much to the joy of Luffy and Usopp. Vegapunk says that the crew is fortunate that their ship is on the lava phase stratum, but since the entire coast is blocked by marine ships, they will not be able to leave this way. Instead, he says they need to head northeast to the other side of the island, which does not have that many ships blocking it. He says that Vegaforce 01 can potentially carry them and their ship past the blockade, but it can only fly within the airfield of Egghead, after which it will fall down. Thankfully, Frankie tells him that they can use the Thousand Sunny's coup de burst ability to carry them the rest of the way, which intrigues Vegapunk. Atlas admits the plan is sound but reminds them that the Frontier Dome will not let them leave, York once again saying they will never get the password out of her. Unfortunately for her, Vegapunk, Atlas, and Edison get to work trying to crack the code. As for Lilith, Vegapunk tasks her with commanding the Vegaforce 01, and she starts heading for the mech with Luffy, Bonnie, and Frankie joining her. Lilith starts gushing over leaving the island for the first time in her life, while Luffy says he will miss the food on this island. Bonnie shares the sentiment, and they should bring some, but Luffy tells her that Sanji can just cook for them, much to her joy. Luffy then asks Bonnie why she is in such a good mood now, and she says she feels better that she no longer wants to kill Vegapunk. With the fleet, Saturn is notified about the situation by Lucci, who was somehow able to contact him. Saturn asks Kizaru if he can just slip by the Frontier Dome with his powers, but Kizaru tells him that Sentomaru is guarding it. Saturn tells him to ignore him, but Kizaru says that would go against his own ideals. He adds that if they begin their assault, Sentomaru will likely order the Sea Beast weapons and Pacifista to attack. Saturn asks about the power plant, and Kizaru admits that Lucci was able to relay that information to them. With that, the ships get into battle formation, with the Rokushiki users being put on standby as the assault will begin soon and the bombardment unit being told to aim for the Sea Beast weapons instead of the Pacifista. Luffy's group reaches the Thousand Sunny and Vegaforce 01 just as Kizaru uses Yada no Kagami to reach the island. Sentomaru intercepts him as Luffy senses Kizaru's strength and says that someone strong is coming. The siege begins as several Marines open fire on the Pacifista, but several ships are overturned and destroyed by the Sea Beast weapons, prompting the Vice Admirals to take action. Vegapunk is confused that they would attack with Sentomaru on standby, leading the Straw Hats to realize that Kizaru was sent to take him out. Vegapunk apologizes to Sentomaru for having him face someone so strong and says he would understand if he wants to flee. Speaking of, Kizaru kicks Sentomaru far away and uses Yasakani no Magatama to fire several light beams, all the while telling him that he should just surrender. Sentomaru runs from his attack as he declares that he gave his word to the Straw Hats to fend him off. He grabs his axe and jumps into the air as Kizaru asks when he became friends with pirates, and Sentomaru responds that he will side with anyone who offers to help Dr. Vegapunk escapes safely. As the two fight, a flashback reveals that Dr. Vegapunk and Borsalino met Sentomaru after he had beaten up some bears that the two were tasked with dealing with. Borsalino figured that Sentomaru was kicked out of the local village as Sentomaru says that he just needs a job that pays well and will allow him to buy as much onigiri as he would like, so Dr. Vegapunk asks Sentomaru to be his bodyguard, which he accepts with glee. In the present, Kizaru comments on how cute Sentomaru was back then and how he taught him as much as he could to fight, just as Sentomaru hits him with a Shigara palm. Kizaru endures and blasts Sentomaru to the ground, defeating him. After that, Kizaru takes Sentomaru's command ship and orders the Pacifista to turn on the Sea Beast weapons and defend the Marines, which they start doing. Saturn witnesses this and tells Kizaru to keep him updated on all casualties. On the lava phase, everyone witnesses Sentomaru's defeat. Vegapunk, Edison, and Atlas continue to work to take down the Frontier Dome. Vegapunk also reveals to the Straw Hats that since Kizaru is made of light, he can easily slip past the laser barrier, which he ultimately does. His presence sets off the emergency siren, which alerts Luffy's group as they continue to make way to the back of the island. The Straw Hats try to warn Luffy to speed up, but Rob Lucci makes his move and tries to kill Vegapunk, only for Stussy to use herself as a shield, taking the blow. As Stussy collapses to the ground, Sanji grabs a bubble gun and seals Kaku inside as Lucci's next attack gets blocked by Zoro, who calls him a coward for waiting for backup. Lucci ignores him and tells everyone that now that he and Kizaru are working together, they won't be leaving the island alive. Zoro simply pushes Lucci out and reminds him not to underestimate them. Kizaru finds the Vegaforce 01, but is greeted by Luffy, who immediately kicks him as Kizaru blocks. Luffy confidently states that he and his crew are 100 times stronger than they were 2 years ago on Sabaody, so this will not be like last time. Bartholomew Kuma has reached Mary Geoise and has unleashed an Ursus shock attack which has devastated several buildings. Sakazuki confronts Kuma as several world nobles appear complaining about the lack of food and demanding that he execute Kuma for injuring all of them in his rampage. Sakazuki tells Kuma that if the world government cannot control him anymore, then they can't let him live. However, what he personally does not understand is his motivations since he has lost his sense of self. As he says that, he attacks Kuma with Migo, destroying a portion of his face. Kuma starts running, but Sakazuki fires a blast of magma that destroys one of his legs, but he still manages to teleport away. After he flees, Sakazuki thinks back to when they captured Bonnie 2 years ago, and he told her that Kuma had willingly offered himself to become a weapon, which Bonnie refused to believe at the time. As the world nobles yell at Sakazuki for letting Kuma escape, he continues to wonder where Kuma is going. On Egghead, the sea beast weapons are destroyed by the pacifista, allowing the Marines to land. Luffy has transformed into Gear 4 Snakeman and is barraging Kizaru with his punches, which Kizaru blocks, but even he admits that Luffy has become a formidable opponent since defeating Kaido. Kizaru asks Luffy why he is protecting Dr. Vegapunk, but Luffy retorts by asking why he wants to kill him anyway. Kizaru warps far away from Luffy and admits he does not personally want to kill him because he has known him for a long time, but does not have a choice. With blinding speed, Kizaru kicks Luffy so hard he flies into Vega Force 01, completely destroying it and sending him into the Frontier Dome's barrier. The Thousand Sunny falls out of the destroyed robot's hands as Frankie, Bonnie, and Lilith run away from the exploding robot. Kizaru confronts the two and comments how much Bonnie has grown, and he asks why she is getting in his way of killing Vegapunk, who she is supposed to hate. Bonnie, however, grabs a wire and uses Toshituki, declaring that her target has shifted. Kizaru easily dodges her, asks her not to make him hurt anyone else he knows, and then kicks her into the barrier as well. Frankie charges up a radical beam, but Kizaru has disappeared. Frankie realizes where Kizaru must be going and contacts Usopp to warn him just as Vegapunk, Edison, and Atlas crack the code to the Frontier Dome. Vegapunk asks if Frankie has brought Vegaforce 01 and the ship to the other side of the island. Kizaru appears telling Dr. Vegapunk that his plans have been foiled. He tells Dr. Vegapunk that this mission is tough on him, so he doesn't want to drag it out, but before he can do anything, Luffy reappears after reactivating Gear 5 and using his Gomu Gomu no Gigant technique, grabbing Kizaru with his hand. The sound of Luffy's heartbeat reaches down to the Fabirio phase, and the Iron Giant seems to activate in response to his transformation. Luffy swings Kizaru around and eventually throws him far away from the control tower, giving everyone a window of opportunity to escape. Atlas decides to head for the Fabirio phase to steal back control of the Pacifista Mark I, knowing that they will be a hindrance to their escape. Dr. Vegapunk decides to join Atlas, and he contacts Frankie to inform him that Bonnie is still alive but on the Fabirio phase. Sanji offers to join the two to find her while Jinbe gathers Vegapunk's luggage, telling everyone to meet up at the back exit. On the Fabirio phase, the Marines start looking for Bonnie, who is using her devil fruit powers to incapacitate several Marines by changing their age. As she hides, she looks at the unconscious Sentomaru, remembering how he caught her after she hit the Frontier Dome's barrier and fell before passing out again. Meanwhile, Luffy sees Zoro fighting Lucci, with the former reminding his captain to keep focusing on Kizaru. After trading a few blows, Zoro tells Lucci that with his level of power, he will not let him face Luffy. In response, Lucci says he would be better off killing Zoro since he is practically Luffy's too. As for Kizaru, he manages to avoid falling into the sea and uses Yasakani no Magatama to return to the island at light speed. Once he catches up to Luffy, he turns the individual light particles into copies of himself, all of which use Ama no Murakumo to create light swords to attack him, though they surprisingly do minor damage to Luffy. He responds to Kizaru's attack by using Gomu Gomu no Dawn Whip to destroy a few, before making a run for it. As the copies chase after him, Luffy reveals that he was getting them lined up to take them all out at once with Gomu Gomu Domu no Dawn stamp. Much to his misfortune, he realizes that Kizaru used those copies to distract Luffy long enough to return to the control tower, where he grabs Usopp. Kizaru realizes that Vegapunk is no longer present, and both he and Luffy see him and Atlas riding a contraption called Vegatank 08, with Sanji hanging on the outside. Dr. Vegapunk declares that he is on his way to save Bonnie. Kizaru tries to blast him, but Luffy takes the shot. Frankie joins the three as he tells Lilith to use General Frankie to carry the Thousand Sunny. On the coast, the Marines are informed that Dr. Vegapunk has left the lava phase. Edison partially disables the Frontier Dome, allowing Dr. Vegapunk to exit safely, and Atlas issues a new command to the Pacifista to annihilate all the Marines on the island. Thanks to Atlas, the Pacifistas begin attacking the Marines. Vegapunk's group continue to make their way down to the Fabirio phase and Sanji detects Bonnie's location. Immediately, Sanji makes his way to her location as she gets attacked by a vice admiral. She pulls out a gun and uses a move called NDE, near-death experience, to trick the Marines attacking her to think that they have died when in reality the shock has knocked them out. Bonnie makes a run for it, but gets cornered by a vice admiral named Bluegrass, who has eaten the Nori Nori no Mai, which allows her to ride on and control whatever it is that she is riding. In this case, she is riding PXII-046, which she uses on Bonnie. As PXII-046 starts charging up, Bonnie hesitates due to how it is a clone of her father. Thankfully, Sanji gets her out of the way and tells her that she needs to accept that these clones are not him. He dodges the vice admiral that attacked Bonnie earlier and brings her back to the Vegatank 08. Meanwhile, on the lava phase, Kizaru and Luffy's battle continues with both of them having grown exhausted. Kizaru moves to attack Vegapunk, but just as Luffy starts chasing him, the both of them, Zoro, Lucci, and Jinbe, all get an uneasy feeling. Their feeling ends up being justified as Saturn orders the pacifistas to stop. When they do, it does not take long for Vegapunk and Atlas to realize who was responsible. Soon, what appears to be a magic circle forms on the ground and all Marines are informed that Saturn has arrived on the island. All lower-ranking officers, commodores and below, are ordered to not look directly at him as he appears from the circle, having transformed into a large demonic spider hybrid. Saturn makes eye contact with one Marine who accidentally looks at him and kills the Marine by telekinetically exploding his head. While Sanji's group is distracted by Saturn's arrival, Kizaru destroys the cloud road they were using, causing them to fall. Luffy finally catches up to Kizaru and hits him in the side of his head using a move called Gomu Gomu no Star Gun, which even Kizaru realizes has hurt him badly. Unfortunately for Luffy, he has reached his limit with his form, and he changes back to normal and falls to the ground in a nearly unconscious state. The Vegatank 08 also hits the ground and breaks, but thankfully everyone within is okay. As they pick themselves up, Saturn appears before them. Doctor. Vegapunk recognizes Saturn, who tells Vegapunk that he should have been dead already. Bonnie becomes filled with rage as thoughts about her father run through her head, and she grabs a nearby katana and stabs Saturn in the chest as tears flow from her eyes. Low-ranking Marines are told to maintain distance from the center while Vice and Rear Admirals stay behind, the reason being that lower-ranked soldiers are not worthy of being in Saturn's presence. Some Marines react to his arrival with shock and confusion, while others prepare to open fire on Bonnie for stabbing Saturn. Saturn, however, orders everyone to stand down, claiming that if he did not want to get stabbed, he would have dodged. He forces Bonnie off him by emitting something from his eyes, and he grabs her, also taking out the sword. Sanji tries to help her, but he gets hurt by the same attack and falls to the ground. The wound Saturn suffers then heals instantly to Frankie's shock. Some Marines try to take advantage of the situation and capture Vegapunk, but Saturn orders them to stop, stating they have nowhere to run. He then insults Kizaru for taking so long to complete his job, and Kizaru weakly apologizes, saying that he will not be able to move for a while. Saturn understands why that is and walks over to Luffy, who he immediately tries to stab with one of his legs. Frankie, thankfully, pushes Luffy out of the way with strong right and then grabs him, bringing him back to his side. Saturn acknowledges the strength of the Straw Hat Pirates while Frankie laughs that it was interesting even the world's leaders want Luffy dead. Saturn says that Luffy's and Bonnie's presence on Egghead was unexpected, but they are surrounded and the island is on the brink of destruction, though he would like to see them attempt to escape. He tells Vegapunk that he is disappointed by his betrayal but thanks him for his contributions. He then says that he wants everyone present to die in the most painful manner possible for defying the world government, and asks why when humans are told not to do something they do it anyway. All the while, he tightens his grip on Bonnie, causing her pain, but no one can help her because he is keeping everyone down, which Vegapunk suspects is because of his devil fruit power. Bonnie looks at Saturn and tells him that he killed her father, but Saturn reveals that Kuma was born a slave and a member of the Buccaneers, which, according to him, had committed a grave crime, and have now all gone extinct with Kuma the sole survivor. He then holds Bonnie up in the air and orders the Marines to aim for her head while Sanji and Vegapunk demand him to stop. In Bonnie's mind, she remembers Kuma telling her that long ago, Kuma wanted to become a hero who would save people from suffering like Nika. Bonnie asks if Nika would set her free too, and Kuma confidently says he will. A flashback starts taking place 47 years ago. In Sorbet Kingdom, Bartholomew Kuma was born to a buccaneer man named Clap and a human woman. Despite Clap's wishes, his blood information was leaked to the world government, which caused them all to be captured and enslaved by the world nobles. Kuma was worked to the bone and beaten by his master, and one day his father told him that his mother had died. Kuma had a complete breakdown, but his father told him that the warrior of liberation, Nika, would one day save him, so he must endure. He started dancing and singing in the rhythm of Nika's heartbeat to cheer him up, but was then shot and killed for being too loud. Several years later in West Blue, the world nobles organized the triennial tournament during which they would eradicate an entire population of an island. The site of that year's tournament was God Valley, which was unaffiliated with the world government and despised by the world nobles for its name. Their goal was to kill all the people on the island and some of their troublesome slaves, and then claim the island and its rich resources in the name of the world government. The king tried to stop them, but he was killed by Figarland Garling, who suffered a massive deduction, yet he felt it would give the other contestants a good handicap. Saturn was present during the event and was informed that Kuma had been recaptured after attempting to escape. The ones who had done so, however, were other slaves who told him that if he ran away, the rest of them would die too. They were stopped by the arrival of a young Emporio Ivankov and his sister Ginny. He spotted Kuma and said that he had heard that the buccaneers share the blood of the giants. Ivankov proudly proclaimed that he would live on and asked if Kuma would do the same. The world nobles explained the rules of the native hunting competition. Among the rabbits were 13 super rare rabbits worth 10,000 points each and 150 rare rabbits. Any one-shot kill would earn an excellent bonus, and luxurious prizes were offered for the champion of the competition. Some world nobles tried to get a head start, but they were stopped and informed that the hunt would begin in an hour, giving the people time to run and hide. Several of them were running desperately for their lives and begging it all to be a dream, while others claimed that it was not right for humans to treat other humans as their toys. Meanwhile, Kong contacted Monkey D, Garp, who was on vacation. Kong wanted Garp to go to Hachinosu, but he would not say why because if something happened, he would be in trouble. Garp surmised that Kong was talking about the world nobles' field trip, and reminded Kong that he had told him many times not to mess with Hachinosu and not to underestimate the Rocks pirates wanting to take back the island's treasure. Garp then asked what Kong had to be scared of if he had escorts, but when Kong mentioned Roger was involved, Garp immediately declared that he was going. However, the Rocks pirates had already left Hachinosu, on God Valley. While the competition was underway, Ivankov started rallying several people by telling them that none of them would escape from this game alive, and when it was all said and done, the events would be hidden from the history books. Some people believed that they would go free if they survived the 3 weeks of the competition, but Ivankov stated that was a lie to give them false hope in order to make the game more interesting. Therefore, if they wanted to live, they needed to move right now. With help from a shark fishman, Ivankov was freed from his chains, and Ginny told everyone that 2 of competition's prizes would be their means of escape: the Uoo no Mai model Suryu and the Nikyu no Mai. Ivankov said that with these 2 devil fruits, they could make it off the island and pass the marine blockade, but the problem was that the fruits were in the center of the island. However, Ginny revealed that she was skilled in thieving, wiretapping, and broadcasting, and all of this information had been leaked to the outside world about 2 weeks ago, so she was positive someone had heard it. When Ginny said that they needed a decoy for this plan to work, Kuma volunteered, citing that his strong physiology would protect him, and he would rather risk his own life than others. Ivankov accepted but stated that he would not let Kuma die either. Soon, the Rocks pirates and other pirate crews started attacking the Marines, catching them off guard. Rocks ordered his crew to seize the treasure, and several of them, including Edward Newgate, Shiki, Buckingham Stussy, Charlotte Linlin, Kaidu, and Gloriosa, made their way onto the island, and pretty soon, Roger and his pirate crew did too. The God's Knights tried to defend the world nobles, and eventually Garp and his soldiers arrived to back up the Marines, leading to an all-out conflict. During the fight, Ivankov and Kuma managed to acquire the 2 devil fruits. However, before Ivankov could eat the Uoo no Mai, model Siryu, Linlin slammed him into a wall and took the fruit. She tried to take the Nikyu no Mai as well, but Ivankov told Kuma to quickly eat it and save himself. Right after Kuma ate the fruit, he was attacked by J. Garcia Saturn. Saturn told Kuma that as a member of the Buccaneers, he existed only to live and die as a slave, as decided by the course of history. Kuma, however, stood up to Saturn and told him that it did not make sense for people to be born important or a slave. He proclaimed that he would emulate Nika and use his power to save the weak and defenseless, but Saturn simply stated that this was why Kuma and his people would be eliminated. Afterwards, the events on God Valley vanished into the darkness of history. Despite the chaos, Kuma, Ivankov, and Ginny were able to escape God Valley along with more than 500 other people. The 3 went into hiding in Sorbet Kingdom and stayed in the church that Kuma's parents once managed. Ivankov realized that no information about God Valley had been revealed to the public aside from Garp's now legendary reputation. Kuma started praying for a while as he stated that he wished he could have saved more lives, but Ivankov and Ginny would tell him that he had done more than enough and that Kuma's hands had brought freedom to the people, calling them the hands of liberation. After that, Ivankov decided to head out on his own while Kuma and Ginny remained in Sorbet, with the 3 hoping to see each other again. Ginny told Kuma that from that day forward, she would be his big sister since she was older than him. The 2 began chopping wood to sell and make money. When Kuma was accosted by some kids who called him a monster for his size, Ginny beat them up in his defense, and Kuma apologized and used his powers to push their pain out of their bodies, much to their joy. That night, the 2 were eating dinner with Kuma remarking on how much of a big eater Ginny turned out to be. The two then broke down into tears of joy over their freedom and newfound happiness. 8 years pass following the God Valley incident, and Kuma, now 17 years old, had continued to live peacefully in Sorbet Kingdom and been using his powers to push people's pain out of their bodies, which had earned him much respect from the old folk. They asked if he could do this for them on weekdays, but Ginny, now 21, strictly stated that he could only do this for them on Sundays. She was also annoyed that these people treated the church like a camp or a hospital and did not even pay for his services. The old folk, however, laughed at her stinginess and mused that her foul mouth had not stopped many men from professing their love for her, as she was quite the beauty. Some other people dropped by asking for Kuma, saying that his face calmed them. Kuma was touched by this, though Ginny retorted that he pampered these people way too much. One of the old folk stated that they would pay if they could, but the heavenly tribute was making it difficult for them to make ends meet. It turned out that Sorbet Kingdom had received a new king named Bakori, and he was reputed to be a cold-blooded tyrant who sent sick people that could not pay the tribute to a terrible prison where they would eventually die of starvation because he refused to feed them. In short, the people considered him caring more for what the world nobles say than the voices of the people he was supposed to protect. Kuma told his patients that he would continue to treat them for light pain and sickness, so they could come every week, which they deeply appreciated. At night, once all the people left, Kuma took the bubble of pain and sickness he had removed from the people and took it into his own body, causing him great discomfort and deeply saddening Ginny. As Ginny treated him, she tearfully told him that no one knew that he was doing this to himself. Kuma said that he had no choice because if someone did not take in that bubble of pain, it would eventually return to the person it had come from. But it made people happy, and that was more than enough for him. He apologized to her for making her worry, and the two ate together. 5 years later, Ginny proposed to Kuma, but he rejected her, much to her annoyance as she believed she could make him happy. Kuma stated, though, that he already was, but in reality he feared that because of his buccaneer blood, she may suffer the same way he and his mother had done. He shifted topics to discuss the freedom fighters and the protests they had been starting in every kingdom, and now the world government had finally issued a warrant for them. Kuma took notice of Monkey D. Dragon and stated he viewed him as a cool person, and that someday he would set out to sea and spend his life helping others. He then went to receive some fish brought to Ginny by some other would-be suitors, much to her annoyance. 3 years later, Kuma demanded that the kingdom's soldiers return all of the people they kidnapped, but they refused, saying that the law said they could use them however they saw fit. Enraged, Kuma attacked them, causing him to be called a traitor. It turned out that King Bakori had split Sorbet Kingdom in two. The northern half of the island was the true kingdom for people who could pay the heavenly tribute, while everyone else that made too little was cut off and resided in the lawless area. As a result of Kuma's defiance, he was imprisoned, and Ginny and several others who tried to help him followed suit. Kuma knew that if this policy continued, this kingdom would discriminate against others, and Ginny said that if they fought against the king, who was under the world noble's thumb, it was the equivalent of fighting against the entire world government. However, the freedom fighters invaded Sorbet and deposed Bakori, abolishing the slave policy and freeing the kingdom from the oppressive government. Dragon and Ivankov then found Kuma locked up, and the latter invited him to join and change their world for the better. Together, Dragon, Ivankov, and Kuma would go on to reform the freedom fighters as the Revolutionary Army following the Ohara incident, turning their small bouts of protesting into a full-scale rebellion. Due to lacking funds, they became mercenaries lending their services to other rebellions against their oppressors, and Dragon offered to train anyone who decided to join up. Kuma was surprised that Dragon knew how to use weapons, and he stated he had once served the Marines but quit because he had seen no justice there. Ivankov commented that Dragon just wanted to help people, and Kuma proclaimed his loyalty to him, which Dragon accepted. 8 years later, Ginny, who also had joined the army and served as a captain, expressed happiness at meeting up with Kuma's division. Unfortunately, she was captured by an unexpected enemy, and Dragon was quickly notified of this distress. At Baltigo, a request for backup is sent to the headquarters from South Blue, as the Revolutionary Army station there is struggling with the Tumi uprising. Ivankov responds that they cannot because their hands are full dealing with the injured at Goa Kingdom. Kuma, however, says he can go, but Ivankov warns him that he is being rash, even stating that he has become more reckless since that day. It turns out that Ginny was captured by the world government and forced to become the wife of a world noble, which is why Kuma has been continuously enraged. 2 years pass and Ginny ends up contacting the army. But to their horror, she reports that she got sick, which is why they threw her out of the Holy Land. The reason for her calling was to inform them of this and that it would be her goodbye to them. Kuma begs her to tell him her location so he can go to her, but she tells him that she is dying and he should not see it. Kuma still insists, and he immediately heads for the one place he knew she would be, the chapel in Sorbet Kingdom. When he arrives, though, he is too late. She has passed away. The The people told him when her skin was exposed to sunlight, her entire body turned blue and hardened like stone, but the only reason she could have had to burn up her remaining time was to protect something her baby daughter, Bonnie. Kuma buries Ginny and promises to her that he will raise her child well. Kuma did his best to raise the small Bonnie, who inherited her mother's appetite, and she quickly came to see him as her father. He of course still fought with the Revolutionary Army, but he would always make time to care for her. One day, he boards up all of the church's windows, and it is because Bonnie somehow inherited the same disease that killed Ginny. Kuma brought her to many doctors, but they could not treat her because of how peculiar the disease is. Ultimately, Kuma chooses to quit the army so he can take care of Bonnie, which Dragon accepts, even offering to find doctors himself to help. By the time Bonnie was 5 years old, children started making fun of her for never going outside, going so far as to call her a vampire. Bonnie, however, was able to defend herself and would pound those kids. Kuma reminds her that it is dangerous for her to go outside, and Bonnie apologizes. She then says that the kids also made fun of the stone under her eye, but he tells her that it looks like a jewel to him, and those kids were just jealous, which makes Bonnie happy to hear. While they play together, Kuma asks Bonnie where she would like to go on a trip after she gets better, and she says she would like to go to the legendary Sky Islands since they are so close to the sun, so they might meet Nika. Kuma agrees that they can go there for her 20th birthday, with Fishman Island being the destination of her 19th birthday. Unfortunately, Kuma meets with a doctor who informs him that the disease Bonnie has is sapphire scales and is incurable, and even if she is not exposed to sunlight, she will likely die by the age of 10, which breaks Kuma's heart. As Kuma ponders about what to do, Bonnie reveals she overheard him talking with the doctor, and he confirms that her condition will continue until she is 10 years old, but due to his phrasing, Bonnie misinterprets the meaning as that she will be cured by the time she becomes 10 years old. Unable to tell her the truth, Kuma goes along with it. 1 year later, Kuma is informed by the people that Bakori is attempting to rid the kingdom of its weak and elderly once again, and has now gone completely insane as he seeks to burn people in their homes. Kuma saves as many people as he can from Bakori's cruel actions, despite everyone else fearful for his own life. As the fire rages from afar, Bakori says that he took inspiration from a kingdom in the east which did something similar to curry favor with the world nobles. He also says that the only way a kingdom can become rich and powerful is if someone is willing to do the devil's work. He is met with opposition from the people, but Bakori simply says they are not seeing the bigger picture, so he orders some of them killed. Kuma, however, finally arrives at the castle and completely demolishes it despite Bakori's warning of the potential consequences. As a result, this night would go down in history as Sorbet's solo revolution. In the Holy Land, Saturn is informed of Sorbet receiving a new king. The king is said to be Kuma himself, as the people desperately wanted him, and he did so, but only in name. In reality, the kingdom is being ruled by the previous king before Bakori, Bulldog, who the people were very fond of. Kuma still resided in his church healing the elderly with his powers, though the people would still call him their king. One day, Kuma and several others see a grown-up Bonnie running around, which shocks everyone as she is supposed to be 10 years old. Bonnie says she was trying to build up her stamina so she can sail with her father, but even she was unaware of her current condition. When she looks in the mirror, her own shock causes her to change back into a little girl, and Gyogyo realizes Bonnie has eaten a devil fruit, which they learn is the Toshi 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 no Mai. Bonnie tries practicing making herself look old, but Kuma does not want her to overexert herself. That is when Bulldog appears in the church requesting an audience with Kuma. At the same time, he brought his mother, the Queen Dowager Connie, whom Gyogyo mistakenly thinks is Bonnie that successfully made herself an old woman. The reason for Bulldog meeting Kuma was to inform him that Bakori is plotting another comeback based on this demonizing propaganda, going around claiming Kuma is an evil tyrant by taking the throne by force and setting fires himself. The people are outraged by Bakori's depravity, and Bulldog says that Bakori still has the backing of the world government, and with them he will most likely make a play to reclaim the throne by force. The people tell Kuma they do not want Bakori back, which he reciprocates, and he says he will fight back even though it means he will not be able to stay in the country, because the government will brand him a criminal. With that said, Kuma asks Bulldog to become Sorbet's official king and to take Bonnie in for her safety, all of which Bulldog accepts. Kuma then parts ways with Bonnie, saying he'll be back as soon as he can. Sure enough, Bakori returned with an armada of marine ships, all of which Kuma sunk. After that, he set to sea and became a pirate, with his incredible power leading him to acquire a bounty. As he sailed around the world, he would visit places he would later send the Straw Hat Pirates to, such as Torino Kingdom, Karaigana Island, where he was attacked by Abdullah and Jeet, who tried to claim his bounty and failed miserably, Karakuri Island, Wetheria, and the Boyne Archipelago, where he tried to gain some clue to save Bonnie, but his attempts fail. Eventually, Kuma crosses paths with the Revolutionary Army and he reunites with Dragon, who he catches up with. Kuma is asked by Below Betty if she could become the commander of the East Army, as Dragon would not let anyone else be the commander without Kuma's blessing, which he does. Dragon tells Kuma that Sabo and Koala have come a long way since he last met them, and it would be nice if he saw it himself, and Kuma admits he would love to return to the Revolutionary Army one day. That is when Dragon tells Kuma about Vegapunk, who most recently had to leave Punk Hazard due to Caesar's actions, so security might be lax around him. Kuma immediately heads for him and thanks Dragon for telling him, who tells him to let the winds of fate carry him wherever. Kuma returns home and reunites with Bonnie, who has learned to fight. The two go to the Marine Science Division Lab 8, the future Egghead. Vegapunk tells Kuma that he can cure Bonnie using a technique that has never been used until now, which is stem cell transplant. He does a checkup on Kuma and learns he is a buccaneer, which causes him to ask Kuma to be the template for his clone soldiers, saying it will be the price paid for Bonnie's cure. Kuma accepts but asks what the clones will do, and Dr. Vegapunk tells him that they will have bodies so sturdy they can deflect bullets, and will be so powerful that they can subjugate pirates and protect the weak and helpless. Kuma is touched by this and agrees to the offer, though he knew Dragon himself would not be happy with this arrangement as long as Bonnie can live. Vegapunk calls him a saint. Kuma corrects him, saying he is a pacifist who wants peace, which leads to Vegapunk dubbing the soldiers pacifista. However, in the Holy Land, Saturn says that Dr. Vegapunk is a fool for not doing more with the project, as in his eyes, the soldiers are supposed to be weapons, and the more people they can kill, the more potent they are. As such, he says he has his own plans going forward for the project. Kizaru arrives at the lab and complains about how cold the island is, but Dr. Vegapunk tells him that this lab will be the future, and his head is overflowing with so many ideas that he cannot think straight. Kizaru, however, says that this is the reason why he did not notice the Denden Mushi that was observing him and his conversation with Kuma, which is why he was dispatched. Kizaru even added that Dr. Vegapunk should have been more cautious, which he cannot help but admit. Dr. Vegapunk talks with Saturn, who tells the scientist that he does not want Kuma to be the face of the Marines' clone soldiers because he is a pirate. As such, he has his own set of conditions for this deal with Kuma. The first condition is for Kuma to become a member of the 7 Warlords of the Sea, as they were down a member due to Ace's exploits. The second condition is that Kuma himself becomes a weapon of the Marines by being transformed into a cyborg. The third and final condition is that as part of the transformation and to ensure he does not turn against them due to his history as a revolutionary, he must give up his free will and individuality. Vegapunk yells that taking away Kuma's free will is the equivalent of killing him and leaving behind nothing but a soulless robot, and deduces that Saturn wants this because the other warlords do not follow orders. Saturn retorts that Vegapunk has no right to complain since he is a military scientist, and he sees it as a suitable price to pay for Bonnie's medical procedure. Dr. Vegapunk is still outraged, but Kuma tells him to do it as he says he was worried there was no hope for Bonnie, but now that this opportunity has presented itself, he will gratefully accept his fate if it means she can live. Saturn asks Dr. Vegapunk how long Bonnie and Kuma's procedures will last, and Dr. Vegapunk says Bonnie's treatment will last for 6 months, but she will need to wait a year before she can step into natural sunlight. Kuma's, on the other hand, will take a minimum of 2 years, and Kuma is relieved as this means Bonnie will be cured by age 10. Saturn then asks Kuma what is to stop him from turning against the world government once her treatment is complete. Kuma says he will not run, but Saturn insists that Bonnie be left in world government's custody once her treatment finishes, and she will be set free once Kuma's mind is erased. Dr. Vegapunk is once again outraged as it means the two will never see each other again, which Saturn confirms. He says that Kuma's modifications will begin immediately and will be an ongoing process as he starts his tenure as a warlord. After Bonnie is cured, any contact between the two will be forbidden so they do not escape together, and he threatens to enslave Bonnie if they defy him. Though shocked, Kuma says he will not make contact with Bonnie, but he has a request of his own that Bonnie is not told any of this, not her treatment, and not her status as a hostage. He also asks that she be treated in Sorbet Kingdom, because it is her home. Saturn does agree to this, but says it makes no difference where she is kept as long as the world government oversees it. With that established, Kuma tells Bonnie that the two of them will be staying in the lab for the next 6 months, though he lies saying he is feeling ill himself and needs to be checked, but Bonnie was just happy the two could continue to be together. As time passed, Kuma and Bonnie underwent their respective procedures, all the while they would grow close to Dr. Vegapunk, Sentomaru, and even Kizaru. Once the 6 months pass, Dr. Vegapunk reveals that the treatment was a success, and after a year of rehabilitation, Bonnie will be completely cured. Kuma and Bonnie thank him, with Bonnie hoping to visit Dr. Vegapunk once she is all better, which he accepts. Returning to Sorbet, Bonnie tells everyone that she will be better in a year, which makes them extremely happy, and it also means that Bulldog and Connie will take care of her again. Kuma prepares to leave and tells Bonnie he will not see her again for at least a year, and though Bonnie was saddened by this, Kuma offers to write to her, which she accepts. Kuma also says that next they meet they can sail together, which Bonnie looks forward to, though she was completely unaware that Kuma was lying the whole time. Just then, a nurse named Alpha, who is secretly a member of CP8, comes in saying she will take it from here, creating a gate and a checkpoint for people who wish to visit. She also visually reminds Kuma what will happen if dishonors the deal he made with Saturn, but he says he will not return. Before he leaves, he thanks Bonnie for being born, and she and the others happily send him off. News of Kuma as one of the 7 warlords starts to spread after, especially since he obediently obeys every order the world government gives him. The Revolutionary Army are completely perplexed by this because they know Kuma better than anyone. In the meantime, Kuma writes to Bonnie, telling her that he is doing okay and that he is finding interesting locations for the two of them to sail together. He makes his way to East Blue and to Fuchsia Village just as he receives a new order from the world government. Kuma watches Luffy perform his Gomu Gomu no-axe attack on some rocks, completely pulverizing them and scaring the local wildlife. Kuma thinks back to his time with Dragon, and he mentioned how familiar Dragon seemed to be with the land, and when he went off to stretch his legs, he found a remote village with a young boy living there that seemed to remind him of Dragon. Dragon, however, tells Kuma if he keeps talking about this, he might as well kill him himself, confusing Kuma. Dragon says that a child is their parents' weak spot. Kuma quickly realizes what he means and drops the topic. Luffy, meanwhile, is amazed by his new move and decides to save it when he confronts a super strong enemy after he gets his crew so he can protect them. The Den Den Mushi on Kuma then starts to ring and he teleports himself away before Luffy can notice him. Luffy comments that he felt a super strong presence and searches to find and defeat it. The mission Kuma received was to destroy a pirate crew that raided a nearby merchant ship. However, he first stops to check on the merchants, choosing to safely escort them to a hospital first before going after the pirates. When he does, he instead tells the pirates to turn themselves in, and they nervously return all of the cargo they stole to avoid any more trouble. All the while, Kuma continues to write letters to Bonnie, who eagerly awaits to read them. Unfortunately, she has not received any of them. Gyogyo says he might have forgotten because of work or the news queues keep doing their jobs incorrectly. Either way, Connie says that one day a letter will pop up, unbeknownst to all of them. Alpha has been intercepting the newspaper and Kuma's letters, giving the paper to Bonnie while tearing up Kuma's letters in disgust. By this point, Kuma has been sending around 10 letters a month. Alpha comes in to give Bonnie her medicine, though she is surprised to see her on top of a clearly beaten Gyogyo. He gives her the medicine, which is actually a bad-tasting placebo, as Gyogyo asks Connie why they are silent about Bonnie's powers, and Connie says it is to be safe. Meanwhile, on Lab 08, Dr. Vegapunk has successfully removed his brain from his head, and now all he has to do is lift it and the lab itself into the air. Stussy, who was with him, comments that his new appearance suits him, and Kuma, who was also there, asks what will happen when he loses his individuality, causing Stussy to wonder which is worse, a human with no free will, or a clone that has it, thus prompting Dr. Vegapunk to remind her that he considers her human. Dr. Vegapunk tells him that without his personality, he will not hesitate to harm anyone if ordered to, even a child. However, he roughly has 1 more year until the procedure is complete, so he should still have some free will. Kuma starts writing another letter, saying he wants to let Bonnie know how much he loves her right until the very end, which Stussy finds very sweet. In the letter, Kuma wishes Bonnie a happy 9th birthday, which she celebrates with her family in Sorbet. At night, she does not receive the letter, and she starts to cry. After half a year passes, Bonnie is completely healed of sapphire scales. Also, Kuma continues to aid the Revolutionary Army whenever he can, but he leaves without saying a word. Dragon says they need to respect Kuma's wishes to keep them uninformed. As for Bonnie, Alpha continuously refuses to let her outside, stating she needs to stay put before her 10th birthday, even though that went against Vegapunk's estimate. It turns out Connie overheard Alpha reveal herself as a government agent, making her even more suspicious that she will not let Bonnie go free. Connie then comes up with a plan to sneak Bonnie out of the country and have her set sail to locate Kuma, sending Gyogyo and his buddies with her in her search. The plan involved Bonnie transforming herself to look like Connie and walk away with some luggage, with Alpha none the wiser. She basks in the outside world as she reaches her friends, who show off their new ship made to look like a pizza. Alpha, however, finds out about the deception and starts chasing after her, planning to beat Bonnie to an inch of her life and chain her up and kill any of her accomplices. Bonnie intercepts her, using her distorted future move to make her look like Mika based on the stories Kuma told her. With a giant fist, she knocks out Alpha, allowing her and her new crew to set sail. Word eventually got out to the world government that Bonnie had escaped them, and eventually Bonnie would make a name for herself as an infamous pirate in the new era. The newly formed Bonnie pirates sail to an island where they believe Kuma is. They are attacked by the Marines, who believe they are an evil bunch due to reports that towns they attacked were filled with injured children and seniors, who were actually people who had their ages altered by Bonnie's powers. Kuma, who was in fact on the island, overhears Bonnie trying to find him but knows he cannot make contact with her for her sake, though he never expected her to become a pirate. After he leaves, the Bonnie pirates continue sailing in search of him, but Bonnie says they can take their time because she wants to find Nika as well, imagining how happy Kuma would be if he found him. Meanwhile, news of Luffy's victory over the Arlong pirates started to spread and his first bounty poster started circulating. This prompted Dragon to make his way to Logatown after learning that Smoker was in charge of that area, and Ace informed Jinbe of Luffy, the latter of which was surprised to see he took down Arlong. Kuma also sees Luffy's poster and muses how both his and Dragon's kids have become pirates. As for Bonnie, she tells her crew that they will only steal from bad people and will ignore cries for help unless they really need it. Bonnie puts lipstick on declaring herself a grown-up, and an anti-eyebrow where her sapphire scale stones used to be, thinking it will make it easier for Kuma to recognize her, and she will make a name for herself in order to get his attention. On Egghead, Kuma sees the pacifista clones of himself and calls it unsettling. Vegapunk says their creation is going as smoothly as Kuma's own modifications. Kuma tells Vegapunk about Luffy, which surprises him that Dragon has a son, and Kuma says Luffy's declaration of war against the world government at Enies lobby reminds him of Nika, especially since Luffy has rubber powers. Later, Kuma goes to Thriller Bark and confronts the Straw Hats after Moria's defeat to capture Luffy, though he chooses to leave him after seeing the loyalty of his crew. After that, Kuma sails to Sabati Archipelago where he is notified about the upcoming execution of Ace in the war with Whitebeard, with Kuma saying he will be there. However, he briefly sees Bonnie eating in a restaurant and says to himself that this is the last time he will ever see her face before he loses his free will. He is then notified of someone attacking a world noble at the human auctioning house and is shocked to learn someone would dare do such a thing, especially when they were so close to Marine headquarters. When he arrives on the scene, he becomes especially surprised to see that the culprit was none other than Luffy in response to his defense of Hachi. When he confronts them later and separates them, in his mind he apologizes to Dragon and Ivankov for leaving like he did, but he feels he can leave his own quiet mark on the world through Luffy and Bonnie. When Luffy yells that he could not save his crew, Kuma says in his mind that he is wrong. Kuma is separating them because he knows Luffy and his crew are not ready to tackle the new world yet and they need to get stronger first, eventually declaring Luffy to be the one who will someday save the world. Back on Egghead, Vegapunk is outraged by Saturn's order to install a self-destruct mechanism in Kuma if he ever goes rogue outside of the Five Elders' presence, but he is unable to go against his orders. Instead, Vegapunk pleads to let him keep a bit of his ego intact, even stating he invented something that can give one a split personality of sorts. Saturn, however, coldly orders that Kuma must lose all of his free will, even threatening to punish Vegapunk if he discovers he disobeyed him, since he is a scientist himself. When Vegapunk said this meant that Kuma would never be able to reunite with his daughter. Kuma stated it was good to know how Vegapunk felt. This caused shock in Vegapunk as he did not mean for the warlord to hear that, while Kuma reminded him that it was he who gave him superhuman hearing. As Vegapunk gets Kuma ready for the operation, Kuma thanks Dr. Vegapunk for being so concerned for him, and in turn, Vegapunk tells Kuma he had fun knowing him these past 2 years. Kuma asks Vegapunk to program him to protect the Thousand Sunny after the war with Whitebeard ends until one of them returns, calling it a compromise to being unable to see them grow anymore. Vegapunk asks what he has planned for Luffy, and Kuma says that his actions remind him of Nika, and he believes he can change the seas for the better. Before the operation, Vegapunk asks Kuma to push out his memories to study, to which Kuma agrees. He explains that the bubble is a copy of his memories, but it will disappear when it is touched. Vegapunk tells him that he has a contraption that will preserve the bubble and allow him to study it without disturbing it. As Kuma thinks about all of the people in his life and wonders if he caused anyone harm with his actions, but Vegapunk, who is drenched in tears, tells him that his life didn't trouble anyone, but his death will hurt all who love him. He calls Kuma a hero to everyone who met him, and Kuma thanks him for it. Before the modifications are complete, Kuma thanks Dr. Vegapunk for saving Bonnie's life, and if he ever sees her again, to wish her a happy 10th birthday for him. Returning to the present, it is shown that Bonnie was able to see everything from the copy of Kuma's memory bubble, which has now disappeared like he said, and has completely broken down in tears. Bonnie emerges from the room as Dr. Vegapunk asks if she saw everything, which she confirms. Dr. Vegapunk apologizes for breaking his promise with Kuma, but to his surprise, Bonnie, now a child, hugs him and apologizes to him. The two sit and Dr. Vegapunk shows Bonnie the thing he planned on, giving her a sapphire necklace that looks like the sun, which Kuma intended to be her 10th birthday gift. Bonnie is extremely happy to receive it and states she will always cherish it. After that, Dr. Vegapunk muses how strong Luffy became after those 2 years of training. Bonnie asks him if Luffy is the son of Dragon, who was Kuma's friend and doctor. Vegapunk confirms, but he never imagined the two of them would come to Egghead together. He tells her that lots of things happened when she went into the room and he will tell her everything while they rejoin the Straw Hat Pirates. He apologizes to Bonnie for his actions with Kuma, but Bonnie tells him that it was never his fault. All the fault falls on J. Garcia Saturn. In the present, Saturn coldly tells Bonnie that Kuma is dead. The Straw Hats and the Vegapunks are still unable to move. Luffy starts asking for food. Kizaru shows concern for Vegapunk and Bonnie, and it is announced that Sentomaru has been captured. Outside of Egghead, people are reading the news about the siege, while on Momoro Island, Dragon asks Ivankov where he thinks Kuma would go if he still had a fragment of his natural instincts, and Ivankov says that if he were Kuma, he would go to marry Giowise. Dragon, however, knows that Kuma is different. Back on Egghead, Bonnie tells Saturn that if she is going to die, she will kill him no matter what as well, and uses Distortion Future Nika Matena Mirai to grow her fist large to punch him. However, her enlarged fist disappears and she becomes weak again, and Saturn once again crushes her in his hand. Saturn tells her that he is not surprised that Bonnie knows the name of Nika since she is Kuma's daughter, but he says she does not know what that is exactly, while he thinks that she has not drawn the connection between Nika and Luffy's transformation in her mind. He then notices that Luffy somehow managed to start devouring food that appeared next to him and orders the Marines to restrain him with sea stone. As Bonnie wonders why she cannot alter her age around Saturn, he reveals to her that he was the one who gave her this power. According to Saturn, he conducted an experiment on her as a baby to give her the powers of the Toshi no Mai without actually having her eat it, and while it was a success, he deemed the fruit worthless. He says that while the user can transform however they want regarding the foreseeable future, its abilities weaken when their knowledge of the future differs from reality. He asks her if she wants to believe in Nika, but Bonnie declares Nika is real because she swore she would find him to save Kuma from his control, but Saturn says she is starting to believe he is not real. Saturn then tells her that Nika is nothing but a worthless buccaneer legend and quotes what Kuma said to him way back on God Valley to her. He also reveals another horrifying revelation: he was the one who infected Ginny with sapphire scales, which was a side effect from a failed experiment he conducted on her, but he was surprised to see Bonnie inherited the disease. Bonnie says that everything she went through was all Saturn's fault and Dr. Vegapunk becomes extremely livid that Saturn's heartless experiments are what caused Kuma to give away his free will in the first place. Saturn, however, simply says he cannot understand the feelings of a mere insect. Just then, Kuma arrives on Egghead, much to the shock of the government. He starts making his way to the center of the island, where Saturn is, as the Marines try to inform everyone about this development. Saturn does not believe Kuma could have come here, while Dr. Vegapunk is confused why Kuma is here at all. As he continues to charge forward while the Marines shoot him, Bonnie thinks that she should just die because of everything Kuma went through. She starts crying loudly, but Saturn demands she shut up and orders the Marines to shoot her head off. Before they can shoot, Kuma blows them all away, so Saturn throws Bonnie to the ground and prepares to impale her with his leg. However, Kuma arrives in the nick of time to block the attack with his own body, before pulling Saturn's leg out of his back and grabbing it. He hardens his fist with Busoshoku Haki and prepares to punch a terrified Saturn. Saturn demands an explanation from Dr. Vegapunk because a few days after the Revolutionary Army rescued Kuma from Mary Giowise, he activated the self-destruct mechanism, so he should be dead. Kuma's fist lands on Saturn and sends him flying through several buildings that collapse on him. The Marines are left in sheer disbelief that one of the 5 elders was attacked by a slave, while Kuma falls to his knees. Thanks to that, though, everyone can move again. Sanji and Frankie rush to take Bonnie back to the upper levels of the island so they can escape. Dr. Vegapunk, meanwhile, is pondering the situation. He reveals that the self-destruct mechanism Saturn forced him to install was never designed to blow Kuma up, because Dr. Vegapunk suspected Saturn would exploit that. The device was supposed to simply shut Kuma down completely and leave him in a vegetative state. This is why Dr. Vegapunk is so confused by Kuma's presence, because even with Bonnie being in danger, Kuma should not have been able to come. He then starts speculating that the reason is due to a special power of the Buccaneers beside their strength. All the while, Kuma hugs his daughter. Kizaru remarks that everything is over now. Sentomaru is relieved to see his old friend again, and the Marines report that Luffy has vanished before they could restrain him. Bonnie thanks Kuma for everything he did for her, such as writing the letters that never reached Bonnie. She even says that her mother was an amazing person. She tells him that she does not care if everyone calls him a tyrant to her. He is her amazing and kind-hearted father. Saturn emerges from the rubble seething with rage, while also having lost one of his horns and his right arm. He demands an explanation, but Dr. Vegapunk simply says this is his own doing, though he also suspects it was due to love in the end. Saturn scoffs at this notion as his horn and arm regenerate, to the shock of Sanji. Saturn tries to attack Kuma again as Bonnie tells him to get out of the way, but Sanji intercepts and deflects Saturn's leg, declaring he will not let him hurt Bonnie anymore. Frankie announces he and the crew owe Kuma a huge debt as he uses Radical Beam to blast a hole through Saturn. Kizaru, however, appears behind Frankie and blasts him away, declaring he will be putting the crew's growth to the test, while Saturn's injury heals. Bonnie tells Dr. Vegapunk that Kuma cannot move, so Atlas carries him, but Kizaru says that he needs to wrap things up, especially now that Kuma has arrived. Vegapunk, however, calls Kizaru a sad man without a heart, which Kizaru agrees, saying he should have brought a darker pair of shades. Finally, Saturn orders a buster call to destroy Egghead completely, with Dr. Vegapunk studies Kuma's existence and Luffy's powers being all the justification he needs to see the island annihilated. All Marines are ordered to return to the ships before the buster call can begin. Dahl tells Saturn and Kizaru to return to the ships with them, but Saturn says the two of them will remain on the island and to begin the bombardment as soon as possible. Dahl is hesitant, but Kizaru sternly orders her to leave, and she does. Vegapunk demands to know why Saturn wants all of Egghead Island destroyed if he just came for his life, claiming that if the island is destroyed, it will set mankind back by an entire century. He pleads with the two of them to call off the attack, but Saturn refuses, claiming Vegapunk might be hiding more things from the world government on the island, but he also says that mankind has no need for further advancement. Saturn then tells Dr. Vegapunk that he ordered the ship with all of the researchers hunted down and destroyed, to the scientists' shock. Saturn tries to justify his decision by saying the researchers may have known something about the Void Century, so he wanted them all dead to ensure they do not tell anyone. Dr. Vegapunk yells that none of them knew anything, so they were not criminals, but Saturn tells Dr. Vegapunk that it is his fault for getting them dragged into his thirst for knowledge. The Pacifista are ordered to remain on the island as the Marines board their ships. Sanji tells Frankie and Atlas to get to the vacuum rocket and reunite with everyone at the lava phase. Bonnie asks Sanji about Vegapunk, and Sanji reassures her he will go back for them. Once they take off, Sanji contacts Nami asking about her status, with her telling him they made it to the back entrance and asks what happened on his end. He tells her what has been going on, and she, Chopper, and Usopp react with fear that a buster call is incoming. Nami asks Sanji if Luffy is with him, but he says he lost sight of him. Nami also tells him that Zoro is still fighting Lucci and Jinbe was sent to get him. Nami also tells Sanji that Lilith did not fall down with the others and Brook had gone to help her move the Thousand Sunny. However, she follows up by revealing that the Vega Force 01 was completely destroyed, so their previous plan is no longer viable. With the ship, Lilith praises Brook for coming up with an idea for getting the ship to the back entrance, which involved the latter freezing the clouds with his powers for the ship to slide on. However, when Lilith asks how they plan on stopping when they get there, he says he did not think of that, much to her annoyance, and the two start panicking. Meanwhile, the buster call finally begins and much of the Fabrio phase is destroyed as Vegapunk helplessly watches. To make matters worse, Kizaru destroys the vacuum rocket's tube, causing everyone to fall out of the air. Sanji moves to rescue them, but Saturn orders the Pacifista to kill Kuma and Bonnie both, calling it a fitting fate for the man who threw his life away for his daughter to live, even going so far as to call Kuma's struggles the height of folly. Dr. Vegapunk watches in horror as his soldiers prepare to blast the two. Elsewhere, Luffy has eaten a ton of food produced from Vegapunk's invention, but he has also been found by the Marines and cannot even move. Unbeknownst to both Vegapunk and Saturn, the ship that was sent to kill the researchers was sunk before it could accomplish its mission. A surviving Marine tries to contact Kizaru to let them know that they are coming to Egghead. Luffy finishes eating and instantly digests everything, to the shock of the Marines surrounding him. They get distracted by the cannon fire but try to maintain their composure long enough to restrain Luffy with Sea Stone. Fortunately, Luffy immediately goes into Gear 5th and blows them away before they can get him. Back with the others, Dr. Vegapunk contacts Atlas and tells her to relay a message to Bonnie. Atlas does so and Bonnie orders the Pacifista to not shoot them, and to instead help them escape the island. To the Marines and Saturn's complete horror and shock, the Pacifista opened fire on them, becoming their enemies once again. It turns out Dr. Vegapunk was so torn up over the thought of Kuma and his clones killing Bonnie that he programmed them all to obey her, and it is a level of authority that tops even the 5 elders. He also knew this secret would have dire consequences, especially for him, because Saturn impales Vegapunk with his leg for this defiance. Bonnie and Frankie watch in horror as a fuming Saturn orders Kizaru to kill them all immediately. Kizaru teleports up to them and blasts everyone with light beams before creating another light sword. Coming up right in front of Kuma, who was shielding Bonnie, he tells the two that he will kill them with a single slash so it will not hurt. However, Luffy arrives on the scene and punches Kizaru away, saving everyone. He also turns the ground rubber so everyone lands safely. Bonnie runs to Dr. Vegapunk's side as the Iron Giant starts stirring again. Bonnie hears the sound of Luffy's heartbeat and realizes it sounds like the tune Kuma taught her. Vegapunk tells her that he was like her at first. He did not connect the dots until he saw it himself, but he now has no doubt that Luffy is indeed the sun god Nika. He also declares that the Buster Call is a trivial problem for Luffy now, because everyone over the world has been praying for his return for hundreds of years. In addition, the Marines report that an insanely big ship has arrived on the northeast coast of the island and is mowing them down. It turns out to be Dory and Brogy, who declare they have come to rescue the Straw Hats, with both giants referring to Luffy as the sun god. The giants make landfall as Dory tells Oimo and Kashi to take the others and swing around the sides, sinking any ships they see and minding the cannon fire. The two giants accept, and the crew branches off with the Marines retaliating back. Usopp sees Dory and Brogy using a pair of binoculars and is brought to tears by the return of his old friends. Nami picks out Oimo and Kashi among the crowd and deduces they picked up the co-captains from Little Garden, which relieves Usopp as he feared he would not see them in Elbaf. Edison is surprised the Straw Hats know the duo and suspects they heard about the situation from the news that is already circulating regarding this incident. Realizing they have come to save them, Usopp says they need to finish their preparations to leave. Brook contacts Nami and tells him that they are getting close to their position, but Lilith, knowing they still cannot stop, tells Nami to pay attention to her directions. Elsewhere, Jinbe is still heading for Zoro's position as he is still locked in combat with Lucci. The two have grown exhausted, but Lucci tries to emotionally manipulate Zoro by calling him dead weight, because the crew will not leave without him, so he should just surrender and allow his crew the chance to flee with their lives. Zoro, however, mockingly insults Lucci for thinking he is in control of this fight. The Marines are informed that roughly 30 of their small to medium ships have been destroyed by the Pacifista, and one of the vice admirals, named Red King, orders all smaller vessels to pull back and lead with the battleships, which blast at the Pacifista as he mentions what waste it is to destroy their own weapons. Back with Luffy's group, the former asks Bonnie why she is crying, and she tells him it is because she had been looking for him for so long. Luffy is confused by what she means but changes the topic to asking about her earlier punch. Bonnie asks Luffy to show her how to throw a real punch like he does using Saturn, revealing to him that he harmed Vegapunk. Saturn angrily says that neither of them have a right to live, but Luffy rejects this and prepares to attack. Saturn hits back first, but Luffy endures and unleashes his Gomu Gomu no Dawn Gatling, blasting Saturn through a building. Frankie tells Bonnie to start moving and Bonnie tells Vegapunk that they need to leave now. Dr. Vegapunk, however, tells her that she needs to leave without him because he knows in his condition he will die if he moves. Kizaru returns and prepares to blast them away, but Sanji deflects his laser attack with his kick. Frankie is flabbergasted that Sanji could do such a thing, which he says is thanks to the power of love, prompting an equally just as surprised response from Kizaru. Everyone starts heading for the northeast while Luffy and Sanji stay to handle the Admiral, who says that after this debacle, he should at least return with their severed heads. As for Saturn, he is confronted by Van Augur and Katarina Devon, the latter of which says how unusual it is for one of the 5 elders to be on the surface. She touches his leg and declares their mission is complete while Saturn asks what they are doing on Egghead, also saying he finds it bizarre that someone from level 6 would be subordinate to another. Devon's response is that she considers Blackbeard to be special, which Saturn agrees with, along with his lineage, which surprises Devon that he knows. Saturn then asks what the Blackbeard pirates want out of all of this ruckus they keep making, and Augur simply says they want the world. Saturn tries to attack the two, but Augur warps both of them away with his powers, though they do not get that far as they are still on the island. Nevertheless, the two start leaving but are approached by Caribou, who tells them that he idolizes Blackbeard and set out to sea because of him. As such, he begs them to let him meet him and join his crew. Augur holds Caribou at gunpoint as the latter begs on his knees to be spared. Augur tells Caribou that he does not trust him because lots of people are after Blackbeard's life right now, but he insists his intentions are pure. He even tells the two that if they kill him here and now, there will be severe consequences, and when Augur inquires about them, Caribou tells him that he has information he would be willing to share with Blackbeard, that being the identity of Poseidon and the location of Pluton. Even then, he insists he can be useful to Blackbeard, leaving Augur and Devon to ponder. The sudden appearance of the two giants surprises Bonnie, Frankie, and Atlas. Dory and Brogy ask who they all are. They do not recognize Frankie despite familiarizing themselves with the new members' wanted posters, and that they came to get the crew. Frankie asks if they are enemies aiming for Luffy's life, but the two giants clarify they are his friends and offer to help however they can. Bonnie asks them to help Luffy, Sanji, and Dr. Vegapunk and Dory and Brogy immediately head off in that direction, leaving the 3 to the other giants. The other vice admirals note that Tosa's line was cut off, so one of them, Pomsky, decides to head to land. Bluegrass tells Doll to get on one of the sea beast weapons she is currently controlling so they can attack from sea, and she asks Doll if she has ever fought a giant before. Doll replies that she had a commanding officer who was a giant, and which turns out to have been Jaguar D. Saul. As for Luffy's group, Sanji asks Vegapunk how they are supposed to save him if they cannot move him. Doctor. Vegapunk responds that while he did want to escape, there are things on this island he still wishes to protect, so he feels he cannot leave yet. In addition, he reveals he wanted the secret of Bonnie's command override to remain one until she became a little bit older, and now she will be hunted for the rest of her life, so he asks the Straw Hats to look after her. Sanji, however, ignores Dr. Vegapunk and focuses on how Saturn has returned and transformed into his beast form. Seeing his legs covered in venom, Sanji tells Luffy to dodge them, which he easily does. At the same time, Luffy tells Sanji to get Dr. Vegapunk out of here, no matter how much he complains. Sure enough, Dr. Vegapunk demands to be put down, but Sanji ignores him, but Kizaru kicks him away and stabs Dr. Vegapunk with his light sword. Sanji immediately recovers and picks him up again, with Luffy telling him to get to the back entrance. Kizaru tries once again to intercept him, but Luffy grows to giant size and grabs Kizaru in his right hand and grips Saturn's face with his left. He tells the two of them that they aren't getting away from him as Luffy's grip causes Kizaru to draw blood. Sanji demands Vegapunk not die on him and wonders why he is smiling all of a sudden. Back in the lab, a message from Vegapunk starts playing, where he announces to the entire world that he is going to tell them the truth about it. In the video, Shaka asks Dr. Vegapunk if sending out this message to the world is a good idea, his reason being that the people of the world may not be ready to receive and relay it. Vegapunk, however, tells him that as soon as information agencies get news, they will spread it across the world by the next day. Shaka asks what he will do if someone tries to censor the message, and Dr. Vegapunk acknowledges he had not thought of that, so he asks Shaka for ideas. The idea he comes up with is piggybacking off the Marines' comms traffic. That way they can force a constant worldwide broadcast with the strongest signal. And sure enough, that is exactly what starts happening, as the Marines in the present try desperately to cut the connection but fail. Dr. Vegapunk then says that everyone that has a Den Den Mushi will be able to listen, but it may take a while for them to be prepared, and the time intervals will differ from place to place. At first, Vegapunk suggests they give everyone an hour, but Shaka warns that may give people who are not happy with the news being released time to cut the message. Dr. Vegapunk once again acknowledges this and changes the time to 10 minutes. In Mary Geowise, the other elders communicate with Saturn telepathically, and they ask if he has dealt with Vegapunk. Saturn reports that he saw Kizaru deliver what he believes is a fatal blow, so he thinks he should be dead. Warcury surmises the message currently being broadcasted is a dead man's switch, set to go off in the event the main body dies. Jupiter says they have no idea what he will say, but if they pinpoint the source of the broadcast, they can stop it. The four realize the source is likely located in the lava phase that is currently protected by the Frontier Dome. Many places around the world react to Vegapunk's message while he and his satellites decide to get some coffee. Places including Dressrosa, Fuchsia Village, Water 7, and the World Economic Newspaper, with all of the Straw Hats allies listening in. Even the Revolutionary Army is watching, with Dragon thinking back to when Shaka told him he will die soon. As for Luffy, he manages to dodge a combined assault from an I-beam ambush from Kizaru and a lethal attack from one of Saturn's legs. He acknowledges that his punches did not affect Saturn, so he stretches his arms back and slams both him and Kizaru together, a move he calls Gomu Gomu no Dawn symbol. As a result, both are completely flattened, and Luffy starts twirling the two around like pizza dough and sends them flying towards the ocean, and while Kizaru crashes into a ship, Saturn turns around and moves full speed at Luffy with his legs, much to the latter's shock and frustration. Luffy dodges Saturn's attack as the Marines check in on the extremely weakened Kizaru, while the other elders tell Saturn that they cannot allow Dr. Vegapunk to speak freely. As such, Saturn performs the magic circle summoning he used to reach the island, bringing the other four to Egghead in blasts of black lightning, with Luffy and Sanji watching in complete shock. The five elders' arrival is noticed by everyone on the island as the battle rages on. In the video, Dr. Vegapunk finishes preparing coffee using one of his new inventions, though it only took about 3 minutes, so there are 7 minutes left until the broadcast officially begins. Dr. Vegapunk even says that if anyone tried to silence his broadcast, that amount of extra time will not be enough to stop it. The elders appear before Luffy as their names and forms are revealed. J. Garcia Saturn is a Juki Marcus Mars, an Itsumade Topman Warcury, a Fengji Ethan Baron V, Nushjuro, a Bakatsu and Shepherd Jupiter, a sandworm. Immediately, Nushjuro sees the pacifista attacking the Marines and changes into his hybrid form, where he gallops at breakneck speed, slashing the cyborgs. Because he moved so fast, the Marines under attack did not see him at all, though reports of a large horse running around and taking down the pacifista were all over the Marines' radios. To the Marines' surprise, the pacifista have not been cut, but partially frozen, thereby rendering them immobile. Soon, half of the pacifista are incapacitated, which the Marines celebrate over because now they can resume their hunt for Bonnie. Mars takes to the sky and starts attacking the Frontier Dome while Sanji tries desperately to get in contact with his crew so he can tell them to escape ASAP. Once he does so, Usopp informs him that they understand they need to escape, but Zoro is still fighting Lucci. Thankfully, they have reunited with Brook and Lilith on board the Thousand Sunny, which Usopp stopped using Midori Boshi take Jav Rin. Meanwhile, Saturn, Warcury, and Jupiter start fighting Luffy, with Jupiter diving under the ground. Jinbe is still trying to reach Zoro and says he will drag him back by force if necessary. Speaking of, Zoro gets one of his swords knocked out of his hand by Lucci, who tries to tempt him to abandon the fight by investigating the powerful haki that popped up when the 5 elders arrived. Jinbe finally reaches Zoro's location where he tells Sanji that he is still fighting. This prompts Sanji to call Zoro a burden for taking his time fighting, and when Zoro overhears Sanji's words, he decides to finish the fight using a move called 3-sword-style Koba Madaragari, finally taking down Lucci. As for Luffy, Jupiter appears from underneath him and swallows him whole. However, Dory and Brogy finally arrive on the scene and decapitate Jupiter, freeing Luffy. Luffy is surprised to see the giants again as they tell him they got tired of waiting for him to show up in Elbaf, so they decided to come pick him up instead. Mars breaks through the Frontier Dome and spots Jinbe from afar, who is horrified by the power of Mars. Jinbe flies towards Zoro, demanding they leave now that the fight is over, but Zoro tells him that Lucci is still standing despite his injuries, unwilling to lose consciousness. Sanji asks Jinbe if he has Zoro in tow now, and Jinbe immediately grabs Zoro, telling him he has already won. He then uses Gozen Megawara Shuto to create a dust cloud in front of Lucci, allowing both of them to flee. Lucci transforms back into his human form and falls to his knees as Mars approaches him, asking for where York is being kept. Though shocked by the presence of one of the 5 elders, Lucci tells Mars that York is still tied up in the control room on the 4th floor of Building A. He reports that Jinbe and Zoro were the ones who just fled the area, and there are 5 other members of the Straw Hat Pirates on the lava phase, in addition to of Vegapunk's satellites. He also informs Mars that they plan to escape from the back entrance of the lava phase, and that there are 85 Cypher Pole agents still being held captive in the basement, along with the 4 Seraphim. Finally, Lucci tells Mars that there are only 6 minutes left until Vegapunk's broadcast begins. Mars thanks Lucci for the information, but just as he starts heading for the lab, Lucci tells Mars that Kaku is still in the control room recovering and desperately asks him to spare him. Mars, however, tells him it may not be possible because he cannot single out a single insect when annihilating tons of them. Down on the Fabrio phase, Luffy reminisces how long it had been since he had last seen the co-captains of the giant warrior pirates. The 2 giants tell Luffy they hardly recognized him and that in Elbaf there are tales told about Nika told in legend, so they were curious as to how Luffy learned about him to dress like him. Luffy, once again, however, does not understand what they are talking about, but decides it can wait. Warcury and Saturn are surprised by the giants' arrival as Luffy tells the 2 of them that they need to escape, not fight. Dory tells Luffy that he is aware of their goal because Sanji told the 2 of them to rendezvous with him on the other end of the island. They also tell Luffy that they came to save him when they saw they were surrounded in the news. Dory pulls out a horn and sounds a call, alerting the giants that their captains had found Luffy, which meant it was time to pull out. Warcury refuses to allow this and unleashes a roar of Hashoku Haki, which is powerful enough to completely strip off Luffy's eyes, hat, shoes, cuffs, and even his scar. The giants try supporting Luffy as Warcury's haki is felt all over the island and the Marines out at sea, with some of them fainting from the intensity. Luffy recollects himself as he tells the giants who they are dealing with. Just then, Warcury jumps high into the air and tries to attack with 2 of his tusks turning into blades. Dory and Brogy use their shields to block Warcury's attack, a move they call Svalin's Sun Shield. Warcury asks why the 2 giants are helping Luffy and if they are even aware of who he is, but they simply say he is their friend and repel Warcury using Skilja Split. Saturn tells the 2 that if they choose to side with Luffy, then they will be erased from history alongside him as he fires venom volleys at them. Luffy grabs a tree out of the ground and chips away at it using his teeth, turning it into a baseball bat. He then paints it, labeling the number 56 on it. In addition, puts on a baseball helmet also labeled 56, and knocks the venom volleys back at the 2 elders, which to his surprise, creates an explosion. Dory is told by one of his subordinates that the flames will block off the forest, meaning they can go now. Luffy, however, tells the 2 that Saturn, Warcury, and Jupiter cannot die, and sure enough, the 3 start regenerating from their injuries. Still, the 3 start running away, Dory wondering if the 3 are immortal or something, and Brogy adding that he has never heard of an ability or a type of race that allows that kind of power. Regardless, they consider this a victory for them despite running. Nami contacts Jinbe and Zoro and demands they hurry, and Jinbe decides it will be faster to run normally. Bonnie's group, on the other hand, do reach the ship, but are confronted by Vice Admirals Red King, Guillotine, and Pomsky. Mars breaks into the control room and asks York where the room displayed on the monitor is, but York does not recognize him and demands to be left alone. As for Kizaru, the Marines surrounding him try to treat him, but despite saying his wounds run deep, he asks to be left alone and rest. The Marines, however, then take note of what appears to be something larger than a giant appearing on the northwest shore, with the flames not even stopping it. It turns out to be the Iron Giant, who mutters an apology to Joy Boy. The Marines report that all of the pacifista attacking them have now been incapacitated, so they can continue their assault, hoping they can prevent Luffy and Bonnie from escaping. Nushiro is livid that Dr. Vegapunk would give a mere 12-year-old control over a weapon that can destroy entire nations, calling his choice of defiance as foolish as it is insolent. Oimo and Kashi say they should get back to the ship now that the 5 elders have arrived, but the Marines decide to sink the giant's ship so they cannot escape either, and start reorienting themselves to the northeast shore. With Bonnie's group, Frankie defeats Red King, while Bonnie, having entrusted Kuma's safety to one of the giants, uses her powers on Pomsky, turning him into a child before kicking him away, which Guillotine thought was just horrible. On the lava phase, Mars has freed York, and she takes him to the room where the video was being filmed, and Mars immediately fires a beam to destroy the room. The broadcast, however, does not stop, and York tells Mars if she had been the Stella, she would have hidden the transmission Den Den Mushi somewhere tricky to find. Mars suggests he destroy the entire lab, but York warns him not to because the second floor of Building B is for weapons development, and the first floor holds the power station. In addition, the third floor of Building C contains a number of high-pressure cylinders, so if Mars destroys any of those buildings, all of Punk Records would be destroyed. Mars demands York come up with the solution, and she agrees to help, as she does not want to jeopardize her relationship with the elders any more than it already is. Mars then senses the voice of something small above within Punk Records itself, which York surmises is where the Den Den Mushi is hidden. She also describes the shape of it so Mars can find it more easily, and he heads for the entrance. After Mars flies away, Stussy breathes a sigh of relief that Mars did not notice them, a sentiment Kaku shares. Stussy deduces it was one of the 5 elders they saw, and Kaku admits he found Mars's transformation repulsive. He then asks why she is still here, believing the Straw Hats, Vegapunk, have both chosen to abandon her, which he finds rather humorous regarding her betrayal of CP0 earlier. Stussy, however, reveals she stayed of her own volition in order to carry out the final mission. Nami asks Edison if they are seriously going to leave Stussy behind, and he says they have no choice because the Frontier Dome needs to go down the instant the Thousand Sunny attempts to flee, so Stussy chose to stay behind and deactivate it from the command tower. As such, the only thing they can do for her now is escape alive, which Nami accepts. Robin asks how they can cover the distance needed to avoid crashing without the Vegaforce 01 carrying them, and Edison admits he is confused too. Usopp yells that he finished loading up the Cootie burst and they can take off once Zoro and Jinbe arrive, and if they do not make it, they will have to improvise and use everyone's powers to ensure a successful escape, prompting Edison to call the crew rowdy. Edison then tells everyone he has always loved the theory that miracles happen because guts triumphs over everything, and as such, he decides to test for himself if they can make the jump by flying through the Frontier Dome, much to Nami's shock. Elsewhere, Jupiter has fully reformed and starts sucking in everything in a massive vortex, which keeps the giants and Luffy from moving forward. Luffy rips off a building and shoves it into Jupiter's mouth to stop him, which works. Though they can start moving again, Luffy's Gear 5 finally wears off and he reverts to an old man due to using up all of the energy he got from the food earlier. Hearing that, Brogy offers Luffy some of their emergency food called Hakarl, and though it smelled bad, Luffy ate all of it and regained his vigor. Warkari then starts charging for them, but Luffy uses Gomu Gomu no Red Rock to punch him in the head. Unfortunately, Warkari's head ended up being tougher than Luffy thought, and he recoils in pain. At the back entrance of the lava phase, Saturn climbs up the island cloud and confronts Usopp, Nami, and Chopper, while Nushiro reaches Bonnie's group, taking down one giant before confronting her, Frankie, and Atlas. As for Mars, he finds the Den Den Mushi, with only 1 minute left until the broadcast begins. Just as he muses that Vegapunk's luck finally ran out, his attention turned to something gurgling above him, and he looked up with a serious expression. 30 seconds remain until the broadcast officially begins, and Mars sees that the source of the gurgling sound he heard earlier was Vegapunk's disconnected brain, which Mars wonders if it is the scientist's true form. Regardless, Mars walks over to the broadcast Den Den Mushi and steps on it to break it. To his shock and rage, though, he sees it was just an ordinary Den Den Mushi in disguise, meaning he was completely fooled into following a decoy, and the broadcast continues. Mars transforms into his Itsu-made form and flies out of Punk Records, cursing Vegapunk as the scientist finally begins his broadcast, with several people all over the world, including Kaya and her friends at Syrup Village, the citizens of Karakuri Island, the people of Torino Kingdom, and even the pirates of Hachinosu tuning in. The other elders ask Mars what he is doing, and he tells them about the decoy, and now there is no way for them to currently stop the broadcast. He does say that they have no idea how much Vegapunk actually knows or what he plans on saying, but York told him he wants to carry the torch of the Oharan scholars. In other words, he plans on finishing what Ohara started 22 years ago. Back with Sanji, he hears Bonnie crying for help, and he arrives at the coastline where he sees Nushiro confront her and Frankie, telling the former they will not let her have the pacifista. Frankie prepares to defend Bonnie from Nushiro's sword, but Sanji makes the heroic save himself, uppercutting Nushiro with his foot. In response, the elder turns into his full Bakatsu form and bites down on Sanji, causing him to let go of Vegapunk's body. Oimo and Kishi arrive on the scene and restrain Nushiro, forcing him to let go of Sanji. Atlas grabs the Stella while Bonnie uses Distorted Future to turn herself into a giant, intending to crush Nushiro with her foot. All the while, Vegapunk says in his message that he has committed 2 grave sins, and he will soon be executed for them, so he programmed the message to start playing when his heartbeat stops. His words shock the world as everyone starts fearing that Vegapunk is dead now, but he continues saying he does not want the people to assume the one who killed him is evil regardless of who they may be, and that he is in no position to judge right from wrong in this instance. As for the Straw Hat crew on the lava phase, Saturn finally climbs all the way up and demands the pirates to stand aside so he can handle Vegapunk's message. He does spot Robin and calls her the one Akanu let slip through his fingers. In turn, Robin recognizes his voice as one of the 5 elders from that day. Saturn immediately starts attacking as Nami grabs Robin and pushes her out of the way, while Zeus, Chopper, Usopp, and Brook do their best to resist him. Growing frustrated, Mars decides it will be easier to completely destroy the lab because he cannot single out the origin of the broadcast, and York is struggling to figure out where the Stella would have put it herself. Saturn and Warcury, however, tell Mars that if he does, not only will they lose their military might, they will lose their ability to recreate the Mother Flame. As for Vegapunk's message, he says that what he is about to say will be hard to believe and many may consider him crazy, but he feels he owes it to the people to let them know, and with that, he tells everyone that the world will soon sink into the Blue Sea. The Marines are shocked by Vegapunk's claim that the world will sink into the Blue Sea, but there are others across the world who do not believe him, like the people in Mock Town on Jaya. The people of Water 7 are skeptical that a few rising tides signifies that the entire world is bound to sink. In Impel Down, meanwhile, Doflamingo is laughing at Vegapunk's claims, and he mockingly asks Magellan what he will do when the prison gets completely flooded, since it is his job to protect the inmates. Magellan admits the rising tides have caused havoc in the cells, and that was only just 1 meter. Doflamingo says that most urban areas would be in danger if the sea level rose another 5 meters, and perhaps they should all evacuate to somewhere higher up. Down in Ryu Kingdom, Shirahoshi asks her father if the scientist's words are true, but Neptune says it sounds too outlandish. As for the Marines outside of Egghead, several Marines fear that Vegapunk's words will incite mass panic and chaos, regardless if it is true. The 5 elders in York, meanwhile, have become desperate and decide to just annihilate every living thing on the island. In the broadcast, Vegapunk says that according to his sensor data, he predicts a few days from now as he records this message, there will be a massive earthquake, which several people, such as Charlotte Smoothie, figure is the earthquake they just felt today. Vegapunk continues saying that following this earthquake, the sea level around the world will rise by 1 meter, which will render a number of islands uninhabitable and submerge several beaches. He says that if this does not happen, then everyone can ignore his next words, but if it does, he implores everyone to listen to him. The people are left speechless by Vegapunk's prediction as he claims it was not a natural phenomenon. As he continues to speak, Saturn furiously continues his attack on the Straw Hat pirates, demanding Vegapunk stop. Ultimately, Saturn decides to ignore the crew and head straight for the power station containing the Mother Flame, which is revealed to be a small flame within a large tank. Once there, Saturn changes back to his human form and starts smashing things with his staff. As he does so, Vegapunk tells the world that his first sin was due to him naively desiring to bring peace and prosperity to the world, and in his search to bring the world to a bigger and brighter future, he fears he flew too close to the sun. The Marines continue to attack the Iron Giant, but nothing affects it. Dory, Brogy, and Luffy, who transformed into his Gear 5th form once again, continue to flee, but the fire has spread across the island and Warcury is still charging after them. Vegapunk continues saying in order to explain this sin he committed, He needs to explain what happened between 900 and 800 years ago, the Void Century. Aimu and the world nobles watch, with the latter demanding the Marines silence Vegapunk, while some become curious about his words. Vegapunk says that while most of that period's history is erased, the poneglyphs hold the key to understanding the truth. Elsewhere, Jaguar D, Saul, who is relaxing somewhere, starts laughing. Vegapunk says that the world government outlawed deciphering the poneglyphs, but he himself researched them, which is the second grave sin he committed. Thanks to the documents left behind by the people of Ohara, he was able to decipher a number of the stones, and he does not regret one bit of it. As for the Straw Hat crew, the clouds start stretching, and they realize that Edison has increased the edge of the clouds to allow the Thousand Sunny to leap right into the ocean. Edison, meanwhile, prays that the Straw Hats not let the Marines catch them after everything. Luffy, meanwhile, is still trying to fight Warcury despite Brogy telling him to stop because nothing he does affects him. Luffy confidently believes his next attack will hurt him, but when he punches Warcury again, he recoils in pain. Vegapunk says that he only knows a little bit of what happened in the Void Century, so he will just tell everyone what he knows. What he learned was that during that period of time, there was a man who was born in a highly advanced kingdom, and he possessed a rubbery body akin to the sun god Nika, who was worshipped by the giants. This man's name was Joy Boy, and he was the first man to set out at sea, the world's first pirate. In the Flower Capital, the people of Wano are listening to Dr. Vegapunk's message, having found a Denden Mushi among Orochi's possessions. Momonosuke is surprised to learn that Joy Boy was a pirate just like Luffy, and Kin Iman asks him if he knows what the scientist is talking about. Elsewhere, at the G4 Marine base, the fake Straw Hat crew, now impersonating the Kid pirates, who are imprisoned, are talking about how Kid could easily take Joy Boy considering that he is dead now. Dr. Vegapunk's message continues, as he reveals he only deciphered a handful of poneglyphs, but from them he was able to ascertain that they tell the history of a great war in the ancient past. During that time, Joy Boy fought against the founders of the world government, which back then were simply known as the Allied Powers made up of 20 separate kingdoms. As he speaks, Mars starts using his Supreme King Haki to incapacitate the various Denden Mushi inside the lab to stop the broadcast, but it continues to play. Dr. Vegapunk says that the alliance these kingdoms formed was the only way they could oppose Joy Boy and the faction to which he belonged. However, he does not know why this conflict happened, nor does he side with either of the combatants, but what he does know was that the war was a clash of two different ideologies. He then brings back up the kingdom Joy Boy lived in and how advanced it was, saying that the weapons it created during that conflict are beyond his ability to replicate, which is where the problem lay. Within the Laba phase, Edison contacts Stussy and tells her to lower the Frontier Dome's barrier and escape. She refuses because she still needs to help the Straw Hats escape, but Edison tells her it is useless against the Five Elders, and in any case, they have done all they can for the crew. Speaking of, Jinbe is still heading for the ship carrying Zoro, the former apologizing to Nami for taking so long. She informs them to hurry up because the Marines' ships are starting to blockade the northeast coast. Stussy is relieved to hear they have a chance to make it out as Edison demands she flee, but Stussy tells Edison now that the Stella is dead. She feels she has no purpose anymore. At the coast, Nushiro breaks free of the giant's grip and tries to cut down the giant Bonnie, but Frankie gets her out of the way of his slash attack that cuts off the ship's helm, just as Bonnie changes back to normal. Dr. Daorishin. Vegapunk continues saying that Joy Boy's defeat marked the end of the Void Century as Nushiro jumps high into the air and unleashes a powerful slash attack that cuts the Laba phase in half, causing all of the captive Cypher Pole agents and Seraphim to fall down, which the Marines see and try to rescue. Dr. Vegapunk then says that the world never recovered from the aftermath of the war. Dr. Vegapunk acknowledges how difficult it is to travel from place to place in the world because the sea is treacherous, and it compels people to choose to live and die at their place of birth rather than explore new cultures. However, he states that it was not like that 1,000 years ago, a cataclysmic ecological disaster occurred during the Void Century that sank the ancient world into the ocean, and the islands people live on are nothing more than fragments of those landmasses. Several people around the world do not believe Dr. Vegapunk's story, though some do consider it to be serious. Of course, Dr. Vegapunk admits it is tough to rely on his word alone, but he thinks this change in the world is what caused the Void Century, as within that time frame, the sea level rose by 200 meters. However, the big question regarding how such flooding occurred still remains. Dr. Vegapunk knows that the people's first guess is that it was a natural disaster, but in all his research he found nothing indicating that. Rather, he believes it was a man-made occurrence, and his suspicions were confirmed following the earthquake from a few days ago. Dr. Vegapunk declares that the disaster that caused the flooding was from the ancient weapons, and it still exists to this day, just waiting for its next usage, as if to say the Great War from centuries past is still ongoing. The people of the world are shocked by Dr. Vegapunk's statement that there are world-sinking weapons out in the world somewhere, and even more shocked by his claim that the war from centuries ago is still ongoing and in secret, despite everyone from that time period supposed to be dead by now. Dr. Vegapunk switches topics to apologize for something else he feels responsible for. Dr. Vegapunk states that his goal was to create an energy source that could help humanity advance, and though it remains unfinished, he was proud to admit he created such a source in the Mother Flame, and that one day its power will be harnessed in a way for the entire world to benefit. However, he reveals a fragment was stolen, which is what he is taking responsibility for. As for Stussy, she is still conversing with Edison as they comment on Nosturo's attack on the lava phase. Suspecting one of the 5 elders is on their way now, Edison pleads with Stussy to escape. She asks, however, if it is okay she releases Kaku, as she does not want him to suffer the consequences of this event, though she promises she will stop him from pursuing the Straw Hat Pirates, despite not suspecting his priorities would be leaning towards this. Edison accepts Stussy's wishes and apologizes for making her turn on Cypher Pole, as she had come to see them as friends. However, he tells her that her inner turmoil is proof that she is a human being, and he wishes her to find a way to keep living, which Stussy tearfully acknowledges. Dr. Vegapunk tells the world that 2 weeks after the fragment of the Mother Flame was stolen, there was a glow in the sky above Luzia Kingdom, and later he got news that the entire nation disappeared with the reading of the worldwide earthquake, following afterwards. This allowed him to conclude the Mother Flame was used to power an ancient weapon, and though he does not know who or why it was done, he still sees himself as an accessory to this act of genocide. The world is shocked by the revelation that Leluzia was destroyed, and some tell Dr. Vegapunk it was not his fault, but he says this proves his theory that the world flood from centuries ago was man-made. He then reveals that Joy Boy wanted to pass these weapons down to the next generation, which he finds crazy because of their destructive power, and cites it as the reason why he cannot side with either of the combatants of the war. However, he declares the day all the answers will come clear is nearing, and that his words should be taken as a warning. Dr. Vegapunk then tells the world that while the Void Century is a mystery to others, there are some who know what happened, and it is none other than the Roger Pirates. Elsewhere, York is completely confused as to how Dr. Vegapunk knew she stole the Mother Flame since she cut off her memory synchronization with him. In addition, she knew his surprise at her treachery was genuine because he is a terrible liar and actor, so she has no idea when he got these readings or learned that Lelouchia was destroyed, ultimately concluding he had to have known all along, or else he would not be broadcasting this message. York then realizes where the broadcast Den Mushi is and informs the 5 elders that it is being guarded by the Iron Giant in the Fabrio phase. Dr. Vegapunk's message continues as he asks why the Roger Pirates did nothing to pass down the knowledge of the past after learning it. As he says that, Rayleigh is seen drunk at Shaki's bar as he calls himself and Dr. Vegapunk old men who should not be talking about stuff like this, as it takes the thrill away from the young people. The pirates on Hachinosu began thinking that there is treasure on the seafloor of the entire world, but some point out that not all of the cities of the past were like Shandora, and the ocean floor is 200 meters below sea level, so getting there is almost impossible, at least without a ship that can dive below that level. Elsewhere, Mont Blanc Cricket, who was listening to Dr. Vegapunk's message, decides to go diving again to see if there is treasure beneath the waters from the old world. At the Marines GS Hospital, the members of SWORD are recovering from their battle at Hachinosu and listening to Dr. Vegapunk's message. X-Drake has returned and is recovering as well, but he wants to be alone, and Smoker contacts Tashigi. Asking where she is right now, she tells him she is at the GS Hospital. Dr. Vegapunk says that if he says anything more, then it would be just speculation rather than concrete fact, but several people want to know what Roger left behind. On Egghead, the Straw Hats see the Frontier Dome's barrier lowering and the clouds have stopped stretching, but Usopp says they have more than enough distance to reach the water. Brook reports that the cola barrels are all loaded, so they can use coup de burst whenever they want. Nami contacts Jinbe and asks if he is almost at the ship, and he reports he is, but he is also chasing Noosjuro. Nami at first thinks he is taking a detour, but Jinbe corrects her saying Noosjuro is heading straight for the ship. As Noosjuro is about to attack the ship, Jinbe uses Kataguruma to throw Zoro at Noosjuro, where he then uses 2 sword-style Restful Paradise Rashomon to intercept Noosjuro. While their blades clash, both recognize the opposing Katetsu before the two repel each other. Zoro tells the others to take off and that the 2 of them will jump on. Down on the northeast coast of the island, Bonnie is calling for Luffy while the Marines have surrounded the giant's ship. Luffy yells very loudly that he is almost there and for them to get the ship moving. They start doing so and mow down the ships in their way, but Bluegrass uses one of the sea beast weapons she is riding to blow a hole through the ship, before Doll knocks out Kashi with a move called Rock and Roll Blaster, the assault strengthening the morale of the Marines. Luffy, who is back to normal again, notices that Warkari has stopped chasing the 3 of them, which the giants are relieved to hear. It turns out he did so to meet up with Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter to engage the Iron Giant. As they do, Dr. Vegapunk announces he has one more thing to say as the elders recognize the robot as the same one that attacked Mary Geowise 200 years ago. Dr. Vegapunk addresses several people who have the name D, but before he can say something to them, Workery tackles the Iron Giant, knocking it down while at the same time jamming the signal and ending the broadcast. York falls to her knees, relieved that the message has finally stopped. The Iron Giant falls into the sea as a part of Dr. Vegapunk's message manages to cut through before going out again. As it sinks, the Iron Giant asks where Joy Boy went because it could sense he was there and it desperately really wanted to see him. As for the people over the world, they have all become confused by why the transmission ended before he could finish talking and why Dr. Vegapunk had to die in the first place. Some people correctly believe the world government eliminated him because of the sins he said he committed, but others strongly believe the world government would never do that, instead thinking Luffy had killed him because he was reported in the news to be holding him hostage. Back on Egghead, the 5 elders ask York how many Vegapunks are still functioning, and she tells them that only 2 are left who are synced to Punk Records' Lilith and Atlas. She tells them where the both of them currently are and they move to eliminate them, revealing that even with Dr. Vegapunk dead, Punk Records will continue to grow, and all they need is York. The Giants start setting sail as Dory, Brogy, and Luffy finally arrive at the coast and jump on board. The Marines try to stop them, but Doll, Bluegrass, and the sea beast weapon the latter is riding have all been turned into kids by Bonnie, which she mocks them for. Sanji contacts Nami asking what her status is, and she tells him that they are getting ready to jump off the clouds, but if it looks like they will not reach the water, she will require his assistance, to which he replies he will save her, Robin, and Lilith without hesitation while letting the guys sink, much to Usopp's annoyance. Mars flies over to the ship and breathes fire down on the Giants, which they try to block with their shields. Mars ends up setting part of the ship ablaze, which the Giants try to extinguish. Mars declares he will not let any of them escape as the 2 giant captains prepare to fight him, but Luffy returns to his Gear 5th form after eating some of the Giants' food to replenish his strength. He asks Bonnie to help him, but she hesitates because of how powerful the elders are. However, Luffy tells her that he has faith she can do it with her powers. This causes Bonnie to remember how Luffy told her earlier that Gear 5th is Luffy's form when he is free, and Bonnie uses Distortion Future Itachi Georgia Ichiban Giona Mirai and transforms into her own version of Nika. The other 5 elders sense both of them and prepare to act, while the Iron Giant senses their presence as it continues to sink. Once free, Kaku tells Stussy to go, stating that while they may have been cold-blooded colleagues once, he claims they are not friends, and when Lucci arrives, he will not be able to stop him from killing her for her treachery. Stussy leaves with tears in her eyes, with Kaku fighting back his own. On the coast, the Marines are shocked to see Luffy now looks like his current wanted poster, while the Giants are dancing and singing. Mars calls Bonnie's transformation an imitation of her devil fruit powers, so he is not intimidated. When he fires a blast of energy at the Giants again, Luffy blocks it by making himself larger, even though he still feels pain. He tells his friends that the 5 elders cannot be hurt physically, so they need to knock him far away. He tells them to hit him in his large state as hard as they can, which Sanji and Frankie agree, though Bonnie was more concerned. The Giants move to extinguish the fire as Sanji, Frankie, and Bonnie unleash simultaneous attacks on Luffy's body, which also hurts him because most of them are using haki. Luffy grabs Mars and pulls him into his inflated body, just as the others' attacks hit him, and with their momentum, Luffy blasts Mars off into the sky with a new move called Gomu Gomu no Dawn Balloon. With Mars gone, the Giants resume setting sail, but the crew notice that Usopp's group has not arrived yet, so Atlas decides to check it out, only to be informed that York is monitoring both her and Lilith's positions. Meanwhile, the Iron Giant lands on the ocean floor as Dr. Vegapunk's broadcast resumes, where he continues talking about the meaning of the secret name D. York informs the elders that they only caused a temporary interruption when they attacked the Iron Giant. Therefore, the only way to stop the broadcast permanently is to destroy the broadcast Den Den Mushi within the Iron Giant itself. Luffy and the others notice something falling from the sky, which turns out to be a bunch of rubble mixed with the captive Cypher Pole agents swallowed by Jupiter, which he started firing out of his mouth at the pirates. The Marines start catching the falling agents and Seraphim as Jupiter starts sucking in the Giant's ship. The Giants decide to use the oars while Luffy punches Jupiter to get him to stop. While he is busy fighting, Workery charges forward, jumping off the coast to ram into and destroy the ship. As for Bonnie, she turns back to normal as she ran out of energy to maintain her form. However, before Workery can make contact, the Iron Giant, whose name is revealed to be Emet, emerges from the ocean and punches Workery, breaking one of his tusks. Its return shocks everyone, especially Luffy. 26 years ago on Punk Hazard, Clover met with Dr. Vegapunk, asking him to help study the Void Century alongside him and his colleagues. Dr. Vegapunk refused as he works for the world government now. He also reminds Clover how many times he has been arrested by them, and that the only reason he has lived for so long is so that the world government can follow him to his colleagues and eliminate them all. Clover, however, reveals to Dr. Vegapunk that his older brother had the secret name D, and he was killed for it, with Clover, whose full name is Cleom D. Clover, only able to survive by lying about his association. Because of that, Clover cannot accept a world where people die just because of their name, which is why he is so dedicated to unearthing the truth of the world. Despite hearing that, Dr. Vegapunk once again says he cannot help but promises to keep what Clover told him a secret, while also wishing him the best of luck. Clover declares he'll solve the mystery of the world someday. 4 years later, Dr. Vegapunk is informed of the Buster call that occurred on Ohara, which Caesar Clown was thrilled to hear, believing it will serve as a warning to anyone who dares to study the Void Century. Dr. Vegapunk later visited the ruined island, and with tears in his eyes asks Clover why he did not escape like he always did this time, and why he thought saving his research was more important. In the present, Dr. Vegapunk's message continues as he quotes Clover's words about how the voices of the past will be heard. He also says that history is written by the winners while the losers disappear without a trace, but the echoes of those voices were finally able to be reached to the rest of the world, despite the sacrifices made. Back at the Thousand Sunny, Zoro tells everyone to take off, but Lilith says they cannot with Nushiro on their tail because if he interferes with the ship's takeoff, even by a little bit, the ship will not make it to sea. Suddenly, Atlas flies up to her and knocks her out before cutting off her connection to Punk Records, which makes York think she is dead. Atlas asks the Straw Hats to take care of Lilith while she goes to stop Nushiro. Immediately, she flies straight for him and grabs him, losing her left arm in the process, before flying him away as the ship finally uses Cood to burst, taking off in the sky. Down on the ground, Luffy is stoked to see Emmet moving, while Emmet expresses happiness in seeing Joy Boy again, even though he gets annoyed when Luffy gets confused regarding who he is talking about. Emmet tells Luffy to go on while he holds off the 5 elders, with Warcury and Peter realizing they cannot stop Dr. Vegapunk's message without completely destroying the robot. The Giants ask Luffy if Emmet is on their side, and he tells them he told him yes. To his surprise, no one else heard Emmet speak, and only Luffy heard him speak. Peter makes his move and charges for Emmet, who sticks out his arm preparing to fire something. Unfortunately, it fails to fire and Peter chomps down on his arm while Saturn jumps off his back onto the Giant's ship, much to everyone's shock. Sanji then notices the Thousand Sunny flying through the air and heading downwards as Nushiro asks Atlas if she would seriously sacrifice herself, but she simply says she is performing a service. Atlas then explodes as the crew watched in sorrow, while York jumps for joy over being the only doctor. Vegapunk left. Meanwhile, Emmet remarks how rusty he has become over the centuries and decides to use what Joy Boy told him to save for the right moment. All the while, Dr. Vegapunk says he has run out of time to continue studying the past. Roger, who he says is full name to the confusion of others, along with his Roger Pirates crew members, were able to hear the purest voices of the past. The giant warrior pirates defend against Saturn's onslaught, and Luffy readies another attack but stops when he sees Bonnie has recovered and turned back into her Gear 5 imitation. He instead deflects one of Saturn's legs, aiming for her. When she gets in the air, Luffy tells her to attack him herself. Meanwhile, Dr. Vegapunk tells the world that the day the history of the Void Century will come and reiterates how once again the continents of the world were sunk by the ancient weapons of the past. He also declares that someone is trying to erase the descendants of the rare races, such as the Buccaneers, Lunarians, and Three-Eye Tribe. Bonnie yells to Saturn that she wants to settle the score with him as Luffy continues to block his attacks. With the memories of Saturn's cruelty to both Kuma and Ginny flowing through her mind, Bonnie angrily and tearfully denounces Saturn and the rest of the 5 elders as gods, but she states that gods and heroes do exist, and although she dearly wanted to live with her parents as a family, she is going to honor their wishes to keep on living. Together, Bonnie and Luffy unleash simultaneous attacks on Saturn, which were powerful enough to blast Saturn to pieces and send him falling toward the ocean, with everyone cheering and Kuma smiling. Everyone then notices the Thousand Sunny falling out of the sky. Vegapunk tells the world that the people who have resisted the oppression of the world government for so long are, ironically enough, the ones who are close to figuring out the truth, and that Roger was hoping for this the day he died and announced his treasure was up for grabs. Vegapunk's words rile up people all over the world, with pirates on Hachinosu hoping Blackbeard returns soon so they can go and find it. Meanwhile, the people of Cross Guild come to admire and respect Buggy even more because they assume he was with the rest of the crew when they discovered the true history, unaware he did not go because he was sick that day. Even the Marines wish to find it, only to be reminded the safety of the people comes first. Regardless, Vegapunk admits that the person who finds the One Piece may not be who Joy Boy wanted, but there is no stopping its discovery, for the fate of the world rests in who finds it. Everyone is shocked by Dr. Vegapunk's claim that the fate of the world rests on pirates, while several people become worried their country will sink. Pirates across the world, on the other hand, are stoked to hear that the One Piece is real and want to claim it, while the Marines are outraged by Dr. Vegapunk's words. Kobe thinks back to when Luffy first told him his dream, and that he wants to find the One Piece, with Kobe thinking Luffy would make the entire world bow to him. As such, he declares in the present that he cannot let him achieve his dream. As for Cross Guild, Buggy continues inspiring his men by saying they will make the world ours, while Devon contacts Blackbeard asking what to do with Caribou. Blackbeard says he will hear Caribou out, and if the information he has does not impress him, he will kill him himself. On Egghead, Workery damages Imet again, and this time he destroys the broadcast Den Den Mushi, ending Dr. Vegapunk's message for good. The Straw Hats are still falling through the air with Nushjuro, who has fully recovered, hot on their tails. As for Imet, he apologizes to Joy Boy once again and apologizes to Luffy as well for mistaking him for the former earlier. He hopes Joy Boy will forgive him for failing to make him the king as he asks for Luffy's name. Luffy introduces himself, and after hearing his name, Imet undoes a knot in his body while thanking Luffy for letting him hear the drums of liberation one last time. He declares he will not let him die as a powerful blast of haki is unleashed, knocking out several Marines. The haki ends up being so strong it turns the 5 elders back to their human forms before sending Workery, Nushjuro, and Peter back to the Room of Authority in Mary Jiwai's, where Mars is shown to be as well. Even Amy nearly collapses from the intensity, while cursing Joy Boy's name. The Thousand Sunny finally lands on the water as Saturn, the only elder left, stares at Emmet. The robot thinks back to the past when Joy Boy told him he was going to gather his most powerful haki and seal it inside of him. Joy Boy told Emmet that he knew he would die before him, so when Emmet is in mortal danger or there is someone he wants to save, he must untie the knot and release the haki. Emmet is delighted to hear that even after Joy Boy has passed on, he will still be able to be with him, though he himself hopes he will not be lonely after that time. The haki burst has knocked out every single Marine within the fleet, including the Vice Admirals near Egghead. Seraphim S. Snake, who is still bound inside her seastone bubble, tries in vain to warn a knocked-out Pomsky that the Straw Hat pirates are getting away. The Giants note that the burst was even stronger than Shanks despite the lack of hostility in the haki. Luffy thanks Emmet for helping them escape, though by that point the Iron Giant had powered down again. Dory and Brogy decide to take advantage of the situation and depart for their home of Elbaf. While everyone is resting, though, Sanji walks over to Dr. Vegapunk's body and tells him that everything he said to him earlier does not feel right to him, especially since most of it seemed outrageous. 2 weeks before the current events, Dr. Vegapunk, Shaka, and Pythagoras detected an abnormality from their power plant in that the energy used on the Seraphim had been steadily increased. The data indicated to the 3 of them that a portion of the mother flame had been stolen, and that the manipulated data meant to deceive them indicates one of the satellites was responsible since only they could be so smart to achieve this. Aside from the Stella and the 2 present with them, the other 4 are now under suspicion, though Dr. Vegapunk is heavily leaning towards the culprit being Lilith due to her being designated his evil satellite. Because of this, the 3 decide to switch their brains to stealth mode, so whatever they experience will not be known to the culprit. 1 week later, Pythagoras confirms that the culprit is York because the information she synced with the rest is all fake. In addition, Shaka reports that the Sea Beast weapons were used as well, along with a white Den Den Mushi used for wiretapping. Dr. Vegapunk manages to recover the conversation where they learn York told the world government that he had been studying the Void Century, explaining the surge of Cypher Pole agents who had been visiting the island recently. 6 days later, Dr. Vegapunk learns that Lulusia Kingdom was destroyed. Dr. Vegapunk surmises it was the result of the Mother Flame being stolen by York and given to the world government, which fuels his belief that the world government is in possession of one of the ancient weapons of the past, though he knows he cannot tell this to the public. He does heavily blame himself for this travesty because he isolated his greed from his own mind. Dr. Vegapunk tells the 2 satellites that at this point it is impossible to stop what York has set into motion. The world government will erase them for studying the Void Century but will spare York because she demonstrated her worth to them. Shaka tells him they could still flee, but Dr. Vegapunk instead requests a ship for the other researchers and residents, saying they cannot escape their fate. However, he says that Egghead has resources that Ohara did not have 22 years ago, so if he does die soon, he will do it on his own home, trying to expose the true nature of the world government as best as possible. He apologizes to Shaka and Pythagoras for getting them involved in this, but they state they were thinking the same thing since they are him too. In addition, Dr. Vegapunk wishes to save his Sky Island manufacturing technology, the Cloud Plant, as he thinks it will be humanity's best chance to survive. Sometime later, York spotted Dr. Vegapunk fiddling around with the Iron Giant, claiming he is using the Mother Flame to try and move it. York says she hopes he will finish it soon, but deep down, Dr. Vegapunk wishes it does not. 2 days later, Dr. Vegapunk records the message to the world and hides the broadcast Den Den Mushi within it, believing no one would find it there. He also programs the message to play when he dies, and so no one else finds out what they have done. He erases his memories of the past 2 weeks along with Shaka and Pythagoras. Once that is done, the amnesiac Dr. Vegapunk finds a letter he left for himself beforehand informing him that the world government knows he was studying the Void Century, but he has put together the ultimate countermeasure before he dies. Sometime later, he learns that the Straw Hats and Bonnie, Cypher Pole, the Marines, and Kizaru and Saturn have arrived, catching up to the siege. When Dr. Vegapunk, Atlas, Frankie, and Sanji were on their way to save Bonnie, Dr. Vegapunk informs Sanji that he has chosen to stay on the lower level despite knowing he will die, but he insists that something world-shaking will happen when he does. Finally, he tells Sanji that he hopes the Straw Hats find the One Piece. Speaking of, Usopp and Luffy are extremely excited that they are going to Elbaf after all this time, though Luffy is extremely exhausted. Morgans is ecstatic about Dr. Vegapunk's speech to the world, as it gives him the chance to spread fear and despair through the news which everyone will eat up because he is the only source of information there is. Vivi scolds him for this behavior and points out how Dr. Vegapunk spoke of hope in the future, but Morgans threatens to expose where she is if she does not stop telling him how to do his job. Vivi remains firm in her stance though, prompting Wapol to try and calm her down by reminding her they will not have anywhere else to go if they anger him too much. Still, Morgans admits he does not mind telling everyone that the world is going to sink too, but he personally is not affected since he lives in the air. Once again, Vivi refuses to back down against Morgans as he starts listing off potential headlines: Blackbeard vs. Shanks vs. Kid and Luffy having killed Dr. Vegapunk himself, which Vivi knows is not true. On Egghead, Sakazuki tries to contact someone about the situation, while Sentomaru escapes and heads out to sea on a rowboat. Kizaru picks up the Den Den Mushi and tells Sakazuki that everyone is unconscious, but he promises to give him a full report about the events on the island once everyone is awake. Sakazuki tells Kizaru he hopes he did not do a sloppy job, but Kizaru asks him if he has ever killed a close friend, as Kizaru thinks back to when he first met Dr. Vegapunk, having been sent to arrest him. But Dr. Vegapunk knew it was just a cover to exploit his intellect. He also remembered helping Dr. Vegapunk create Egghead Island. With tears in his eyes, Kizaru angrily tells Sakazuki to come down to Egghead to see for himself whether or not Kizaru messed up, which causes Sakazuki to relent. On the Thousand Sunny, which is tethered to the giant's ship, Jinbe tells Frankie he did not expect Luffy to be so depressed he failed to save the Stella. Frankie admits with everything they encountered on the island, from meeting the 5 elders, to dealing with Kizaru, CP0, the Seraphim, and a whole blockade of battleships, he still cannot believe they were barely able to escape. Zoro, who was also on the ship, cruelly calls Luffy pathetic for getting all mopey over Dr. Vegapunk's death. Speaking of, Lilith wakes up on the giant's ship, surrounded by Usopp, Chopper, Nami, and Sanji. The 4 of them deeply apologize to Lilith for being only able to save her, but she says she has heard the whole story, which confuses everyone. After taking a minute to cry, Lilith says she is hungry, but when she goes to the table, she sees Luffy sadly eating. Upset he could not keep his word to Dr. Vegapunk. Lilith tells everyone that she cried earlier because she was sad about everyone's deaths, but she then tells them they only died by their concept. According to Lilith, the Stella and the other satellites sans York are still alive. Though her words still confuse everyone, she says the main point is that Luffy did somewhat keep his promise, so he should cheer up. Sure enough, Luffy perks up and thanks the giants for coming to their rescue before beginning their proper feast. When the giants ask Luffy who he thinks will become the Pirate King and claim the One Piece, Luffy proudly states it will be him. With that, the ship makes its way to Elbaf, where someone seems to be waiting for Luffy to arrive.